breaking down every ranked fighter in the UFC. The first fight is Rodrigo Nascimento in the heavyweight division. Rodrigo Nascimento kind of shows how easy it is to get ranked in the heavyweight division. I mean, his best win is Dontel Mayers twice, and he's managed to become ranked, taking into account that he has been KO'd by Derek Lewis. I think he's just an easily replaceable fat heavyweight. He's managed to become ranked. Fair play. He's a semi-decent grappler. I think if somebody like Waldo Cortez Acosta or Mick Parkin maybe gets a good win, I think that he's easily replaceable in the rankings is Nascimento. He's just a decent grappler. He had a good main event against Derek Lewis, and to be fair to him, he was kind of winning that Derek Lewis fight because of his grappling until obviously got KO'd. He's just a fat heavyweight. He's managed to get in the rankings. I think Mick Parkin replaces him, while Waldo Cortez Acosta, I don't really know what to say about this guy. He's not going to be, I don't think he's going to be staying in the rankings for a long time. He hasn't really beaten anyone good yet, so that's all I've got to really say about Rodrigo Nascimento. He's decent. He's a decent grappler. He's just not consistent enough, and I don't think he's able to stay in the heavyweight division, but he's a perfect example of how easy it is to get ranked in the heavyweight division. When you've got 2 wins over Dontel Mayers, and you've been KO'd by Derek Lewis, and somehow you can make it into the rankings, that just shows the state of this division. So fair play for Rodrigo Nascimento for getting the main event, but I think he's going to be replaced in the rankings very soon. Marcos Rogerio de Lima. This is Rodrigo Nascimento's second account. No, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, he's decent. He's well-rounded. Again, he's not really beating anyone amazing apart from Waldo Cortez Acosta, which I'll talk about in a second. He beat Junior Tafa, finished him in his last fight, but that was on like a day's notice, and he just destroyed the leg kicks. And he beat an older washed Andrei Arlovski, but he has beaten Waldo Cortez Acosta, which is quite an impressive win considering Cortez Acosta is probably one of the best unranked heavyweights right now. But again, he's not going to make it far. When I think of Marcos Rogerio de Lima, it just brings me back to UFC 291 when he got KO'd by Derek Lewis pretty easily, to be honest. And he's also lost to Blago Ivanov. He lost to Romanov. Again, fairly replaceable in the heavyweight division. I think if he loses another fight and maybe there's another up-and-comer in the heavyweight division, he's getting kicked out. Don't know who he's going to be matched up against. I don't think he ever breaks into the top 10, but he's just another fairly well-rounded guy. I wouldn't call him dangerous. Like I said, he looked pretty decent against Junior Tafa, but that being said, it wasn't, like I said, it was on a day's notice, and Junior Tafa wasn't prepared when Marcos Rogerio de Lima was just destroying those legs. He's just there, and he's just there in the heavyweight division. He gave us a good KO against Derek Lewis when he got knocked out. That's all I've really got to say about Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Alexander Romanov. This guy was Gelton Almeida before Gelton Almeida was in the UFC. I remember when this guy was first joining the UFC, and there was just so many highlights of this guy picking people up, ragdolling them, slamming them, and that's kind of what he got known for. His judo and his wrestling. He did it to Marcin Tybura as well in that first round, but it kind of got exposed pretty quickly, especially in these recent fights, that you've got to have a little bit more than just fat and weight. You've got to just have more than size. You've got to rely less on your size and being a physical grappler if you want to make it in this division. It worked against Blago Ivanov and Marcos Rogerio de Lima, and it's worked against a lot of opponents. But in that, there's just a lot of problems with this guy. He's not really athletic. He's not really got anything to offer on the feet. And most importantly, he has a terrible gas tank. That Marcin Tybura fight, he won that first round against Marcin Tybura because of his grappling. And then he ran out of gas and, lost to Marcin Tybura. When he fought Alexander Volkov, it just took a couple of shots from Volkov, and this guy was completely out of there in the first minute. And then when he fought somebody who was actually athletic and an actual technical grappler in Gelton Almeida, he got finished in the first round. I think if he could clear a few things up here and there, he could definitely, put together a few more wins. I don't think he's going to break into the top 10. Like I said, he's just got too many things going on. His gas tank, his striking, and the fact that he's just not that reliable over the course of 3 rounds. I say 5 rounds. I don't even think he's got the gas tank to make it to 3 rounds, to be honest. I do think he is going to squash another one of these fat heavyweights. Maybe if there's an up-and-coming fat heavyweight that he faces, or if he, gets kicked out the rankings and faces somebody there, I definitely think he's going to deliver a very dominant grappling performance. He was once a really fun grappler. Nowadays, he's not really got anything less to offer. I mean, he can't even make weight in the heavyweight division. You're in the heavyweight division. 265 pounds is all you need to make, and he still can't even make 265 a lot of the time. So, yeah, that's what I got to say about Alexander Romanov. Was once a fun grappler. These days, there's not really much to say about the dude. He's got a lot of problems going on. So, yeah, that's all I got to really say about Alexander Romanov, and I don't think he's ever going to make it into the top 10. I just think he's going to have these fun performances against fat heavyweights, and then other performances are going to get gassed out in the first minute. Then we've got Rosenstrike. This dude, it's kind of hard to see how good Rosenstrike is because He's beaten a lot of kind of mid people, and then he's also lost to a lot of great people. Like, you look at the people he's beaten. He beat a washed Alistair Overeem. He beat a washed Junior Dos Santos. He beat Shamil Gaziev in his second fight in the UFC, which that was actually quite a funny fight, especially when Shamil Gaziev went face first to the canvas. And he beat a washed Andrei Arlovski. So it's not really like he's got any elite wins as of yet. But then you look at the people he's lost to: Ngannou, Gane, Volkov, Almeida, Blades. Those are some of the best heavyweights in the world, or at least were the best heavyweights in the world at the time that he lost to them as well. So it's kind of hard to gauge how good he is, and I think he needs to beat someone in that kind of middle section. He needs to beat either Tatu Ivaza, and I think he is matched up against Tatu Ivaza for UFC 305, and I'd love to see him face Derek Lewis as well for that reason, because he's a dangerous guy, Rosenstrike. He looks exactly like Derek Lewis. He's a very dangerous guy. He's a good boxer. He's just not elite. He's just not an elite striker, and when he does face somebody elite, he's going to lose. But at the same time, he's here to stay. He's here to kick out the fat heavyweights outside the rankings, and I think he is going to stay in the rankings. I think if he does beat Tatu Ivaza as well, which would be a really good win, that's probably going to be his best win yet. I think he will make the top 10 rankings because he's probably going to get put against Derek Lewis if he beats Tuivasa. But that's probably as far as it goes. Maybe he could pick up a win over somebody like Sergey Spivak if he's able to keep the distance. It's hard to gauge with Rosenstrike. I think there's a lot of matchups that he could have in the heavyweight division. I think him versus Marcin Tybura could be good. Him versus Sergey Spivak. Him versus Tatu Ivaza. And most importantly, him versus Derek Lewis. But I don't think he's ever going to make the top 5. I don't think he's ever going to be one of the elite of the heavyweight division. He's just going to be here, collecting a few finishes here and there. Probably going to lose a few more times too. And that's all there is to Rosenstrike. He's a chill guy in the heavyweight division. Not much to say. Then we've got Derek Lewis, one of the most beloved heavyweights. I mean, personality-wise, he's one of the best. He's probably the most powerful guy in the heavyweight division right now, or in the entirety of the UFC. Look at the dude this guy's beaten and lost to. If you're a new UFC fan and you had no idea about the UFC and you just looked at Derek Lewis's resume, you must be so confused. He's got wins over Francis Ngannou, Volkov, Blades, Tybura, Marcus Rogerio de Lima, Nascimento. These are the guys that Derek Lewis has beaten. And then he's also lost to Cormier, Cyril Pavlovich, Almeida, Spivak, Tatu Ivaza. He's just probably one of the most inconsistent fighters in the UFC. And he's impossible to bet on. I feel like with Derek Lewis, we're going to see him lose a handful more times because he's just not that good. He's not got the best grappling. He faces an elite grappler, he's probably going to lose. If he faces an elite striker, he's probably going to lose because he's not really elite anyway. He's got a lot of holes in his game. And overall, he's just not that reliable. But he's got power, and that's all he needs in the heavyweight division to succeed. It's shown him multiple times. The Alexander Volkov fight, he was losing the entire fight, and he just landed one big shot and won. He perfectly timed that takedown from Curtis Blades and knocked him out. That Marcin Tybura fight, he just took one. When it comes to Derek Lewis, the Nascimento fight in his last fight, it just takes one. He's going to get a handful more KOs. He's going to get a handful more losses. He's probably not going to break into the heavyweight rankings. He is the most powerful guy in the UFC, and it's kind of like a 50-50 whenever Derek Lewis fights. He's either going to get completely outclassed and probably finish within 3 rounds, or he's going to land a devastating KO and get another win and take his pants off. So for Derek Lewis, great addition to the heavyweight division. I'm glad that he's just not another one of these stale fat heavyweights. Not really much to say about Derek Lewis, though. One of the funnest heavyweights out there. Definitely the most powerful dude in the UFC. And I just hope he continues on this KO streak. But let's be honest, he's not skilled enough to make that happen. But, man, if we can see Derek Lewis get some more KOs, that's going to be great. Then we've got Tatu Ivaza. I can't believe Tatu Ivaza dropped Cyril Gane and was moments away from being entered into a title fight against John Jones. And now here we are. And he's best when he's Derek Lewis, and he's on a 4-fight losing streak, all of them coming by way of finish. Tatu Ivaza's in need of a win. He is really in need of a win. I mean, at first, when he lost to Gane, got finished by Gane, Pavlovich, and Volkov, it was like, okay, you've been finished in your last 3, but at least they're against the best heavyweights in the world. And then in his last fight, that was kind of painful when he got finished in the first round by Marcin Tybura, who I would not consider elite. And he's best when he's Derek Lewis. He hasn't really beaten anyone good at the moment. I mean, he's Derek Lewis when that was a good KO. But apart from that, he's not really beating anyone good. And I just hope he wins. He's a fun guy. He's a funny guy in the heavyweight division. He's got a lot of personality. He's got one of the best celebrations in the UFC. I love that he's also got insane power and he can just pull it out of nowhere. And he's just one of these fun fat heavyweights. He's not just another one of these stale fat heavyweights that comes here to get a decision win. The dude is going to come to brawl. But that kind of cost him. And to be honest, he's not that bad. He's actually a pretty good striker as well. You look at that fight with Alexander Volkov. He was low-key piecing up Alexander Volkov with those leg kicks. He came to brawl against Sergey Pavlovich, which was obviously that costed him. He almost finished Cyril Gane in that fight at one point, which obviously costed him. He was really fun, but it's got to the point where I kind of want him to win. And he's going to be facing Rosenstrike next, and I hope he is able to get a win over Rosenstrike, because one or two more losses and we might not be seeing Tatu Ivaza in the UFC. I hope he picks up a win. I hope he finally just gets a win against somebody, because I don't want to see this guy get cut from the UFC, and I just want to see this dude go from a KO straight into a shoey. So, Tatu Ivaza, fun heavyweight, hope he gets a win, and I just hope he doesn't get cut from the UFC. Then we get into the top 10, we got Sergey Spivak. Spivak's actually, unironically, probably one of my favourite grapplers in the heavyweight division, because he's in just this generic double leg takedown, tries controlling you on the ground, tries looking for the sub. That's not really the type of grappler that Sergey Spivak is. He's got this quite interesting judo kind of style where he likes getting people in the clinch rather than going for the takedown, and he just likes tripping people, exhausting people. The second you get back up, he's just going to bring you straight back down. When you get back up, he's just going to bring you straight back down. He did it to Tatu Ivaza. He did it to Derek Lewis. That's kind of how his style goes. He just likes dragging people down, bringing you up. He did it to Greg Hardy as well. But at the same time, the second he runs into somebody with decent takedown defense, or he runs into somebody that's got a decent grappling base, he loses. It happened against Marcin Tybura. It happened against Tom Aspinall. It even happened against Cyril Gane. I don't know what's going on in that fight with Cyril Gane, because he had a good chance of beating Cyril Gane, man, because of the grappling. But for some reason, from the walkouts to the way he performed, he looked like he did not want to be there. I don't know if it was the French crowd or the occasion, but he was absolutely shitting himself against Cyril Gane. And he's matched up against Marcin Tybura. I think him versus Tybura at this point is probably 50-50. I would probably lean towards Tybura winning that fight, but for Sergey Spivak, he's a fun grappler, and he definitely deserves to be in the top 10 of the heavyweight division for the people he's beaten. I could have seen him being a Derek Lewis victim, but he was able to get him down. It's kind of 50-50 against Marcin Tybura. I'd like to see how he does against somebody like Rosenstrike or something like that. He's just a fun grappler who... he's not really well-rounded. He's not really got anything to offer on the feet. So for Sergey Spivak, fun grappler. Don't really know what to say about him. He needs to... there's a lot of things he's got to work on. I don't know if that Cyril Gane fight was a big shock to him, but he looked like he was absolutely shitting himself in that fight. Looked like he didn't want to be there. And that could be a problem if he is to get these high-profile fights in the future. Then we have Marcin Tybura. Now, the thing about Marcin Tybura is a lot of people kind of just view him as... He's the best of a bad bunch. He's the best fat heavyweight in the world, is the way I like to look at Tatu Ivaza. Not Tatu Ivaza, Marcin Tybura. And he's kind of locked in these last few years because he put together a streak. He finished to Ivaza in his last fight. He's just really well-rounded, is Marcin Tybura. The problem is, though, he doesn't get these flashy finishes. He's not amazing anywhere. He's not super fast. He's not super powerful. He doesn't get these flashy finishes. He hasn't got this insane personality. So he's kind of easily forgettable in the heavyweight division. But he's kind of been doing a lot of work under a lot of people haven't been looking at the work this guy's been doing. I mean, previous to the Volkov, if you take away the loss to Alexander Volkov and Tom Aspinall, who were two of the best heavyweights in the world, he's been on a massive streak. He finished Sergey Spivak in his last fight in a main event, finished Tatu Ivaza. He beat Romanov as well, Arlovsky, Ivanov. And he's just really well-rounded. I don't really know what to say. I don't think he's ever going to break the top 5. I think he's got a good chance of beating Sergey Spivak. And he's kind of locked in these past few years. I just don't think he's got enough to beat the rest of these heavyweights. I don't think he's quick enough. I don't think he's got good enough wrestling. I don't think he's got a good enough hand. But if he does beat Sergey Spivak, he's probably going to get a big fight from there. If Marcin Tybura beats Sergey Spivak, who knows who he's going to be fighting next? Maybe it could be a Curtis Blades. Maybe it could be a Sergey Pavlovich. And that's going to be a big opportunity for Marcin Tybura. He's good. He's not overly exciting. He's not got this flashy personality as Marcin Tybura. He's just good. And fair play to him for making it this far. I do think he beats Sergey Spivak. And he's just not... I don't really know what to say about him. He's not the most elite guy. He's just pretty good. Then we got Jelton Almeida. Yeah, he's probably the most dominant grappler right now in the heavyweight division, and he got kind of throat-checked against Curtis Blades, and I'm going to be honest, I did kind of celebrate when he lost to Curtis Blades, because he's just not the most interesting heavyweight in the world. It kind of seems like when it comes to Jelton Almeida, he's got this very dominant grappling kind of approach to it. He likes to go for the takedown immediately, he wastes no time, and he's got good submission game, but if he can't find the submission, That's all he kind of has. He's holding people against the cage or controlling people on the ground. He doesn't really tend to use ground and pound a lot. He hasn't really got anything to offer on the feet, and I really do feel like, and listen, he's got a good chance of beating a couple of these heavyweights ranked above him. I think he's got a good chance of beating Volkov. I think he's got a good chance of beating, definitely got a good chance of beating Cyril Gane. I think he's got a good chance of beating Sergey Pavlovich. So it's not like he's completely terrible or anything. And he finished Rosenstrike, he finished Romanov in his last fight. He beat Derek Lewis. He kind of got, he made a mistake against Curtis Blades, but he's going to have a little bit more to offer. He's going to have to progress his striking, because when he faces somebody with good takedown defense, like I said, he's kind of a fish out of water. He doesn't really have anything to offer when he faces somebody with good takedown defense. So he's going to have to develop his striking. He's going to have to learn how to set up takedowns as well, because his takedowns, even though he's a really dominant grappler, he's very, very readable, but I will give him credit. Like I said, he's a dominant grappler. He's super athletic. He's a very technical grappler, super strong as well as Jailton Almeida, so I think he will break into the top 5 eventually. He's got a few things to clear up here and there. He's been calling out Cyril Gane for the longest time. Obviously, Gane's now booked against Volkov, and Cyril Gane would never take that fight against Jailton Almeida. He's way too dangerous. But for Jailton Almeida, good grappler. Hopefully, he can improve his striking and become a little bit more interesting, because if not, no one's ever going to root for him. And I did celebrate when Curtis Blades beat him, but he's probably one of the best grapplers in the division right now, so fair play to Jailton Almeida. Then we got Stipe Miocic. He is the greatest heavyweight of all time, in my opinion. I would say that Stipe Miocic is the greatest heavyweight of all time. Beating Daniel Cormier twice. He's got a win over Francis Ngannou. Beat Overeem when Overeem wasn't washed. Beat Junior Dos Santos when Dos Santos wasn't washed. Beat Verdum when Verdum wasn't washed. Beat Orlovsky. Beat Mark Hunt. Stipe Miocic was able to hold on for a belt for quite a long time, and he kind of dominated his era of the heavyweight division. You look at the heavyweight division, nowadays, most champions can't even hold on to the belt for more than like a defense. It seems like most champions these days get one defense, and they either leave the UFC or they lose the belt. And to be fair, he did lose the belt to Daniel Cormier, but he was able to get the win back over Daniel Cormier. He did suffer the knockout over Francis Ngannou. If we're talking about his current place in the current state of the heavyweight division, I just don't really think he has anything to offer. He's been inactive. He's like 40-odd years old. He's been out for a few years, and his last fight, he got knocked out by Francis Ngannou. He's getting a title shot, and don't get me wrong, I would love to see him beat John Jones, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Jones is going to go out there and beat him, and hopefully after that Jones fight, he does retire. He's got a really good legacy in the heavyweight division. I think it's a beatable legacy, but as of right now, I would say he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. Good boxer, great wrestler. I just think the division's moved on without him, and he's kind of more of one of these old heavyweight, like not old heavyweights as in age. I mean, he is old, but old as in like he's not really part of this new era of heavyweights. I think if you put him against somebody like Curtis Blades, if you put him against Tom Aspinall, you put him against obviously John Jones, Cyril Gane, these are the guys that are probably going to beat Stipe, because he's just not good enough for the current state of the heavyweight division. But listen, with that being said, he is the greatest heavyweight of all time, and I hope he has a fairly safe fight with John Jones and he rides off into the sunset. Then we've got Alexander Volkov. This dude might be one of the most disrespected heavyweights in the world. Now, I have made a separate video on why Volkov is underrated. Leading up to that Sergey Pavlovich fight, and I'm going to be honest, I did pick Pavlovich to win. I'm not going to act like I'm perfect, right? I did pick Pavlovich to win that fight. I'm not going to lie. But looking at people's predictions, people were making it out like Alexander Volkov he's a can, he's washed. People were talking about Alexander Volkov the way you should be talking about Marcin Tybura. He's really underrated. You look at the people he's lost to. He's lost to Aspinall, Blades, and Gane, the three of the best heavyweights in the world right now. And he's overlost to Derek Lewis, a fight in which he was dominating and then got caught in the last minute. So you can't really shame Volkov for that. And look at the guys he's beaten. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, 3 of them coming by way of finish, and one of them being a dominant performance against Sergey Pavlovich, where he made Pavlovich look like his face was falling off. And this might be a crazy take, but honestly, Volkov actually doesn't have that bad of a chance of becoming a champion. If Tom Aspinall loses to Curtis Blades and Volkov beats Cyril Gane, which will by far be his best win yet because he's lost to Cyril Gane before, he's going to get a title shot. I mean, if he is able to beat Cyril Gane, he's going to be getting a title shot in his next fight. And I hope he does perform against Cyril Gane. Do I think he beats him? No. They fought before. Gane was able to beat him. And I think when Volkov does face the top 3 most elite guys in Aspinall, Gane, and Blades, I think he loses to them as he has before. But he's a really good striker. He seems to have locked in these past few fights. He's put together some really good wins. And like I said, if he gets a win over Cyril Gane, we're going to be seeing Volkov get a title shot, which I don't think anyone expected a year ago from now. He's not perfect as a fighter. His ground game could be improved. And he's not the most consistent dude, but He's one of the best heavyweights in the world, one of the most disrespected heavyweights in the world as well. People calling this dude a cancer. So I hope he performs against Cyril Gane. I hope he has a good fight, and he's definitely one of the best heavyweights in the world right now. And his ranking doesn't really show how good he is. He should be ranked above Sergey Pavlovich, but obviously he lost to Curtis Blades, and Pavlovich beat Blades, so they've got to put Pavlovich at number 3. But Volkov's one of the best in the world, and there's no doubting about it. Then we have Curtis Blades. I think Curtis Blades is a nightmare matchup for most people in the heavyweight division. That's the way I see Curtis Blades. I actually think it's a nightmare matchup for Tom Aspinall as well. Kind of just seems like Curtis Blades ships himself when it gets to a big fight. He had a big fight with Derek Lewis. He shot himself and got KO'd. He had a big fight with Sergey Pavlovich. He shot for 1 takedown in that fight. I don't know what his thought process was, and he got KO'd for it. And then he got KO'd twice by Francis Ngannou in high-profile fights. So it seems like every single time Curtis Blades gets into a big fight, he loses. He has the win over Tom Aspinall, but it's an injury, and we're going to see how they do it UFC 3 or 4. I'm so proud and thankful that he was able to beat Gelton Almeida and finally shut down Gelton Almeida, because I did not want to see him succeed. He beat Alexander Volkov, which is a win that has aged really well. He's beaten Overeem, he beat Rosenstrike, he beat Dos Santos. He's just a really good fighter as Curtis Blades. He's probably the best pure wrestler in the division. He's got a really good double leg takedown. He's really good at controlling people. I would say he's probably the best pure wrestler in this division. And he's also very powerful on the feet. He's shown multiple times in that fight with Chris Daukaus and his last fight with Gelton Almeida. He's very, very powerful. And that's why I think he poses a big threat to Tom Aspinall, because of the wrestling threat that he has and the fact that he's dangerous everywhere. He's got good ground and pound. He's got good controlling with his wrestling, and he's a very powerful guy, is Curtis Blades. I'd say he's got a pretty decent chance of beating Tom Aspinall, and he is definitely one of the best heavyweights in the world, and that is shown by the people he's beaten. He is quite chinny, and he is quite one of these guys that loses in these high-profile fights, but he's a chill guy, Curtis Blades. He's one of those guys in the heavyweight division that you can't hate, and I hope he does continue to kind of throw check some of these people. I don't think he beats Tom Aspinall, but listen, may the best one win. He's a great wrestler, very powerful as Curtis Blades, one of the best in the world. Then we've got Sergey Pavlovich. I hate using the word aura, and I know I've made a video on this before, but this dude's aura has completely shifted. Before the fight with Tom Aspinall, he was the scariest man in the UFC. He was the scariest in the UFC. He was on a 6-fight winning streak, all of them coming by a first-round KO. First it was Tuivasa, then it was Lewis, or it might have been the other way around. Then it was Curtis Blades, which was his best win. And he looked like he was going to be the future of the heavyweight division. He looked unstoppable. And then he got knocked out by Tom Aspinall. And then he lost a decision and got destroyed by Alexander Volkov. And he's at this weird spot right now where I don't really know what's next for Sergey Pavlovich, because I feel like people have kind of figured him out. Because you look at Tuivasa, Lewis, and Blades, they all made mistakes against Sergey Pavlovich. They all tried to brawl against him. You don't want to brawl against Sergey Pavlovich because he's accurate, he's got high output, and he's powerful. You try and brawl with Sergey Pavlovich, he's probably going to chin you. And that's what Tom Aspinall and Volkov perfectly figured out. Tom Aspinall circled him, found the shot. Volkov didn't engage in a brawl, he kept it technical, and for that reason, they won the fights against Sergey Pavlovich. So I think Pavlovich needs to offer a little bit more. It would be good to see kind of a grappling base from Sergey Pavlovich, because I know he has a Greco-Roman wrestling background, and it would be good to see him come in and use his kicks a little bit more rather than just that heavy front foot boxing style. He's still scary, and I can guarantee that he's going to finish a couple of these more fat heavyweights, and if he does face a Sergey Spivak and a Tibera in his next fight, he's probably going to finish those guys too. He's scary, he's dangerous, but he's going to need to add a little bit more to his game rather than just the same thing that has worked for a lot of his fights, which is that front foot boxing style. And I don't kind of like how he pushed Alexander Volkov. He's lost all his aura, he's lost all his height, but we're going to see how he can bounce back. So still scary, but he's definitely kind of fallen off. Then we've got Cyril Gane. I don't really know how to explain Cyril Gane. He's had very good opportunities in the UFC, let's put it that way. He got a title shot from beating Derek Lewis, and then he lost to Francis Ngannou, and he had a title shot from Tai Tuivasa, so he's had a pretty easy title shots in his UFC career. And then he lost to Francis Ngannou, which was a very close fight, so he isn't like he lost to terrible people. And he lost to John Jones, which I guess in hindsight is quite a bad loss. I just don't really know if Cyril Gane takes the UFC seriously. I don't know if he cares about winning the belt. I don't know if he really cares about legacy. I feel like he's kind of here for the money, and that's not a disrespectful thing to say, but he ducked Curtis Blades. he ducked Tom Aspinall, and he ducked Sergey Pavlovich. So it kind of makes me question, does he really want this so badly? But he's got some good wins under his name. I mean, he's pretty much cleared out most of the heavyweight division. Rosenstrike, Tuivasa, Lewis, Spivak. The only people he hasn't been able to clear out are the elite of the division. I mean, he's got a win over Alexander Volkov, which has aged really well, and we're going to see how those two guys match up against each other later this year at UFC Abu Dhabi. And if he can beat Alexander Volkov, he's probably going to get a title shot against Tom Aspinall. And if he does fight Tom Aspinall, that's going to be so interesting to see. But again, he's just one of these guys in the heavyweight division, which in my opinion is a little bit too one-dimensional. He's got really good striking. He's so athletic. He's such a good kickboxer. Arguably the best kickboxer right now in the heavyweight division. Really good on the back foot as well. And he will just piece people up every fight. The only problem is he's just, like I said, one-dimensional. He doesn't have any grappling. That got shown against Francis Ngannou. That got shown against John Jones, and I think that would definitely get shown if he was to ever fight Tom Aspinall and Gelton Almeida. So he needs to improve his grappling. But overall, one of the best heavyweights in the world. He's such a good striker. He's so athletic. He's durable. Do I think he's going to win a belt? I just don't think he is. Unless he proves to me that he's improved his grappling so much and he wants to... I just want him to become more active as well. I mean, one fight a year just isn't enough. He needs to be fighting more than once a year because that is the rate that he's fighting at recently. I feel like he's kind of lost his passion in MMA, so hopefully he can find that passion for MMA a little bit more. Hopefully he can improve his grappling, but as of right now, I don't really know what's in the future for Cyril Gane. I mean, if he beats Volkov, he's getting a title shot. Don't think he wins a belt, but... he's fun to watch. He's a good striker. He breaks people down. So that's my thoughts on Cyril Gane. Don't think he's ever going to win a champion, but he's a good addition to the heavyweight division. I just wish he'd stop ducking people. And then we got Tom Aspinall. He is the best heavyweight in the world right now. He is the people's champion. Like, he is genuinely the hope of the heavyweight division. And even if you, for whatever reason, dislike Tom Aspinall, him losing to Curtis Blades would ruin the heavyweight division, and I'll make a video on that in the future. But anyway, if we talk about Tom Aspinall specifically, he's got the full package. He's the fastest heavyweight in the world. He's one of the most powerful heavyweights in the world. He's got really good striking. He's got really good fight IQ as well. His wrestling and his jiu-jitsu were on point as well. I mean, finished Andrei Arlovsky, finished Marcin Tybura, finished Spivak, finished Volkov, which is a really good win. First guy to finish Sergey Pavlovich when Pavlovich was the most dangerous guy in the UFC. And I feel like ever since that injury loss to Curtis Blades, we've seen a completely new Tom Aspinall, like the new and improved Tom Aspinall, the quicker Aspinall, the Aspinall that had better fight IQ, just a much better fighter since his return from that injury loss against Curtis Blades. And he's going to be facing Curtis Blades again. And even though Blades is a difficult guy, like I said, I think he beats Curtis Blades. And there's a reason that John Jones doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall. There's a reason John Jones has set his eyes on Stipe Miocic, because he wants no part of Tom Aspinall. Because Aspinall is the heavyweight king right now. And it's going to be very hard to beat Tom Aspinall in the heavyweight division. Am I saying it's impossible to beat him? I'm not saying that. I think he does leave his chin quite wide up in the air. And if one of these powerful heavyweights catches that chin of Tom Aspinall, it could be very dangerous for Aspinall. But as of right now, it looks like he's pretty much unstoppable. I can't see any heavyweight right now beating this dude. And he's such a class personality as well. You can't hate the guy. So I'm glad that he's the heavyweight champion. It's kind of frustrating that John Jones is ducking him. But at the end of the day, he is the best fighter from one of the best fighters from the UK. And he's definitely the best heavyweight right now. So for Tom Aspinall, yeah, best heavyweight in the world. And then John Jones, even though he is the greatest of all time, if I talk strictly about his career at the heavyweight division, him moving up to heavyweight ruined the heavyweight division. I mean, he won the belt in March of 2023 by beating Cyril Gane, which was a good win because a lot of people were picking Cyril Gane. But since that, he's done nothing. He's waited out a year, and his next fight is going to be in November 2024. To go from March 2023 to November 2024 is a massive jump. And I hate the fact that he's coming back to Stipe as well. It's not even like he's coming back to Aspinall or somebody like that. He's coming back to Stipe. I hope he gets his fight done with Stipe. I hope he has fun fighting Stipe, beating Stipe, and then he rides off into the sunset, and then we can finally start seeing some movement with the heavyweight title picture. He ruined the heavyweight division. Like I said, greatest of all time, but if we talk about his heavyweight career strictly, I don't really know what to say. He's held up the heavyweight division, and he's the worst edition. So that's what I've got to say about John Jones, and that is pretty much the heavyweight division cleared up in the rankings. And then we move on to light heavyweight. Then we have Azamat Mirzakhanov in the light heavyweight division. He's a decent prospect in the light heavyweight division. He's undefeated. He's going to be taking on Alonzo Menifield. I think it's for the Abu Dhabi card, the fight night, or it might be UFC 308. He's one of the Abu Dhabi cards later this year, but no, he's a good prospect in the light heavyweight division. He's a really good boxer as well. He's got really good hands. He's very, very powerful. I don't know how far he makes it in the light heavyweight division because, first of all, he hasn't beaten anyone good. His best win is Dustin Jacoby, and we know how shit that guy is. And apart from that, I mean, he's in the light heavyweight division, which is absolutely full of strikers. strikers. So you need to have elite striking to make it far in this division. You can't just have a decent base. I think he'll make it into the top 10, and I do think he will beat Alonzo Menifield at UFC Abu Dhabi. Like I said, he's a good prospect. He hasn't fought for a while. He's got really good hands as well. He just needs to show it against somebody good. The problem with Mirzakhanov is he does get hit quite a lot. Like, he's very open to getting hit. We saw in that Dustin Jacoby fight, Dustin Jacoby was landing a lot of shots on him. So I think if Azamat Mirzakhanov works on his defense, he could make it into the top 10. Again, this division is just full of strikers, so it's really difficult to compete when all you've got is a decent boxing. But I'm interested to see him fight. He's fun to watch, and I just want to see him fight against Alonzo Menifield, and I think he will beat Menifield at UFC Abu Dhabi, which brings us on to Menifield himself. Menifield's a bit of a weird one. He's just a really explosive wrestler with powerful hands, kind of like the Michael Chandler of the Alonzo Menifield, and similar to Michael Chandler, his fight IQ is terrible. He had a scrap with Dustin Jacoby. I wouldn't say it was a close fight, but he had a fairly decent scrap with Dustin Jacoby, which again doesn't really look good considering Dominic Reyes was able to finish him in the first round. And I just don't understand his fight IQ in some situations. His last fight against Carlos Ulberg at UFC St. Louis, just sprinted towards him and got KO'd in like 12 seconds. I don't understand the mindset. He's got good wrestling. He's fairly well-rounded for the division, but I just don't think he's good enough. His hands aren't good enough. He's not good enough for a striker. He has beaten Paul Craig and Jimmy Crute, but again, they ain't the best. They ain't the cream of the crop for the light heavyweight division. I don't think he'll make it into the top 10, and I think after his next loss, he'll probably get kicked out of the rankings. But I think he'll be one of these guys that is fairly dangerous for the unranked fighters in the light heavyweight division. Like I said, he's a good wrestler. He's explosive. It's just his fight IQ is lacking, and he's just not particularly great in any area. His stamina is quite questionable as well. He hasn't got the best gas tank as well for the light heavyweight division. So for Menifield, maybe he'll shock me. Maybe he'll shut down the undefeated prospect in Azamat Mirzakhanov, but I don't think he will. He's just an explosive wrestler who happens to have terrible fight IQ, but it brings him into the rankings in the light heavyweight division, which kind of just shows how uncompetitive this division is. So just an explosive wrestler with hands, I guess, is all you can really say about Alonzo Menifield. Dominic Reyes, the only man in the UFC to beat John Jones. I've even counted it as a notable win. This dude beat John Jones. It's kind of crazy how he beat John Jones and then since then just went on a massive streak of losses. But I think he beat John Jones. I think most MMA fans, everyone in the arena, everyone watching at home, everyone, even Joe Rogan, thought that Dominic Reyes he got the win over John Jones. The only people that thought John Jones beat Dominic Reyes was John Jones himself. He beat John Jones, which is a win that is aged extremely well. The only man to beat the GOAT. And he's also got some other good wins. Volkan Oezdemir, who's now one of the top light heavyweights in the world. Jared Cannonier when he was at light heavyweight. OSP. But we have to mention his losing streak. In his prime, this dude was so dangerous, but he went chinny. He got kind of, I wouldn't say his skill deteriorated. It was just his chin and the fact that he got caught a lot. Had that brutal spinning elbow against Yuri Prohaska, which is one of the best KOs in UFC history. Got flatlined by Jan Blachowicz. Got KO'd by a jab from Ryan Spann, which again isn't a good loss looking back on it because Ryan Spann is an absolute can. But it was good to see that Dominic Reyes got back in the winning column in his last fight against Dustin Jacoby. I thought Jacoby was able to would have done enough to get the win, but Dominic Reyes finally got back in the winning column, which is always good to see. And I want to see him face Anthony Smith, two washed guys going at it, and we'll talk about Anthony Smith in a second. But yeah, Reyes, the guy that's known for going on a big losing streak, the guy that's known for beating John Jones, but he's back in the winning column. He got a good finish over Justin Jacoby. I've always said that Dominic Reyes is a dangerous guy to fight. He's not just, I don't like necessarily using the term washed with Dominic Reyes, because even though I just did, he's still got skills, and he's still dangerous. The only thing is he's very, very vulnerable in the octagon. It's kind of like if you catch him before he catches you, the fight's over for him. But no, Dominic Reyes is still dangerous. And yeah, I want to see him versus Anthony Smith. And luckily, we don't have to see this dude get cut from the UFC anytime soon because he is back in the winning column. Bogdan Guskov, one of the more entertaining prospects in the light heavyweight division. He got a good win over Ryan Spann, which obviously kicked Ryan Spann out of the rankings. And I don't know what's next for Bogdan Guskov. Not Dominic Reyes. Johnny Walker did say he wants to move to the heavyweight division, but I would like to see Bogdan against Johnny Walker. And I think he has real potential, does Bogdan. Now, we did lose to Volkan Oezdemir in his UFC debut, but I like Bogdan a lot. He's really well-rounded, but the main talking point is his striking. He's a really crafty striker. He's really fun to watch. Very confusable. I like how we have Derek Lewis and Rosenstruck in the heavyweight division. We have Bogdan and Anthony Smith in the light heavyweight division. Have that as the co-main event for the Lewis and Rosenstruck card. But no, Bogdan Guskov, again, not much to say. He's a really good striker. He's fun to watch in the light heavyweight division. He's dangerous, and I think he will make it into the top 10. It's a bit too early to say if he makes it into the title picture because he has lost to Volkan Oezdemir, and he's at best when he's Ryan Spann, who He's terrible. But yeah, I want to see him fight. I want to see him get a top 10 opponent next. Maybe somebody like Johnny Walker or somebody else who's coming off a loss. Maybe they actually do Bogdan versus Anthony Smith. I don't know. But Bogdan Guskov, good prospect for the light heavyweight division. Again, I don't really know what's next for this dude. I think I need to see a little bit more before I fully assess his skills against the rest of the division. Then we have Anthony Smith. This dude is just so mid. Like, he's been around for ages. He's kind of like, some would say, a veteran. But he's just not that good. He's never really been that good. He's very... I just don't really get it with Anthony Smith. Like, he's not terrible anywhere, but he's not great anywhere. He's a decent wrestler. He's a decent... I mean, he's not really a decent striker, is he? He's just a really mid fighter, and it's kind of hard to root for Smith when he loses every other fight, most of them being by finish. If not, it's just a boring fight. And he's just so random as well. Like... I was fully expecting Vito Petrino to go in there and finish him, and he finished Vito Petrino in the first round. I fully expected him to beat Roma Dolidze. Roma Dolidze beat him. He's got a lot of losses. Glover Teixeira, Magomed Ankalaev, Johnny Walker, Thiago Santos, Roundtree KO'd him. John Jones as well. He's got some decent wins on there. Like I said, Volkan Oezdemir, he beat Ryan Spann twice, but they were both gifted wins. The Vito Petrino fraud check was good, and he kind of just relies on beating up cans or beating up these washed guys. He's good enough to make it into the top 15 because for some reason, whenever he's fighting a prospect or whenever he's fighting an absolute can, he'll be able to take them to a decision or be able to beat them. But whenever he fights anyone with an ounce of skill, he just gets destroyed. He's just not really that good of a fighter, and he's kind of delusional. The way that he's calling out Pereira, the way that he's calling out the light heavyweight division, and the way that he's just so confident in his skills, which I don't know why he is. He's shown up against the top guys multiple times and lost. He's just not that good as Anthony Smith, and I just don't really have any interest watching him. He's not the most entertaining guy to watch either. It seems like whenever he fights, it's like a light sparring session, and he still somehow loses those. So Anthony Smith, good enough to make it into the rankings, but he's just not someone you really want to root for because he's just, there's nothing going for him. I think he's better as an analyst. Can't even speak myself. But no, I just think he's better on commentary, not like the actual commentary, but, you know, the behind-the-scenes commentary rather than fighting. But if he can fraud check someone, I guess that could be fun. Let's just feed him to another up-and-comer, give him Reyes. Then we have Carlos Ulberg. I think he is the dark horse of the light heavyweight division. And I know I've mentioned prospect a lot in this video already for the light heavyweight division. But this dude, I think, really has top 5 potential. He's so good. He's young. He's hungry. He's, I mean, a physical specimen as well. This dude is massive with a massive reach as well. He's accurate and he's just well-rounded and dangerous. That win over Alonzo Minifield in like 12 seconds just showed how accurate this dude is. He has lost before, but he's on an absolute streak full of KOs and submissions. He was matched up against Jamal Hill, and I was actually picking Ulberg to beat Jamal Hill. I think he's got, champion material. Again, we need to see how he does against somebody in the top 5, and I hope he does get a top 5 opponent in his next fight. I don't know who he's going to fight, whether it be a Jan Blachowicz, a Johnny Walker, maybe it is Jamal Hill rescheduled. I don't know who he's going to be facing next, but he's just a really good guy in the light heavyweight division, a real good prospect to root for. And like I said, I really do think he's going to make it into the top 5. This dude has just been decimating people every single fight, finishing people. His finishing ability is amazing. He's well-rounded. He's tall, dangerous, accurate. He's just got everything going for him to make it for a good prospect in the light heavyweight division. So I think Carlos Ulberg will make it far. I think he will make it into the top 5, and I just want to see him fight again. I've been wanting to see him fight ever since UFC St. Louis. And it was unfortunate we didn't get to see the fight with Jamal Hill, because I really do think he would have put Jamal Hill out of there, especially considering Hill got KO'd a few months prior to that fight. But no, I want to see him face a top 5 opponent, best prospect in the light heavyweight division. I just can't wait to see this dude fight. Volkan Oezdemir. Definitely not the best personality-wise. I think he's probably got the most boring personality in the light heavyweight division, but he doesn't have the most boring fight style. I hope he gets a big fight next. That KO over Johnny Walker was really impressive, and I hope he does get a ranked opponent in his next fight. I mean, not a ranked opponent. He already is getting ranked opponents. I mean, I hope he gets like a top 5 opponent. I really do think they should do Volkan Oezdemir versus Jan Blachowicz. Again, he's not somebody that's ever going to be champion. He's been KO'd by Yuri Prohaska. He's been beaten by Ankalaev. Cormier demolished him back in the day. Lost to Reyes and Smith as well. And Krylov. He's quite chinny as Volkan Oezdemir. You catch him with a big shot, he is quite chinny. But he's also very powerful. He's a really good striker. And he's just a really powerful striker like that. As we saw in that Johnny Walker fight. As we saw when he just destroyed Paul Craig to a decision, and he's got a really good win over Bogdan Guskov, which has aged really well. So I think he's really good in the light heavyweight division, and the perfect prospect destroyer. You know, if there's a prospect up and coming in the light heavyweight division, Volkan Oezdemir will be the guy to finish him. He's just always going to be one of these guys that is dangerous in the light heavyweight division. He's dangerous. I think he has got potential to be top 5 if he keeps on the way he's going, because he brutally KO'd Johnny Walker, but again, that's not saying much considering how chinny Walker is. But no, good in the light heavyweight division, dangerous, fun fighter to watch. And I hope he gets Jan Blachowicz next. And if he can beat Jan Blachowicz, we might have to be talking about Volkan Oezdemir potentially getting in the title conversation, because he is a good striker and he is powerful. So Volkan Oezdemir, no time. Hope he gets Jan Blachowicz next. Good, powerful striker. Then we have Khalil Rountree. Very underrated is Khalil Rountree. Now, he is a bit stiff with his striking. But no, he's really good as Khalil Rountree. He's very, very powerful, and his boxing is very good as well. And he seems to have improved a lot in the light heavyweight division. Again, he was scheduled to fight Jamal Hill, and I think that would have been a really good test for him. And I hope he does get somebody in the top 5, because he has got some really good wins. Obviously got that KO win over Anthony Smith, which is definitely his best win. Beat Paul Craig as well, and the other wins are kind of cans. And he has lost to a couple of the guys as well. He lost to Johnny Walker. He lost to Tyson Pedro. He even lost to McCall. But I think Khalil Rountree really does have top 5 potential. Do I think he becomes a champion? No, I just think, again, he's in the division full of strikers, and I think out of the most of the strikers in this division, he just doesn't strike me as one of the best. I mean, he's got really good boxing, and he's very, very powerful. He sits down on a lot of his punches, and this dude is tough. But I just don't think he's as an elite striker as the rest of the division. But he's dangerous. Hope he gets a top 5 opponent, and I'm hoping we do see him scheduled against somebody. I don't know what's next for him either, but he's just a good guy in the light heavyweight division to watch. Fun guy, dangerous, and it's either going to be him getting put out of there, or it's going to be him finishing somebody else. So Khalil Rountree, good, dangerous guy in the light heavyweight division. Johnny Walker, I don't know if he's going to be staying in the light heavyweight division. He said he wants to move to heavyweight, which I think he could do if he fights these fat, unranked heavyweights. Definitely the goofiest dude in the UFC. I mean, you look at this dude's finishing compilation every single time he gets finished. They are the most goofy finishes in the UFC. The fight against Magomed Ankalaev where he got KO'd against the cage. The Jamal Hill delayed KO. That was such a weird KO. The fight with Nikita Krylov, he just got brutally slept against Volkan Oezdemir. The Corey Anderson fight. He's very, very chinny as Johnny Walker, and he's very goofy. I don't understand why he doesn't switch anything up. And I just don't think he's really built for the division anymore. I think, like I said, there's too many elite strikes in this division for Johnny Walker. He's still dangerous and technical. He got a good finish over Paul Craig. He was able to beat Anthony Smith to a decision. And like I said, the Khalil Rountree won his age really well. And he got the win over Ryan Spann and Q Talaba. But again, these aren't the best wins in the UFC. I just think he should switch to the heavyweight division. If he continues fighting these unranked fat heavyweights in the heavyweight division, in the most uncompetitive division in the UFC, I think he'll have a chance. He's just a good technical striker, but again, if you catch him with a big shot, he would just get KO'd in the most goofy fashion possible. He is the goofiest guy in the UFC. Very, very chinny as well. So for Johnny Walker, I don't know how long he's left for his career. I think he is on the other end of his career, probably going to retire soon. I think him versus Dominic Reyes would genuinely be the definition of who gets chinned first. But yeah, move to the heavyweight division, get some free wins, and retire before you honestly get some serious CTE, because this dude has been brutally KO'd countless times now. Nikita Krylov. I would say this dude is the most underrated light heavyweight right now. I mean, first of all, he is very well-rounded. I'd say he's the most well-rounded guy in the light heavyweight division, at least outside of the top 5. I think he'd be a real threat for a lot of the guys in the top 5. He's coming off some really good wins. His last fight, he submitted Ryan Spann. I know I keep dissing Ryan Spann. I just want to know where Nikita Krylov is, though. This dude has been gone for so long. That Ryan Spann fight was all the way back on the Marab versus Yan card. That was like early 2023. I think he's got surgery or something. I just want him to come back to the UFC, because he could potentially be a big threat to the light heavyweight division. He's got some good wins. Volkan Oezdemir, that when he absolutely demolished Gustafsson a few years ago, I know it's a wash, Gustafsson, the Johnny Walker fight as well. I think he does have potential. I know he's lost to Ankalaev before, but again, that was a fairly close decision. He didn't even get dominated in that fight. And he has lost to Jan Blachowicz and obviously Paul Craig. But then again, if Paul Craig beats you in the light heavyweight division, it probably means you're good. And he lost to Glover Teixeira, but he's well-rounded. He's got dangerous striking as well. He's a really good submission artist, is Nikita Krylov. And I think he would be a threat to Pereira, but obviously he needs to get that fight, so I hope he gets a top 5 opponent yet. I don't know what's next for him. Maybe an Alexander Rakic. I just don't know what's next for Krylov, but he needs a top 5 opponent. And I would argue that if Nikita Krylov wins his next fight, he could be getting a title shot because he's ranked number 6. He's coming off a couple of good wins. You give him another finish in the top 5, it's hard to doubt Nikita Krylov. I just want to see this dude back, man. He's been gone for so long. He's here to shake up the light heavyweight division, but he's taking time off his career. Come back, Nikita Krylov, get a fight, get a win, and hopefully we can see this dude progress in the division because I think he is quite a dark horse and he's probably the most underrated dude in this division because nobody is talking about Nikita Krylov. Alexander Rakic. He's a really good kickboxer, is Rakic, but he's just not the most entertaining guy to watch. It's hard to say with Rakic because I feel like he has kind of been done dirty with a lot of his losses. The Jan Blachowicz fight, I think he could have beaten Jan Blachowicz, and I think if you were to rematch them, which he was scheduled to early this year, I think he has a good chance of beating Jan Blachowicz, especially considering Blachowicz is like 42. The fight with Yuri Prohaska, who was low-key piecing up Yuri Prohaska, then got caught by a big shot and got finished, and obviously lost to Volkan Oezdemir as well, but he's got some good wins. The Anthony Smith fight, the Thiago Santos fight. He's a really good kickboxer, is Alexander Rakic. One of the best kickboxers in this division. He's just, again, it's hard to say with Rakic. I feel like he gets done dirty in a lot of his fights. He gets open to get caught a lot. You know, he got caught by Yuri Prohaska. I think for Rakic, he just needs to avoid getting engaged in brawls. Do not engage in scraps. Do not brawl with people. If this dude just keeps it technical, he would have real potential to get a title shot, but he doesn't. He keeps messing it up because he keeps engaging in brawls. I really want to see how he does against kind of like one of the other guys in the top of the light heavyweight division because his best win is Anthony Smith and Santos, but then again, he's only lost to some of the best in the division. I'd love to see this guy face, like I said, a Nikita Krylov or just somebody else in that light heavyweight division, like, I don't know, just someone else, maybe like a Khalil Roundtree, just so we can really see how good Rakic is because he's a good kickboxer, but he just gets open to get caught a lot, and I really don't know what's next for this dude, so hopefully he can bounce back, because he is, well, I mean, he's not a fun kickboxer, but he's a good kickboxer, and yeah, I just don't really know what's next for this dude, to be honest. Then we got Jan Blachowicz. Again, I don't know what's really going on with Jan Blachowicz. He's had a couple of shaky past few fights, man. I do think he's on the other end of his career. People give him credit for that fight with Alex Pereira, and to be honest, he did give Alex Pereira the toughest test out of everyone in the light heavyweight division, and I think if you run it back between him and Pereira, it would be equally as tough as the first fight, and I think he has a good chance of beating him. But he has had a bit of a shaky past few fights. Obviously, the Alex Pereira fight got beaten in that fight because he couldn't get the grappling going after the first round. Got submitted by Glover Teixeira. Look, you know, his other fights as well hasn't been the best. I mean, the win over Alexander Rakic injured himself in that fight. And his other wins, I mean, Israel Adesanya, that was Adesanya moving up to the light heavyweight division. I guess it was a good win at the time. Luke Rockhold was extremely chinny. Reyes was extremely chinny. It's hard to gauge with Jan Blachowicz. He's well-rounded. He's a really good wrestler, and he's got good kickboxing. This dude might have the best leg kicks. Him and Pereira might have the best leg kicks in the light heavyweight division because this dude destroyed, what's his name? Magomed Ankalaev with those leg kicks, and to be honest, I don't think he beat Ankalaev. I think Ankalaev should have got that win. But he's just someone that you want to root for in the light heavyweight division. Again, I don't know what's next for this dude. I think him versus Volkan Oezdemir would be really fun, and I can almost guarantee that wouldn't go the distance. He's been calling for a fight with Pereira. He said he wants that rematch, but again, you've got to earn the rematch. You need to get a good win. You need to get a good win. This dude's last good win was Adesanya. He needs to get a good, impressive win. So I think if you do Jan Blachowicz versus Volkan Oezdemir, or Jan Blachowicz maybe rematching with Alexander Rakic, or I don't know. Maybe, I don't know what's next for Jan Blachowicz. Maybe him versus Khalil Roundtree. I'm not sure what's next, but he needs to get that one good win to prove to people that he can get that fight with Pereira, because you don't deserve a fight with Pereira when most of your last 5 fights have not been going your way. But again, somebody what you want to root for. He's well-rounded. He's got good wrestling. He's a powerful guy on the feet. Polish power. I want to see Jan Blachowicz back in action, and he keeps tweeting saying that he's ready, but again, we need to see him sign the contract. I think he's going to be coming back in December, so hopefully that happens. Jan Blachowicz, good guy, former champion as well, which is impressive. Then we have Jamal Hill, the most salty dude in the light heavyweight division. He's just really hard to root for, Jamal Hill, man. He's so salty, making excuses after all his finishes. He's not really, I'm going to be honest, he's kind of, I feel like his wins are overrated as well. I guess beating Glover Teixeira was good across 5 rounds, but again, Glover Teixeira, I know he was a former champion and he's really impressive in the division, but he's 42. You beat Johnny Walker, who's the most chinny guy in the division, and then your other 3 wins are against absolutely washed cans. He got KO'd in the first round by Pereira, which might have been one of the most humiliating losses in history. The way that he was talking to Pereira, the talk, and then at UFC 300 when everyone was watching just got flatlined in the first round, and he got his arm broken by Paul Craig as well. I don't think he's ever going to become a champion again. I think Yuri Prochazka is probably crafty enough to beat him, but again, Yuri's really beatable, and I can see he'll catch him. Don't get me wrong, Hill's a good boxer. He's a good boxer. I like how he pressures people. He's very powerful in the division as well. I think he's one of those guys that if he lands a good shot, he'll put you out of there. He's got potential to flatline a lot of these guys. And I think he will stay in the top 5. Again, another former champion when he beat Glover Teixeira, which is impressive. But it's just really hard to root for this guy. Especially, I remember that one time when a fan was saying that he's humble, and then he started getting mad at the fan for calling him humble because he misread it. And it's hard to root for Jamal Hill, especially with the amount of excuses he makes. I think if he just took the loss on the chin, people would respect him a lot more. He's just somebody that you don't want to root for. And he's someone that you kind of hopes he gets flatlined in the future. But he's still a dangerous guy. And to be honest, even though he might not be the most likable dude, he gets people talking about him. So I want to know what's next for Jamal Hill, whether it be him versus Ulberg or Roundtree or whatever. I just want to see him fight again. Some people have said Yuri. Maybe that's a good fight because, you've got 2 former champions going at it. But yeah, Hill's a fun guy to watch. Then Magomed Ankalaev, he should be fighting Alex Pereira next. And I think in the light heavyweight division, Ankalaev is the toughest test for Alex Pereira for multiple reasons. The first reason is he's a really good striker as Ankalaev. I would say he's more of a striker than a grappler. And I know striking against Alex Pereira is probably not the best chance. Your best chance of beating Pereira is to engage in the grappling. But he's got the good striking, which is going to keep Pereira guessing. The way that he KO'd Johnny Walker, he's very, very powerful on the feet. He's got really good boxing. He's accurate as well. And he's really technical. He's much more technical than a guy like Yuri Prochazka. So he's a good striker. And he's probably the best wrestler right now in the light heavyweight division, as he showed against Jan Blachowicz and as he's shown before. He's got really good wrestling, which is Pereira's kryptonite. So I think if he mixes the wrestling up with the striking against Alex Pereira, it's going to be hard to not favour Ankalaev in that fight. So I hope he does get his title shot with Pereira, but he needs to stop calling it on his terms. It seems like every time he calls out Alex Pereira, he wants it to be on his terms, which I don't know why. And I think he should be a former champion. I really do think he should have beaten Jan Blachowicz, man. I think in that fight with Jan Blachowicz, it was very close. He was getting his leg pieced up on the feet, but I would have favoured Ankalaev to win that fight. I think if the judge's scorecard would have went one way, it should have gone Ankalaev's way. So I think he should have been a champion, but yeah, I hope we get to see that fight with Pereira. It's one of the most intriguing fights in the light heavyweight division, and Ankalaev's probably the most well-rounded and dangerous dude for Pereira, so that's going to be interesting to see. So I hope we see that fight next, and he's just an exciting guy to watch. Then Yuri Prochazka. This dude is never in a boring fight. He's definitely one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. When is this dude in a boring fight? That fight he had with Glover Teixeira, I've said this before. If there was a fight I had to show to someone to get them into MMA, it would be Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira, because it had the perfect mix of entertaining striking, entertaining grappling between 2 entertaining guys, and it ended in a finish after a war. It's the perfect fight. That fight with Rakic where he came back and KO'd Alexander Rakic, the Volkan Oezdemir KO, the Dominic Reyes, one of the best KOs in UFC history. Yuri Prochazka is the human highlight reel. And when I say human highlight reel, it's not always him on the good end of the highlight reel, whether it be him getting KO'd like he did with Pereira. That was a really fun rivalry. He's just a really fun personality, this whole samurai lifestyle that he lives. It's really entertaining to watch. His fighting style is so entertaining. I think he does need to change his style a little bit if he wants to become a champion, because he is very, very hittable. He's got this really wide stance which leaves him open to leg kicks, and he doesn't really have the best defense. But he's dangerous, he's a killer, he's well-rounded, and he's just so fun to watch. He's one of those guys that no matter who he's facing, he's never going to be in a boring fight. So I hope he does get back up there. I hope he does get some more wins, some more finishes, because he is one of the most entertaining dudes. And I swear he's finished. Like, I don't know the exact amount of wins he's got in his MMA career. I think he's like 30 or around 30. And he's finished most of his wins. I think only one of his fights have gone to a decision. So, Yuri Prochazka, one of the most entertaining dudes in the UFC. One of the most perfect dudes to show to a new UFC fan if you want to get them into the UFC. And then finally, Alex Pereira, the face of the UFC. He is the face of the UFC. He is probably the best dude in the UFC right now. Pound for pound, top 3. He is the face of the UFC. I mean, his massive route. I mean, look at the amount of former champions he's already beaten. This dude has just speedrun the UFC. Joined in 2021 and has already achieved more than 99.9% of fighters ever will in their career. He's beaten so many former champions before. He beat Sean Strickland. He's beaten Adesanya. And I know we got KO'd by Adesanya, but the way that he came back from that as well after winning the middleweight belt and then losing it by beating Jan Blachowicz, a former champion, beating Yuri Prochazka for the belt, a former champion, KOing Jamal Hill at UFC 300, a former former champion, then beating Yuri again. And if this dude can beat Magomed Ankalaev as well and then move up to heavyweight, this dude is just speedrunning the UFC. And I hope we do see him at the heavyweight division. Obviously, I want to see Aspinall versus Jones first. That should be the fight we see. But if we do Aspinall versus Jones or we do Pereira versus Aspinall, I'm really intrigued to see how Pereira would do in the heavyweight division, because you just can't write this dude off. His Brazilian warrior kind of spirit, the way that he walks out, I know it's a really cringy word, but his aura as well. He's just someone that you can't really root against. Nice guy as well. He's a good role model for people. Extremely dangerous. That left hook might be the most dangerous weapon in the entirety of MMA. He's just someone that you can't not be a fan of. Even if you're the biggest Adesanya fan, I just don't get how you can't be a fan of Alex Pereira. Definitely the pound-for-pound top 3 in the UFC. Someone that you can't miss. Someone that you've just got to watch. And this dude is definitely going to go down as one of the greatest fighters in MMA history. Definitely one of my favourite fighters in the UFC, one of the fan favourites, and for good reason. So Alex Pereira, probably one of my favourite champions right now. Next up, we got the middleweight division. Chris Curtis at rank 15th. Chris Curtis, I mean, personality-wise, I must say, he's probably the saltiest fighter in the UFC. If you don't know what I'm talking about, on Twitter, if anyone, criticises Chris Curtis on Twitter, he just gets so mad on Twitter. He might be one of the most... just one of the saltiest fighters in the UFC. He gets so mad at people on Twitter. He engages in Twitter wars all the time. So he's probably one of the most easily trollable fighters in the UFC. He's so easy to troll, but now he's a decent fighter, is Chris Curtis. I think a couple of fights ago he had like a 100% takedown defense record, so he's got great takedown defense. I personally thought he should have won against Brendan Allen in the fight they had recently, so I feel like he should be ranked higher than 15th. But to be fair, he did lose to Brendan Allen. He's also lost to Jack Hermanson, but again, that was another close fight. The Kelvin Gastelum fight as well, that was super close at UFC 287, so it's not like he's lost and he's been destroyed. The fighters that he's lost to have been really close losses as well, so it could have gone either way, which, by the way, he did take to Twitter to complain about those losses. But no, he's a really good boxer, he's got really dangerous hands, and he's a big threat to anyone. I can definitely see Chris Curtis handing out a few fraud checks in his career because he's got really good takedown defense. Like, I've been saying this for a while, you give Bo Nickel Chris Curtis, I can see Chris Curtis being the guy to shut down Bo Nickel because of his takedown defense and the fact that he's got such good boxing. So even though he's such a salty guy on Twitter, he's a good fighter, is Chris Curtis. He's a guy that you can kind of guarantee that he's going to have a fairly interesting fight. He's not really boring as well. I mean, like I said, his last fight with Brendan Allen was really good and I thought he should have won. So I kind of feel like he has been done dirty decision-wise in a couple of his fights, but he's overall pretty good, and I think he does deserve to be ranked. Then we got Michel Pereira, Anthony Hernandez, who's going to be taking on Michel Pereira. And by the way, I really like that matchup. I'll talk about that matchup in a second when I talk about Pereira, but Anthony Hernandez, probably the best grappling prospect in the middleweight division right now. I know we've got a lot of grapplers in the middleweight division. It's a division that is full of prospects. But Anthony Hernandez, he's displayed that he's really good at grappling. He's able to take people down and he's just able to find these submissions so easily. He's kind of like Colby Covington if he had 10 times better jiu-jitsu. He can easily find submission. He just had a prospect versus a prospect fight with Roman Kopylov. Beat Roman Kopylov, submitted him, shut down the prospect of Roman Kopylov. And he got a win over Marc-Andre Barriault. And he's matched up against Michel Pereira. If he can beat Michel Pereira, that's a big win for Anthony Hernandez. We might see him then from there get like a top 5 opponent. He's just a really good grappler with Anthony Hernandez. I want to see how he does against somebody that's actually well-rounded. So I think Michel Pereira is the perfect opponent. And he has lost to Kevin Holland before. But no, I think he's going to be a really fun guy in the division. He's a fun grappler. He's not just a boring grappler. And I hope he does well. That fight with Roman Kopylov was interesting in the fact that he was able to just completely shut down Roman Kopylov. Fair play to Anthony Hernandez. One of the better prospects in the UFC. And I can't wait for that fight with Michel Pereira. And talking of Michel Pereira, Michel Pereira has to be probably my favourite fighter in the middleweight division in terms of entertainment. I just don't see how you can't be a fan of this guy. I understand he had a lot of hate last year when he missed weight against Wonderboy Thompson, and I can understand. We all wanted to see that fight. We were robbed of a good matchup just because he missed weight. But now that he's settled into the middleweight division, he's had so many bangers. That fight with Portieri where he dropped him and found the submission. The fight with Mikel where he dropped him and found the submission. The thing that makes Mikel Pereira exciting is not only this, he's entertaining striking style where he's doing backflips and jumping off the fences, but he mixes everything in so well. So he's got really powerful striking. He's such a dangerous striker, but he uses his striking to set up submissions. When he drops you or, just takes someone to the floor, he'll then latch up a submission really good from there. He's not just one of these guys that takes you to the ground, goes for the generic double leg takedown whenever he's in trouble, or even drops you with a strike. If he drops you with a strike, he'll go for a backflip, or he'll just find a submission from there. He's got such good submission game. His jiu-jitsu's amazing. I am picking him to beat Anthony Hernandez, and I think he's a real problem for the rest of the middleweights. He's really dangerous, is Michel Pereira, both on the feet and in grappling. And I said this in a video before. If you take away everyone in the top 5, I think Michel Pereira is the toughest fight for Dricus du Plessis in the division. He's a stylistic nightmare for most people, but at the same time, he's just entertaining to watch, and I feel like we've got to forgive him for the weight miss against Wonderboy Thompson, for the fights that they've provided against us. So Michel Pereira might have to be one of my favourite middleweights right now, and I can't wait to see him versus Hernandez, because it's a prospect versus a prospect matchup, which the UFC don't really tend to do, so I can't wait for that fight against Anthony Hernandez. Then we've got Caio Bravo, once again another prospect. I talk about the middleweight division being full of prospect. We've got another one right here, pretty sure he came from the Contender Series. Caio Bravo's really good as well. Now, I wouldn't say he's as well-rounded as Michel Pereira, but he's a big middleweight, is Caio Bravo. And this dude's striking is so sharp. He fights from the Fighting Nerds gym, so you can understand why he's so effective. Finished Abbas Magomedov, finished McCallan in his last fight, fought his first ranked opponent in Paul Craig, and he absolutely demolished Paul Craig. He was landing big shots on the feet, and I know it's not really hard to outstrike Paul Craig, but he was able to defend the takedowns as well. He was able to evade danger from Paul Craig and put Paul Craig to sleep. And I think, again, if he sharpens up his style, if he becomes well-rounded, this dude has potential to be a big middleweight fighter. I know I've said that about like 3 different fighters already in the middleweight division, but he's just really dangerous. I can't wait to see what he does next. I don't think he has a fight booked. I'd love to see him fight somebody like Paulo Costa or Roman Dolidze, because I really do think he can take these guys out. I think he's the next generation of the middleweight division, and he's just a super fun personality, super fun striker to watch. Same for Michel Pereira, and I just can't wait to see what he does next. This middleweight division, like I said, is already stacked full of prospects, and these are the ranked prospects as well. I haven't even got over the ones that are unranked, but Caio Bravo, just a fun striker, and you just want to see him succeed in the UFC as well. Not, no notable losses in the UFC either. Then we got Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, talk about star power. This guy once was one of the biggest prospects in the UFC. I feel like he's now transitioned to a contender. He's got a bit of a tricky career, does Chimaev, because he's one of the biggest stars in the UFC, and at one point in time, this guy had so much momentum. When he was going into that fight with Gilbert Burns, he quite possibly was the biggest prospect in the UFC, and I feel like his past couple of fights and his past couple of years in his career have been really harmful to his career. He fought Kevin Holland after he missed weight against Nate Diaz, and he beat Kevin Holland easily, but at the same time, he missed weight, and then he had to move up to the middleweight division, took a year off, came back and fought, he came back and, he was supposed to fight Costa. Costa pulled out. He fought Usman on short notice, and that was a draw at best, in my opinion. I think most MMA fans looking at that fight probably would have scored it as a draw. So we got a very lucky win against Kamaru Usman, and then a year after, he gets a fight with Robert Whittaker, pulls out, and now he's kind of in that stage of his career where he's like, what's next for Chimaev? He's lost all of his momentum. He's lost all of his hype. He hasn't actually lost a fight yet, and I still think he has potential to fight for a belt one day, because his grappling pace is so relentless. He's one of the most relentless grapplers in the UFC, but he's got a lot of problems. His immune system, his tendency to stay in fights, his weight, the fact that he keeps pulling out of fights, his stamina. I think next we give him a middleweight that's not going to give him a number 1 contender. I think we give him somebody like Jared Cannonier, who's a great test for Khamzat Chimaev, because he got his number 1 contender fight, he pulled out. He doesn't deserve that number 1 contender fight just yet. He's even been calling for a title shot, mate. You're ranked number 11th and your best one is Usman, so I hope he does well in the UFC, because it would be good to see like Chimaev have a super fight with like Israel Adesanya or something like that, but he needs to build himself up, and I hope he does sort his immune system out and we can finally start seeing Chimaev get that momentum that he had at the beginning of his career. So he's still dangerous. I would say he's one of the best middleweights, but he hasn't proved it yet, and we just need to see him prove it. Then we've got Roman Dolidze. He's just a bit mid, isn't he? I mean, he had a really good win recently. Obviously, I haven't counted it in this division because it was a light heavyweight, but he had a really good win over Anthony Smith. I don't really know what to say about Roman Dolidze. I feel like on his come-up, he was kind of labelled as this very dangerous guy. His win over Jack Hermansson, a couple of his wins, he was a dangerous grappler who also had power. But in these past few fights at middleweight, he just hasn't looked good. He had an extremely boring fight against Marvin Vettori, in which he lost by decision. Then he goes and fights Imavov in a Fight Night main event, which was quite chaotic. He's never going to be a contender. I feel like Roman Dolidze is kind of like a filler fighter, if that makes sense. He's dangerous. He's going to deliver a lot of fraud checks. He's definitely not going to leave the rankings, because he's a dangerous guy and he's got really good grappling. But he's never going to make it far in the middleweight division. He's never going to make the top 5. He's never going to fight for a belt. Never going to win to contendership. He's just a bit mid. Not the most interesting fighter either, so he's kind of like a filler. He's like kind of like the Mateus Gamrot of the middleweight division, except if Gamrot just wasn't as good. That's the best way I can see it. So he's a bit mid, but I still think he's going to whip out wins here and there against the most random fighters. Then we got Jack Hermansson. Talk about mid. No, I'm joking. Now, Jack Hermansson, yeah, he's kind of just, I feel like the new wave of the middleweights have caught up to him. We talk about guys like Caio Bravo and Michel Pereira and Hamzat Chimaev. These guys are kind of like the new wave of the middleweight division, where Jack Hermansson, I would class him as kind of like the old wave. Before we had Chimaev, before we had Anthony Hernandez, we had Jack Hermansson. He was hyped up as the big grappler of the middleweight division, and he's got some good wins. The Gastelum win, the win over Joe Pyfer. He fraud-checked Joe Pyfer recently, and he actually looked really good in that fight. His stand-up's really good. But again, similar to Delidze, he's never going to enter contendership. He got beaten up by Sean Strickland. He lost to Vettori. He got finished by Delidze as well. He lost to Cannonier. He's never going to be a legit contender, I don't think, because he's just not good enough. But he's a good striker, and he's a bit of an awkward grappler as well. He doesn't just shoot for your generic takedown. For some reason, he loves striking as well. He's got this thing where he likes striking, even though the best game plan would be to go for the takedown. He's a good grappler. He's nothing special in the middleweight division. I think he's very similar to a Delidze, where he's kind of like the old wave of the middleweight division. He was one of the best middleweights back in the day when Adesanya and guys like Vettori were fighting for the belt, but now he's kind of, not that he's fallen off, but the middleweight division has just become a little bit too good for Hermansson, so it is what it is. Then we've got Paulo Costa. I'm going to be honest, he's overrated. I know that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear me praise Paulo Costa, talk about how he's funny. Don't get me wrong, he's probably got the best Twitter account in the UFC. The amount of people he's angered on Twitter, I'd love to see this dude go at Chris Curtis on Twitter. But this dude is heavily overrated in my opinion. Is he dangerous? Yes, but he has lost to every single top opponent that he's had. He got destroyed by Israel Adesanya. Then he missed weight by like 20 pounds against Marvin Vettori. Couldn't even win that fight. Then he fought Robert Whittaker at UFC 298, and even though he landed a good kick, he lost that fight by decision. And then he got walked forward in a boring fight and lost to Sean Strickland. And his only wins old people, like he lost to Luke Rockhold, no longer in the UFC. Uriah Hall, no longer in the UFC. Hendricks, Romero, no longer in the UFC. I feel like Costa, if he wants to prove himself in the middleweight division, he needs to fight someone that's an up-and-comer. Like a Caio Bravo or a Michel Pereira or an Anthony Hernandez. Maybe the winner of that fight can fight Costa, because I don't want to see this dude fight at the top anymore. He's just not champion material. He had a good come-up, and he's an entertaining guy. But I feel like people keep categorizing Paulo Costa with the best middleweights in the world, and I don't understand why, because he isn't. He's lost to every good middleweight that he's gone against, so I think he's a good fighter. I think he's dangerous, but he needs an impressive win, because he hasn't really got any impressive wins in the UFC, and he's lost to every legit opponent that he's got. But I will say he's definitely got some personality, and he's probably got the best Twitter account in the UFC. Brendan Allen, another grappling prospect. We've got so many grappling prospects in the UFC. I actually can see Brendan Allen kind of being a big threat. I know he's matched up against Imavov, which is going to be such a good fight. That's kind of like an uncrowned contender fight. He's got some good wins. The fight with Kevin Holland absolutely demolished Paul Craig. That Paul Craig fight really impressed me against Brendan Allen, because Paul Craig is known for having his great jiu-jitsu, and Brendan Allen just completely shut it down and ragdolled him and Lil Bro'd him as well. He's also probably got the best rear naked choke in the UFC. I don't know the exact number, but he's won a shit ton of fights by rear naked choke. It's kind of like his signature move. And his recent fight with Chris Curtis, which I don't think he won, but it was a very good fight as well. And he beat another grappler in Andre Muniz, so he's definitely one of the more superior grapplers. And he doesn't like the fact that if he's going to be facing a grappler, he doesn't take that into account. He doesn't get scared away when he's facing a dangerous grappler. He just does his thing, and it works. Now, he has been destroyed by Sean Strickland before, and he has been KO'd by Chris Curtis. I need to see how he does against a top contender. I need to see how he does against somebody like Imavov, but as of right now, he's a really good grappler, one of the better grapplers in the UFC. He's kind of like a new and improved version of Jack Hermansson, so he's a good guy, Brendan Allen. Really good rear naked choke. I want to see him versus Imavov. Then we got Marvin Vettori. If there was a fighter that I could perfectly describe as good but not great, it would be Marvin Vettori. He's just good. He's not great. He's nothing special, but he's not bad either. He's not got any crazy wrestling, but he's got good wrestling. He's not got any crazy striking, but he's got good wrestling. He's beaten some decent people. He beat Paulo Costa, Roman Dolidze, Jack Hermansson, and Kevin Holland, so he's already got some really good wins. Well, yeah, good wins in the middleweight division. He's lost to Adesanya twice. He's lost to Robert Whittaker. He's lost to Cannonier, so he's definitely not one of the elite. So he's kind of just like, I want to call him a mid fighter, but mid nowadays has a really bad reputation, so I'm not going to say he's mid. He's just good. I can see him beating a couple of these up-and-comers. I can see him losing to a couple of these up-and-comers. He's never going to fight for a belt again. I don't really know what to say about Marvin Vettori, although I do want to see him back. He's been out for so long. I swear his last fight was like June or July of 2023. I want to see this dude come back. I don't know when he's supposed to be coming back. He's kind of just taken a year off. I think he's realised that he's no longer a legit contender for the middleweight belt, and I feel like if he is going to fight, it's only going to be for kind of for the paycheck. But I want to see Marvin Vettori back. He's got some good boxing. He's fairly well-rounded. He's just a good middleweight, and I think he perfectly represents the middleweight division. Good, not great, not exciting, not special, but he's good. I think Marvin Vettori is the perfect representation for the middleweight division. Jared Cannonier. It's really hard to say with Jared Cannonier because he's beaten Sean Strickland, and that wasn't even like ages ago. He beat Strickland a couple of years ago. I know it was a close fight. He beat Anderson Silva, but he was on his losing streak. Absolutely destroyed Marvin Vettori. Absolutely destroyed Derek Brunson. Beat Jack Hermansson. Jared Cannonier is a really good striker. Really, really good striker. He has recently lost to Imavov, but it was a really early stoppage as well. He had a boring fight with Adesanya. He lost to Whittaker. I think Cannonier's similar to like the Imavovs and the Vettoris. He's going to be a top middleweight. I think he's going to be a top contender, and I do feel like he kind of got done dirty in that Imavov fight, but I don't see him beating Whittaker again. I don't think he'd beat Dricus, even though that could be a close fight. I don't think he'd ever beat Adesanya. I think Strickland would probably beat him in the rematch, even though that's a really close fight. So it's kind of tough to say with Cannonier. I think he's always going to be a contender in the top 5. He's got this really powerful, high-output boxing base. He's just really fun to watch as well. And he absolutely is a killer. He lives up to his name. That's all I've really got to say about Cannonier. He's a fun contender. He's not boring. He's got really effective striking, but he's never going to fight for a belt again, in my opinion. And then we've got Imavov. It's weird because he's ranked number 4, but I still think there's so many questions to be answered when it comes to Imavov. He is matched up against Brendan Allen, which I think is going to be a really good fight between two legit contenders. He beat Cannonier, but it was an early stoppage. And apart from that, his best wins are Buckley and Delidze. And he has lost to Sean Strickland a couple of years ago. So the fact that he's ranked number 4 just tells you everything you need to know about the middleweight division. But no, Imavov's good. He's well-rounded. He's got good wrestling, and his striking has improved so much. He's got like this unique striking style that seems to work really well. So he's a really good striker, is Imavov. Again, I don't think he's ever going to become a champion unless he shows me something crazy against Brendan Allen. I think Strickland, Adesanya, Dricus, these guys all beat him. Same for Whittaker. But I think he's just... I need to see more from Imavov. I need to see him fight another top opponent. Even if it was just somebody like Costa or just anyone like a Vettori. I just want to see how Imavov would do against these guys because I still think there's so many questions that need to be answered. But from what we've seen so far, he impressed me in that Cannonier fight and he looks pretty good. So we'll have to see what he does against Allen. Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker is definitely one of the greatest middleweights of all time. I mean, look at this dude's resume. He has got such a stacked resume. And I feel like, yeah, he was always one of the best middleweights in the world. Like, when Adesanya was the champion, he was the number 1 guy. And I feel like these days, he still is kind of one of the best guys in the division. His only losses is to Israel Adesanya twice, who's one of the greatest middleweights of all time, and Dricus du Plessis, who's the current middleweight champion of the world. So it's not like he's lost 20 bums, and he's beaten so many people. Cannonier, Costa, Vettori, Gastelum, Darren Till, that recent fight with Ikram Aliskerov, where he completely throw-checked Ikram Aliskerov. And you know what? I think he'd do the same to Khamzat Chimaev as well. Derek Brunson, where he destroyed Brunson. He's just so good. He's got really good takedown defense, and he's got some of the best striking in the middleweight division. He's so fluid with his striking. That 1-2 head kick always seems to work. His fight IQ is amazing, and I still feel like Whittaker has a chance of becoming a champion again. Listen, if Dricus du Plessis, or if Dricus du Plessis and Adesanya fight, and Sean Strickland's next in line, Whittaker's definitely only like a fight away from a title shot. He could even say that he's the backup for the next title shot. I think he has good potential to be a champion, arguably beat Adesanya in that second fight as well. One of the greatest middleweights of all time, and how can you not like Whittaker as well? He's one of the best personalities in the UFC. He's just a nice guy. Same for a lot of the Aussie fighters in the UFC. You just can't hate Whittaker. And there was nothing better than watching Whittaker go out there and completely throw-check Ikram Aliskerov. Nothing against Ikram Aliskerov, but it's just good to see Whittaker back in the winning column. And I think him versus Dricus in a rematch, it could be competitive. Based on what we saw, Whittaker seems like he's completely changed his game plan this time around. Looked great against Ikram. Dricus looks shit against Strickland, so I think that fight could be competitive. So I hope he does get his title shot again. And he's just a top guy. You just can't hate Robert Whittaker. Then we've got Israel Adesanya, probably one of the more hated fighters in the middleweight division, but he is the second greatest middleweight of all time, and people love to shit on Adesanya's resume. They like to say that he's got a really bad resume in the UFC, but the same people saying this can't find anyone else in the middleweight division who has a better resume than him, apart from Anderson Silva. He is the second greatest middleweight of all time. listen, his fights might have not been the most entertaining. He might have not been against the top opposition at the time. Well, in fact, he was against the top opposition at the time. It just might have not been, the greatest fighters in the UFC. But he did have a good title reign, beating Whittaker twice, or his best wins. Knocked out Alex Pereira. That was definitely his career highlight. KOing Alex Pereira for the first time. Beat Yo Romero, but we don't need to talk about that fight. Had the fight with Jared Cannonier. Beat Vettori fight twice. Absolutely destroyed Paulo Costa. Had a passing of the torch moment against Anderson Silva. Had a war with Kelvin Gastelum. He's had a lot of, I wouldn't say he's had a lot of good fights, but he's had a decent resume, a decent career in the middleweight division as Adesanya. He's definitely cemented himself as one of the greats in this division, and he's one of the best strikers in the UFC, or at least he was in his prime. He wasn't the most risky striker. He wasn't really a guy who would take one to land one. But he's just a really technical striker. He's great at calculating people. His takedown defense has always been some of the best in the middleweight division. And I think he will beat Dricus du Plessis and become a champion again. So he's definitely one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Personality-wise, I can see why people don't like him. He's a bit of a weird person, and he is quite arrogant at times. He seems to just prey on the hatred of Alex Pereira. He wants to, he's preying on Pereira's downfall. And he did get absolutely destroyed by Sean Strickland. I don't think he's got too much long left in the middleweight division, because the middleweight division's changing. There's so many new faces in the middleweight division, and I think Strickland probably would beat him again, but he's one of the greatest middleweights of all time. He's one of the best strikers of all time. You just can't, discredit Adesanya for what he's done in the middleweight division. And then number one, Sean Strickland, probably should be the middleweight champion right now. This dude's personality is definitely one of the funniest in the UFC. I don't agree with everything this dude says. I think he is quite hypocritical at times, but he's definitely entertaining. That's for sure. He's probably my favorite fighter when it comes to press conferences. He's one of those fighters that you can almost guarantee is going to be a good press conference when Sean Strickland was there. His, that press conference where he had like O'Malley and Dricus and all those guys in that press conference. His first conference at UFC 276, the one where he was facing Adesanya. He's the king of press conferences. Does he have the most entertaining fighting style? He doesn't. His fight with Adesanya was, it was a fairly entertaining fight, and he had one of the biggest upsets in UFC history where he beat Adesanya. That was an I'm him moment. His fight with Costa was quite boring. His fight with Imavov was whatever. But yeah, he's definitely one of the best middleweights, and I feel like he's kind of underappreciated. People know that Strickland's good, but they assume that win over Adesanya was a fluke. Look at the people he's beaten. Finished Abbas Magomedov, beat Jack Hermansson, Brendan Allen, Imavov, Costa, Adesanya. He's already put together a really good resume in the middleweight division, and that loss to Dricus du Plessis was a very questionable loss. A lot of people thought he should have won that fight. Same for the Cannonier loss. That was a very questionable loss as well. It's awkward with Sean Strickland because everyone knows what he's going to do. He's going to walk forward with his odd style and just try and land shots, but nobody can seem to stop it, and he seems pretty unstoppable when it comes to striking in the middleweight division. The only guy that's really been able to figure him out has been Alex Pereira so far, who's one of the pound-for-pound best. I do hope he becomes a champion again, or at least he fights for a belt. He's definitely one of the best middleweights in the world, and he just has a style that no one can really seem to figure out. So definitely one of the best middleweights in the world. And then finally, Dricus du Plessis. It's a bit hard to say with Dricus du Plessis, but people have to give him credit. I remember there was a time before the Whittaker fight when Dricus du Plessis was seen as one of the worst ranked opponents. People were saying that he's one of the worst guys in the rankings, including myself. And then he gets one of the biggest upsets in UFC history, ruined everyone's parlays when he finished Robert Whittaker. And then he goes out there, okay, maybe you might say, he should have lost that fight, but he went out there, did his thing, got the belt, and became a middleweight champion. If there's one thing that you can say about Dricus du Plessis, it's that he works hard and he has a lot of heart. He has a lot of heart, does Dricus du Plessis. He might not be the best fighter in terms of technique. His stamina might be terrible, but he just pushes through. And you look at guys like Darren Till, who the second something insignificant happens in the fight, they give up. Dricus is the opposite. This guy will just keep walking forward and he'll do everything it takes to win. And that's why he's managed to become a middleweight champion. I still think Adesanya is going to beat him, but listen, you got to credit the hard work of Dricus du Plessis. You can see how much he's improved throughout his career. His stamina has got better. His stand-up has got better. And he's definitely, I think he's deserving of that middleweight belt, even if you think it was a controversial fight with Strickland. He's one of the best he's the best middleweight right now, technically on paper, so you can't discredit Dricus du Plessis. He's already had some really good wins, and you can't discredit his work ethic. So that's Dricus du Plessis. Then we got the welterweight division, Kevin Holland at number 15th. He is the uncrowned BMF. Kevin Holland is the uncrowned BMF of the welterweight division. What this dude has done, I mean, I don't remember the last time Kevin Holland fought and it wasn't on short notice. Fought Khamzat Chimaev on literally 1 day's notice when he didn't have to, and Chimaev was at the scariest. Fought Jack Del Madlena, one of the best prospects in the welterweight division, on like a week's notice. Fought Stephen Thompson, welcomed MVP into the UFC. He is the uncrowned BMF. I swear his fight with McCall at middleweight was on short notice as well. And this is only his welterweight career. This isn't even including everything he's done in the middleweight division, because this guy smokes people at middleweight. I've included the Buckley fight because even though that was at middleweight, Buckley's now down at welterweight, and he KO'd Buckley, which is a win that has aged really well. Faced first KO to Santiago Ponzinibbio, submitted Michael Chiesa. He's just the uncrowned BMF of the UFC. Great striker, dangerous power. And I feel like I don't mind the idea of Holland coming every now and then to fight on short notice. Like, we need a replacement for a ranked fighter in the welterweight or the middleweight division. Fill Kevin Holland in, let him fight on short notice. Do I ever think he's going to climb the rankings? I don't. But you just can't hate Kevin Holland. He's the definition of a BMF. He's the definition of whenever, whoever, whatever. He's a fun personality in the welterweight division. You just can't hate the guy. I don't know what's next for him. I don't exactly know what division he's going to be staying in. Considering he is ranked in the welterweight division, I assume he is going to be staying at welterweight. And he's just one of those guys you can't miss. He's a fun fighter. Submitted McCall in the first round as well. The dude, he just does whatever, man. He's kind of like, it's Kevin Holland's world and we're all living in it. Fighting on short notice. So definitely one of my favourite welterweights. Glad he's actually managed to become ranked. And yeah, he is the uncrowned BMF of the UFC. He does whatever against whoever on short notice. He doesn't have to faff around with negotiations. He just fights whenever, and you just can't hate Kevin Holland. Then we've got MVP. One of the best strikers in the UFC, definitely. Now, do I think MVP is ever going to become a champion or fight for a belt? I don't, and I didn't think he was going to even before he's lost to Ian Gary. But he's definitely not a can crusher. I remember when he was in Bellator, he had the reputation of a can crusher. There's a reason you don't want to join the UFC. And his fights with Holland and even the loss to Ian Gary proved that. I mean, he outstruck Kevin Holland for 3 rounds straight. And even against Ian Gary, we all know MVP can't grapple, right? The second you give him a grappler, he's getting folded. But even against Ian Gary, he was landing big shots against Ian Gary, who was known for his striking originally. So MVP definitely isn't a can crusher. Definitely one of the best welterweights in the world. And I think we should just keep him for fun fights. Give him guys like Jeff Neal, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, basically anyone in the welterweight division who's a fun striker and doesn't have a big threat of the takedown, because I feel like we need to keep MVP away from grapplers. That's his worst nightmare. Don't be giving him any Sean Brady's or Bilal Muhammad's or Shavkat's, but that's who he's going to lose against. But I wouldn't even mind seeing him against somebody like Jack Del Madlena. I know JDM has good grappling, but he's just a really fun guy. Even in Bellator, he had a great career as well. So I'm glad that he's got an addition to the UFC. I don't expect him to be in the UFC for ages. I think he's in his late 30s now. I don't know his exact age. I think he's like 35 or older. So hopefully he can have a few more fights. He's here for a short time, not a long time. I don't think that's how it goes. I think it's here for a fun time, not a long time. Something like that. But he's a fun guy to watch. Really unique striker. Can't wait to see what he does next. Never going to become a champion because, I mean, it's too stacked of a division and he has just lost to Ian Gary. But he's a great addition to the UFC, and I'm glad he ended off his career by joining the UFC. I remember, if this guy never joined the UFC, he would have been one of the biggest what-ifs. And even though he's not joining the UFC in his prime, again, one of these guys you can't hate. So, MVP, unique striker, fun guy to watch. I just want to watch him fight again, man. I want to watch him every pay-per-view. But next fighter we got, Vicente Luque. He's kind of fallen off a bit, and I know I don't like using the word aura, but his aura has kind of gone. I know that's a bit of a cringy word, but he doesn't have that thing anymore. I don't know if it's this killer instinct, or maybe he's just not as good, but when you get him matched up against Nick Diaz in 2024, you know something's up. He's just had a couple of tricky past few fights, obviously. Lost to Bilal Muhammad, got finished by Buckley, and his last win was Rafael dos Santos, who doesn't even know what division he wants to stay in. But it's hard to admit that Luque has done. No, it's hard to admit that he's done a lot of bad things in the welterweight. What am I on about? It's hard to admit that Vicente Luque hasn't accomplished a lot of good things in the welterweight division. Beating Tyrone Woodley, I know Woodley was kind of washed at the time. He has got a win over Bilal Muhammad. The fight where he absolutely destroyed Mark Perry. He beat Michael Chiesa. He beat Jalen Turner, Randy Brown. He's got a lot of good wins. And he's got a lot of experience against the top guys. Leon Edwards, Bilal Muhammad, Jeff Neal. But he kind of got battered by Jeff Neal, though. I just don't know what's next for Luque. I don't know if he's had a bit of a period of time where he's kind of fallen off a bit. I don't know if he's washed. I don't know if he's out of his prime or anything. because he hasn't looked as good, nearly as good in his last few fights as he did back in 2020 and 2021. Hopefully he can bounce back, because I remember when this guy was on his come up, people were hyping this guy up as like the killer of the welterweight division, the dangerous silent killer, and he's super dangerous. He's a great striker. His takedown defense is good. I just think the welterweight division has caught up for him. I do fully expect him to go out there and absolutely demolish Nick Diaz, but at the end of the day, I don't think anyone in the roster can't demolish Nick Diaz, so he's a fun guy. He's a very, very dangerous guy. He's kind of just fallen off in these past few years. Then we got Neil Magny, the greatest gatekeeper in UFC history. He's one of those fighters in the UFC that you just can't bet on, because it's like, this dude is so inconsistent. He gets finished by Shavkat, well, he didn't get finished, but he got battered by Ian Gary. And he keeps losing fights fairly consistently. Loses to guys like Damian Maia, Santiago Ponzinibbio, or Michael Chiesa. And then, you know, he's beating former champions like Robbie Lawler. He beat Jeff Neal, who's one of the best boxers in the division. Beat Kelvin Gastelum and D-Rod. Shut down the prospect of Mike Malott not too long ago as well. He's just so inconsistent. He deserves his spot in the rankings because of the people he's beaten. He's just so random. I feel like whenever a Neil Magny fight's on, you always want to pick against him, especially when he's facing a prospect, but he just finds a way every now and then. It's kind of like some fights he'll lock in and then some fights he won't. Anyone who's got an ounce of talent and will beat Neil Magny, but anyone who's not top 5 worthy will lose to Neil Magny. It's kind of weird. He's just so inconsistent. I don't really know what to say about him. Seems like a chill dude. I kind of don't like what Ian Gary did to him, and we'll get onto Ian Gary later on in this video, but he's a chill guy. He'll pick up wins every now and then. Fraud check to Mike Malott. That's probably the peak of his career. The best gatekeeper in the UFC. If there was a pound-for-pound list for the gatekeepers, he'd be number 1. So, Neil Magny, greatest gatekeeper in the UFC. Then we got Buckley. I want to be a fan of Buckley, but ever since he took to Twitter after his win over Ruziboyev, it's hard to like this guy. He's been calling everyone out. He had one of the worst call-outs in UFC history when he called out Conor McGregor. He's still yet to call out any welterweight. And he's just, you know, the way he's trashing people on Twitter, he's just not that likable. And I wanted to like him. He had everything in his hands to become a star. After he beat Ruziboyev in the co-main event of St. Louis, if he would have called out another welterweight, he would have got a big fight. And, you know, the fans would have been on his side as well. He's completely flushed his fans down the drain. But he's definitely moving to welterweight. Seems like the right idea. I mean, went out there and finished Vicente Luque, which is a good win. Shut down Ruziboyev, which is a really good win. Obviously got KO'd by Kevin Holland, but to be fair, that was in the middleweight division. He's just a really good guy as well. He's dangerous on the feet. He's got one of the greatest KOs in UFC history. He's also a really good wrestler, as we saw against Ruziboyev. He's just a well-rounded guy, powerful guy, dangerous guy. I don't think he beats any of the elite guys in the division. I don't think he beats a Leon, a Shavkat, an Ian Gary, any of those guys. But I think he could climb the rankings. You know, him versus Burns, him versus Sean Brady. There's a lot of fun fights for him. Man, the dude just needs to stay on Twitter or get a new PR manager, because it's kind of like he's flushing his fan base down the drain. But I'm excited to see what he does next, especially after the way he's been performing recently. Then we got Jeff Neal, one of the best boxers in the UFC. Again, I feel like everyone in the welterweight division so far has been pretty chill. There's nothing you can really say badly about Jeff Neal. I wish his output was a little bit higher, because you look at his performance against Vicente Luque, absolutely demolished him. Great display of boxing. And same thing for Ponzinibbio or Mike Perry. Knocked out Bilal Muhammad back in the day as well. But again, he's proven that he's not able to fight the elite guys in the division. Lost to Shavkat, there's no shame in that. Lost to Ian Gary, no shame in that. And that was a very close fight as well. The Stephen Thompson's one of the best strikers in UFC history. Neil Magny, a bit of a dodgy loss, but Magny's a gatekeeper and he's inconsistent. So I think he's always going to be around the welterweight division. I can definitely see him handing out a few fraud checks. He's just not elite. He's not good enough well-rounded wise. He's a really good boxer. He's got really good defense. And as a striker, he's just really dangerous and he's good at piecing people up. But I think he needs a little bit more to his arsenal if he wants to, if he needs these title aspirations. I don't think he really has aspirations of becoming a champion, but he's just a solid boxer, solid striker. Nothing bad you can really say about Jeff Neal apart from that. Then we've got Stephen Thompson. Definitely one of the best and unique strikers. I mean, first of all, he's probably the nicest fighter in UFC history. I don't think Stephen Thompson has ever said a bad thing about anyone. So if there was a belt for the nicest guy in the UFC, he'd definitely be the champion. And he's just a really slick striker. Probably got one of the best karate bases in the UFC. He showed that against Luque. He showed that against Masvidal. He showed that when he absolutely destroyed Kevin Holland a few years ago. Beat Jeff Neal as well. He's got a lot of good wins. Beat Whittaker back when Whittaker was at welterweight as well. He's just a really good kickboxer. But his grappling is what lets him down. Similar to MVP, he's just a really good striker whose grappling lets him down. His takedown defense isn't that good. Got submitted by Shavkat, got 50-45 by Bilal Muhammad, lost to Gilbert Burns because of the grappling. Woodley was able to beat him as well after their first draw. Lost to Darren Till, but that was a very close fight. You could have given that to anyone, and it was home crowd advantage for Darren Till. Got KO'd by Anthony Pettis, but the point is, if Stephen Thompson had takedown defense, it wouldn't surprise me if he was to win a belt one day because he's such a good striker. It's very, very rare that we ever see Stephen Thompson get outstruck on the feet. I can't see anyone outstriking him on the feet. Pettis was able to land the shot. Till did well. But apart from that, I don't really see any pure striker beating Stephen Thompson in the UFC. He's getting old. He probably doesn't have that many fights left, but definitely one of the greatest strikers in UFC history. And again, one of these guys that you just can't hate. Then we got Sean Brady, kind of underrated. Most people remember Sean Brady for getting finished by Bilal Muhammad a couple of years ago, and even though that has kind of aged badly, not because Bilal Muhammad's been doing badly, I mean, he's one of the best welterweights in the world, but because losing to Bilal Muhammad on the feet doesn't necessarily look as good on paper, but Bilal Muhammad's his only loss. He's a really good grappling prospect. He beat Jake Matthews, beat Marco Chiesa in his last fight, got an impressive win over Kelvin Gastelum, in which I actually picked Gastelum to win that fight. And he's now got a main event against Gilbert Burns. And if he can beat Gilbert Burns, everyone's going to forget about that loss to Bilal Muhammad because he's going to be right back in the title picture. And he does have chance. If he can beat Gilbert Burns, which I don't think is, I'm not going to say it's an easy thing to do, but I don't think it's an extremely difficult thing to do considering Burns' current state of his career. He could be in title talks very soon. He's just a really good submission artist, really good grappler. His boxing's decent as well. Again, I don't see him beating the elite guys. Bilal Muhammad beat him. I think anyone who's fairly well-rounded, like an Ian Gary or a Leon Edwards or a Shavkat, could probably beat Sean Brady. But I think he definitely has the potential to make the top 5. And he's a really good grappling prospect. So, yeah, really good grappler is Sean Brady. I think he'll probably make the top 5 one day. Ian Gary. We talked about Wonderboy being one of the nicest guys in the UFC. Now we've got the polar opposite. The most hated guy in the UFC right now. I mean, he's definitely the most hated. He's just not very likable. Again, one of those fighters. I remember when he first joined the UFC, and people were calling Ian Gary the nice Conor McGregor. People were calling this guy the nice version of Conor McGregor, and how that has aged so poorly now. He's not bad. He's a decent striker. I think his striking kind of got exposed a little bit when he fought MVP because I always thought he was this elite striker, especially after he KO'd Daniel Rodriguez. But when you can't finish Neil Magny, when you had a very close pitter-patter fight with Jeff Neal, and then when you get outstruck by MVP, his striking isn't that good, but he is becoming well-rounded. He's doing a lot of work at shoot-air box. His grappling's improving. He's undefeated. Do I ever think he's going to become a champion? No. I as of right now, from what I've seen, I don't think he beats Leon Edwards, but we need to see him face a real legit contender. We need to see Ian Gary against somebody like Kobe. We need to see Ian Gary against a JDM, a Shavkat. I need to see how he performs against an elite opponent because so far, he's beaten the good people in the welterweight division. He hasn't beaten anyone great as of yet. And it's not like he's going out there and destroying these good fighters. He's going to a decision. He's having fairly close fights. The MVP fight, I mean, he won that because of his grappling, but he got outstruck on the feet. The Jeff Neal fight, basically nothing happened. The Neil Magny fight was dominant, but it's Neil Magny at the end of the day, so I think he's going to break the top 5. He's definitely one of the best welterweights in the world. But as of right now, from what I've seen, I don't see him becoming a champion. So, yeah, definitely unlikable. He's a decent fighter, though. But we do need to see a couple improvements. I think he needs to stop being so gun-shy. Gilbert Burns. Again, one of the nicest dudes in the UFC, man. A guy that you can't really root against. He's fought pretty much all the top guys in the division. He fought Woodley. He fought Usman. He fought Bilal, JDM. He's just a really solid guy in the division. He's fought for the belt, obviously, against Usman. Actually, landed some great shots against Kamaru Usman, then ended up getting finished, but that was prime Usman. I think the Usman that fought Burns was prime Usman, to be honest. And he's got some really good wins. Tyron Woodley, Stephen Thompson, got that win at Jorge Masvidal at UFC 287. I don't think he's going to beat any of these elite guys. I do think he's on his way out. He fought the up-and-coming JDM. Got KO'd by JDM, but to be honest, he was kind of winning that fight was Gilbert Burns. Fought Khamzat Chimaev, gave Chimaev his toughest test in UFC history, at the time at least. Fought Bilal Muhammad, that was a really boring fight, and plus Gilbert Burns was injured, and then obviously lost to Prime Usman. So he hasn't really had any bad losses. He's lost to the elite guys in the UFC. I just want to see him. Fight, man. He's one of those fighters that comes to scrap every single time. He's never in a boring fight. He's always there to scrap. He's got really good jiu-jitsu. I'll probably say he's the best pure submission artist in the UFC. And I actually think he'd be a big threat to Leon Edwards. So for the welterweight division, I'm going to say that Gilbert Burns is probably the toughest test. Well, not the toughest test, but definitely just one of the guys that come to scrap every single time, and you just can't hate him. Then we've got JDM. I actually think Jack Della Maddalena is the future of the UFC. I think out of everybody in the UFC welterweight division, I think JDM will become a champion one day. I actually think out of everyone in the welterweight division, he poses the biggest threat to Leon Edwards. He is the best boxer in the division. He's got the best combinations. He's got the most dangerous striking. And he's got judo. And he's got jiu-jitsu. And he's got submission defense. He's so well-rounded as Jack Della Maddalena. He's undefeated in the UFC as well. That knockout over Gilbert Burns completely outstruck Kevin Holland, which is impressive. Knocked out Randy Brown, who's one of the best unranked middleweight welterweights right now. I think he's the future of the UFC. Everyone's riding on the hype of Shavkat, and don't get me wrong, Shavkat's dangerous too, and we'll talk about him in a second. But JDM, I think he poses the biggest threat to Leon Edwards out of everybody in the UFC right now, and I truly believe he will be a future champion. We haven't seen him face, we've seen him face Gilbert Burns, but I'd love to see him face a Shavkat or an Ian Gary or one of the other elite guys in the division. But JDM, he's so good, man. I think he's going to fight for a belt one day. I honestly think he's going to become a champion. He's dangerous. He's a great striker. His judo and submissions are amazing. This guy is the dark horse of the division because everyone's eyes are on Shavkat. None of the people are looking at JDM. He's just that good, man. And a guy that you can't hate. So I think he's a future champion, to be honest. Then we got Colby Covington. Again, one of the most hated dudes in the division. I don't think he deserves that ranking at number 4. His win over Tyron Woodley, it was a good win at the time, but again, Woodley was washed and it was an injury win. The fight with Jorge Masvidal, well done, you beat Masvidal, who hasn't won since 2019, in and out of MMA. He beat old Robbie Lawler, old Damian Maia. He hasn't really got any good wins, I'm going to be honest. Everyone he's fought and beaten have been washed. But that being said, the only people that he has lost to are the best in the division. He lost to Usman twice. Well, his notable losses. He lost to Usman twice, and that was when Usman was in his prime. He lost to Leon Edwards, who's currently the defending welterweight champion of the world. I just wish he'd be a little bit more open to fighting other people. I feel like he's kind of taking the paychecks and he doesn't really have title aspirations anymore. He wants the easy way for the belt. Didn't want to fight Ian Gary, which I don't really like. Doesn't really want to fight anyone unless it gives him an immediate title shot or he's getting a title shot. Got one of the most undeserving title shots as well against Leon Edwards. Beating Masvidal and being on a one-fight winning streak doesn't get you a title shot, in my opinion. He's not really a likable guy. His performance against Leon Edwards was terrible. I don't really know what's in the future for this guy because he does duck a lot of people, but I guess, at least he's brought some personality to the welterweight division. A lot of these welterweights, they're nice, but they don't really have personality. At least Colby Covington has brought some great press conference moments. That press conference with Masvidal, the ones with Usman. I will say, his press conferences are entertaining, so he's an entertaining guy, not really likable, not going to be a champion, but yeah, it is what it is. Then we got Shavkat, probably the most hyped up welterweight right now, and for good reason. He's finished every single fighter that he's ever faced. That is an insane statistic. The fact that he's not only undefeated, but he's finished everyone he's ever gone against. He's so impressive, is Shavkat. The way that he's able to latch up submissions from everywhere, his grappling offense, and even his striking. Okay, he might have some flaws in his striking, like his head movement and his boxing, but he's just a really good slick striker. He's got some crafty striking as well, but he does like to go for the grappling base. Very, very grappling heavy against Stephen Thompson. Found the submission. Jeff Neal, I will admit, Jeff Neal definitely landed some big shots, but again was able to find the finish. And it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. Sure that against Neil Magny. I think Leon Edwards is a tough fight for him. I think JDM is a tough fight for him. But in my opinion, after Bilal versus Leon, he is going to be the fighter for the belt next. At least I think that anyway. I think he deserves his title shot. Everything he's done, he's never lost, he's finished everybody. And even though I guess he hasn't beaten one of the elite guys in the division, he is definitely one of the more elite guys in the division. And I just want to see this dude face a Leon or a JDM or somebody else higher ranked in the welterweight division because he's that good. So, Shavkat, probably one of the most hyped people in the division right now, and for good reason. And I think everyone just kind of wants the Bilal Leon period to go over so that we can finally see this guy get his shot. So, I just want to see this dude get his title shot. Then we got Bilal Muhammad. He's just boring, isn't he? I don't want to be one of these people that just kind of hate on Bilal Muhammad for the sake of hating on him. He's just not that interesting. His press conferences and him on the mic, he's not that likable. His fights are kind of boring. His fight with Gilbert Burns were boring. And every single one of his other notable wins have been boring. The fight with Sean Brady, fair play, he got the finish. I think he's kind of just like a better version of Colby Covington. He's got better wrestling. He actually has better fight IQ because he uses his pressure to his advantage. And his striking is probably better than Colby Covington's at this moment in time. His striking isn't great, but it's not bad at the same time. He outstruck Gilbert Burns. He has been KO'd by Jeff Neal and Vicente Luque. Do I think he beats Leon Edwards? No. I think Leon Edwards beats him. It looked like the way that first fight was going, Leon had the upper hand, and I think that's going to happen again. But there's no doubting that Bilal Muhammad's definitely one of the best welterweights in the world. He's deserved his title shot whether you like him or not. I'm interested to see what the UFC do with Belal after, if he loses to Leon, because I don't think they're going to give him any more big fights, but he's just a good wrestler. He's just a really good wrestler who's improved his striking and has managed to get a title shot. He's not the most interesting. He's not the most likable, but not everyone in the UFC can be likable. Not everyone in the UFC can be interesting. To make us appreciate the fun fighters, we have to have boring fighters like Belal. We'll see how he does at UFC 3 or 4. I don't think he's going to win, but he's got the title shot. And then we've got Kamaru Usman. I mean, just look at the resume. One of the greatest welterweights of all time. I'd probably say he's top 3 greatest welterweights in UFC history. This dude's era, he looked like he was unbeatable. When Kamaru Usman was in his era of being a champion, I genuinely couldn't pick out one fighter in the UFC that I thought was going to beat Usman. He looked unstoppable. Especially, the one thing I loved about watching Usman as well was the way that during his title reign, we got to see him progress as a fighter. He started off as this kind of one-dimensional wrestler, like he did in the first fight with Masvidal, where he kind of just toe-stomping people, and the fight with Tyron Woodley, and it seemed like he was going to be one of these boring champions. But we saw as he went on, he evolved. He knocked out Jorge Masvidal. He outstruck and finished Gilbert Burns. He broke Colby Covington's jaw and then beat him in the rematch. He evolved as a fighter, and it looked like this dude was completely unstoppable in the welterweight division. I mean, look at his resume. Woodley, the win over Leon Edwards, 2 wins over Covington, 2 wins over Masvidal, Burns, Strickland when he was at welterweight, the Sanjos and Maia. He's beaten some great people, and during his era of the welterweight division, he was untouchable. Obviously, lost to Leon Edwards, and as of right now, I don't know what's next for him. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, got KO'd by Edwards in a fight that he was winning, then lost the decision, and now last year he lost to Chimaev. His knees are bad, he's getting older. He's definitely out of his prime, but I still think there's a lot of people that Usman is able to put out. I want to see him fight. I don't know if it's going to be at welterweight or middleweight. I just want to see Usman go out there and have a performance that reminds us of Usman back in 2021. So, one of the greatest welterweights of all time. Well-rounded. Definitely kind of washed these days, but I just want to see Usman fight one more time. And his performance against Chimaev wasn't even bad. It was an arguable draw, so definitely one of the best welterweights. And then Leon Edwards, does he have that same thing that Usman had in the sense that, you know, he looks unbeatable? No. But he is super well-rounded right now. There were 2 wins over Kamaru Usman are some of the best wins that any welterweight in the UFC has right now. Not only KOing Kamaru Usman to win the belt, but also beating him by decision. He has one of the best title wins in KOs in UFC history as well. Again, not one of these super interesting fighters, but he completely shut down the game of Colby Covington, beat Vicente Luque, battered Nate Diaz for 24 minutes, and has some other good wins as well. And I think he was personally winning that Belal Muhammad fight, and we're going to see how they do at UFC 3 or 4. And his only notable loss is a guy that he's already beaten twice and he's 2-1 against. So he's definitely the best welterweight in the world right now. Is he that interesting? Not exactly, but maybe he turns up against Belal Muhammad. We'll have to see. A really, really technical striker, probably one of the most technical fighters in the UFC right now. Doesn't want to risk it. Also, his grappling has improved a lot. We talked about Usman and how his striking improved. Leon's kind of like the opposite. We all knew he had good striking, but it seems to be that his grappling has improved. First guy to take down Usman in the UFC. Took down Colby Covington. His grappling has improved so much. He's super well-rounded. And I know there's a few welterweights that pose a threat to Leon Edwards, but without a doubt, he's definitely the best welterweight in the world. And I hope he does stay champion for a while, because I don't know if I hope he stays champion, but I hope he beats Belal Muhammad, put it that way. So, best welterweight in the world, and his wins over Usman definitely, you know, showed how good he is. So, definitely one of the best in the world right now. Then we got the lightweight division. Number 15th, we got Bobby Green, or technically now it's King Green. If you go into the UFC rankings, he's officially changed his name to King Green. So, I don't know what he's going to be announced as. Maybe he's announced as King Green. But Bobby Green's a bit of a weird one, because there's some performances where he looks amazing, and there's some performances where he just looks untouchable in that fight. Like his recent fight at UFC 300, he just battered Jim Miller. He beat Nasrat Haqparast, the dominant performance over Tony Ferguson, shutting down the prospect of Grant Dawson. He's boxing slick, and he's got really good takedown defense, and he's just super defensive. But then there's other performances where he kind of just gets a little broad, like the fight with Islam Makhachev, but fair enough, that's number 1 guy, where he got KO'd by Poirier ages ago. But even the recent performances, the fight with Jalin Turner, one of the most brutal knockouts in UFC history, where he got finished by Drew Dobbs. It was a bit of a weird one. I find him a bit inconsistent. Personality-wise, it's always good to have someone who's actually going to bring personality to the lightweight division. He comes around, he's got some good personality, he's always fun at press conferences, is Bobby Green. He's just a really fun boxer. I feel like there's no middle ground, though. It's either him absolutely outboxing people until he finishes them, or it's him getting finished pretty early on. I feel like there's no middle ground with Bobby Green. And I actually do think he's going to absolutely batter Paddy Pimblett at UFC 304. I think that's actually a stylistic nightmare for Paddy Pimblett because, like I said, Green's got really good takedown defense, and on the feet, he's so slick with his hands. I think he's going to piece up Paddy Pimblett. So, really good boxer. One of the better guys in the top 10 to top 15 slash unranked area of the lightweight division. He's just really good as a boxer. I just don't think he's consistent enough, and he doesn't really tend to pick up momentum. It seems like whenever he picks up a win, he then picks up a loss. But he's a fun personality to have in the lightweight division. He definitely stirs a lot of, I'm not going to say beef, but definitely stirs a lot of controversy with other fighters, which is good to see in the lightweight division. So Bobby Green, he's a funny guy. He's a fun personality to have. Not the most consistent, but, you know, every now and then he'll just put on a dominant performance like he did in his last fight with Jim Miller. So I definitely think he deserves the ranking, but he's definitely not one of the best ranked lightweights in the world. And then we've got number 14th, Rafael dos Anjos. I don't know what the division this dude is trying to stay at, because there'll be some fights where he's fighting at welterweight and there'll be some where he's fighting at lightweight. He's a legend in the lightweight division. Like, you look at this dude's resume, he has fought everyone. He's fought Khabib Nurmagomedov, he was scheduled to fight McGregor, he fought Nate Diaz, Benson Henderson, Anthony Pettis, Tony Ferguson, Eddie Alvarez, Gamrot, Fiziev. This dude's resume is insane. He has fought everyone, he doesn't duck anyone. And he's not even, I mean, he's definitely fallen off these past couple of fights. He seems to be a lot less consistent with his wins. He's definitely not as active. But it was only a few years ago when he put that performance of a lifetime against Renato Moicano. He absolutely destroyed Moicano when they fought a few years ago. I think that was on the Masvidal card. He's got some decent wins. Like I said, Diaz, when he beat Diaz, when Diaz was on his come-up. Pettis, Donald Cerrone twice. He's definitely lost his momentum recently, and I feel like he's only one loss away from being kicked out the rankings. But at the same time, he hasn't really lost to any bad opponents. He lost to Vicente Luque last year, and then recently he lost to Gamrot, who's probably going to be challenging for a belt in a couple of fights. He lost to Fiziev, who's one of the best strikers in the division, and the other guys were the best at the time. He didn't lose to Ferguson when Ferguson was washed. He lost to Alvarez when Alvarez was at his best. He lost to Khabib, so he isn't like he's lost to anyone bad. He's just overall a legend in the lightweight division. I'm hoping he does retire soon, because this dude has been in the UFC for so long. But imagine Pimblett beats Bobby Green, and then they do Rafael dos Anjos versus Pimblett, and he just absolutely batters Paddy Pimblett. That'd be pretty satisfying. I think he's just trying to collect a couple paychecks for his last couple of fights in the UFC, but yeah, he's probably the biggest legend in the lightweight division right now who's actually ranked. The fact that he's still ranked is insane if you look how long he's been in the UFC. So Rafael dos Anjos, just a legend in the lightweight division. Then we have Jalen Turner. This dude really has potential to be one of the best lightweights in the world, because he's so dangerous. There's some fights where Jalen Turner just goes out there and he looks unstoppable. I mean, that Dan Hooker fight nearly KO'd Dan Hooker with a head kick, and it was a close decision in which he lost. The Renato Moicano fight, he was a few seconds of finishing Renato Moicano at UFC 300. He could be getting a big fight right now in the lightweight division. He could have been getting matched up against somebody like Beneil Dariush. But he always fumbles it. He fumbled the Dan Hooker fight. Well, I guess that wasn't really his fault, but he definitely fumbled the Moicano fight. But he's still such a dangerous guy. Submitting Brad Riddell, got one of the most brutal KOs in UFC history against Bobby Green. Now, I do think he does struggle to make the lightweight division. I don't know if he's planning on staying at lightweight permanently, because he is a really big lightweight. He's missed weight before, and he's probably one of the biggest lightweights on the roster. And I do think he tends to fumble finishes a lot. But he's just such a dangerous guy. He's kind of like one of those kill or be killed fighters. It's either him getting finished, him getting in an absolute war, or he's going out there and delivering a brutal finish. He's just a dangerous guy in the lightweight division. I don't really know what's next for him, though, because he's beat Bobby Green, and then he's lost, obviously, to Renato Moicano, and he's lost to Gamrot, but he's also lost to Frivola. I don't really know what's next in his career. I matched him up against Diego Ferreira, but he's just a fun, dangerous guy in the lightweight division to see. Never really in a boring fight either, so he's definitely one of my favourite lightweights to watch, but it's so frustrating whenever he fumbles these finishes like he did at UFC 300. Then we got Benoit Saint-Denis, the biggest fraud check in UFC history now. It wasn't the biggest, but this guy had so much momentum coming into that Dustin Poirier fight, to the point where getting a win over Matt Frivola granted him a fight against top 3, I think it was, Dustin Poirier. Yes, he got fraud checked and he got dropped and KO'd by Dustin Poirier, but to be fair, he didn't look too bad in that first round. He had a very grappling-heavy approach in that first round against Dustin Poirier that seemed to be working, and then he got caught by a big shot in that second round. But to be fair to him, he did have staph infection. I'm not making excuses for him. He looked great in all of his other fights. The fight with Moises, the finish over Matt Frivola, and I still think he's one of the most dangerous dudes in the lightweight division, because he's got really good grappling. His submissions are underrated. His wrestling's really good, as we saw in that first round against Dustin Poirier, and he's an absolute killer on the feet. I am picking him to beat Renato Moicano, who's matched up against for UFC Paris. He's now got a main event opportunity, and I think he has potential to be a big star in the lightweight division. I feel like the Poirier fight, he got rushed in too quickly. We've seen multiple times when you get rushed in too quickly, it doesn't work. We saw it with Ikram Aliskov against Whittaker. This is another example. I still think he has potential to be a top 5 fighter if he just takes his time. The UFC kind of did him dirty by putting him against Poirier too easily, but he's such a dangerous guy. He's a killer, and I think he's the future of French MMA. Cyril Gane seems like he has no interest in fighting for a belt. He seems like he has no interest in legacy. So let's have Benoit Saint-Denis as the new big French star. So I think he has a lot of potential. Need to see how he does against Moicano. I think he's going to finish him, but yeah, definitely a dangerous guy in the lightweight division. Dan Hooker. I just want to see this dude fight again. Like, I know I've said this about a couple of fighters already on this list, but he is never in a boring fight. That fight with Jalen Turner, which was his last fight, obviously got injured, which is why he's been out for a year, but that was such a fun fight. And he's just such a killer, is Dan Hooker as well. He's had so many scraps and he's fought so many top people. Welcome Michael Chandler to the UFC. He had an absolute war with Dustin Poirier. I'd argue that's probably one of the best fights in UFC history. Beat Nasrat Haqparast. The fight with Paul Felder was amazing. Beat Jim Miller. The Gilbert Burns fight when Burns was at lightweight. He's just a fun guy. Do I ever think he's ever going to become a champion or make it to the top 5 rankings? I don't. I don't think he's consistent enough. I don't think he's active enough, and I feel like he is kind of one-dimensional. He's got good striking, but apart from that, he is kind of, he's kind of a bit of a one-trick pony on the feet, but he's still just a really fun guy. He's a bit of an odd personality. I don't like how sometimes he makes excuses after his fight, so I wouldn't say I'm a massive fan of his personality, but when it comes to fighting, he's one of those guys in the lightweight division that is never in a boring fight. So I just want him to return to the octagon. I think he might be taking on Gamrot at UFC 305. I've heard rumours of that, but I just want him to be back soon because he's a fun guy. Then we got Renato Moicano. This dude has taken the opportunity that was gifted to him, and he's one of the most exciting guys in the lightweight division. I mean, personality-wise, on the mic, he's definitely one of the funniest. He's got broken English, but his post-fight press conferences are amazing. He's probably the GOAT of post-fight press conferences. And he's put together a bit of a winning streak, beating Brad Riddell. Then he finished Drew Dober, and I think it was a co-main event of a fight night, which was amazing, when he was able to get that win over Drew Dober. He didn't finish him, but he got the decision win. And then got that win over Jalen Turner. When he got dropped by Jalen Turner, we all thought he was going in Turner's direction. Then he pulled off that comeback submission, or TKO, against Jalen Turner and got the finish at UFC 300. And now he's managed to get a main event opportunity against Benoit Saint-Denis. And like I said, I am picking Benoit Saint-Denis to win this fight. I think Renato Moicano is really talented as a grappler. He's a really good submission artist. I just think his hands and his striking is where it lacks, as we saw in that fight with Rafael Fiziev when he got KO'd, and where he got absolutely destroyed against Rafael dos Anjos. But if he can sharpen up his striking, he's got the personality, he's got the grappling, he has everything it takes to become a big star in the lightweight division. So I can't wait to see him back. And even though I am, picking Benoit Saint-Denis to win, I would not mind at all if Moicano wins that fight, gets on the mic and starts calling out the lightweight division, because he's one of the most exciting lightweights in and out the octagon right now. So you just can't hate Moicano. Then we've got Max Holloway. Now, this is a bit of a weird one because, as you can see, I've only got one notable win and one notable loss. So I'm talking about strictly the lightweight division Max Holloway. We'll talk about the featherweight Max Holloway when we get onto the featherweight division, but his fight with Justin Gaethje was sick, man. Like, after the fight with Dustin Poirier a few years ago, I heard a lot of people, and including myself, we were kind of writing off Max Holloway, saying that he's probably not going to be able to move up and beat Justin Gaethje. But to be fair, that fight with Dustin Poirier was on short notice, so we didn't have that much time to adjust to the new weight class. And we saw against Justin Gaethje, that was such a good performance. Battered Justin Gaethje for 4 rounds straight, and then in the 5th round, got the KO, broke his nose, dropped him. That was such a good performance against Justin Gaethje. He looked amazing in that fight. And I wouldn't be mad if he stuck in the lightweight division. Obviously, I would prefer him to go to 145 and face Poirier for the belt. But the fact that he's ranked like number 8th in the lightweight division, I don't think makes any sense. He should be ranked much higher than number 8th after that performance against Justin Gaethje. But if we're talking about strictly the lightweight division, Max Holloway, top 3 fighter in the division, one of the best boxers in the UFC. We'll talk about him as a featherweight, which is where most of his career is held, in a second. But at the lightweight division, I hope he does fight at lightweight again. And like, him versus Poirier again would be sick. Him versus any top 5 fighter. Yeah, Max Holloway, his lightweight fight against Gaethje was amazing. Rafael Fiziev, again, another fighter on this list that has been injured, and I just want to see him come back. Obviously, got injured against Gamrot. He's still such a good striker. He's probably the most entertaining striker in the lightweight division. He's such a slick Thai boxer. His Muay Thai is amazing. He's come up to the lightweight. He's come up to the fight with Justin Gaethje was so fun to see. KOing Renato Moicano. beating Jalin Turner, Bobby Green, Dos Santos. He's already beaten 4 ranked opponents already. I just want to see this dude return. He had a big fight with Justin Gaethje, and it isn't even like he got fraud checked. I know a lot of people like throwing the word fraud check around, but he didn't even get fraud checked against Justin Gaethje. That fight, it was a very, very close fight. A lot of people thought Fiziev won that fight, and that was definitely his biggest fight to date at UFC 286. And then he fought Gamrot, which was a stylistic nightmare. And to be fair, he didn't even do that badly against Gamrot, because obviously he got injured in the fight as well. I just want to see him come back. I'd like to see him come back against somebody like Dan Hooker or Beneil Dariush. I just want to see Fiziev back because he's probably the most entertaining striker in the lightweight division right now. So I just want to see Rafael Fiziev come back. Such a fun guy to watch on the feet. And if this dude can improve his grappling and his stamina, because obviously that was lacking in the Justin Gaethje fight, this dude could be fighting for a belt one day, and I'm being serious because his striking is just that good. Never really been outstruck in the UFC apart from that 3rd round against Gaethje when he was completely gassed. But yeah, I just want to see him come back. Then we got Beneil Dariush. I still think Beneil Dariush is one of the best lightweights in the world. I don't think he's ever going to win a belt. I don't think he's ever going to get a title shot or anything like that, but he's still one of the most skilled. You look at the guys he's lost to recently, Charles Oliveira, former champion, Arman Tsarukyan is going to be fighting for a belt next, and even though he has kind of become a bit chinny in his last few fights, you got to remember the performances of him before that. Mateusz Gamrot is one of the best lightweights right now. He's put together a massive streak. He's the only guy recently to actually get a win over Mateusz Gamrot at UFC 218. He absolutely battered him. The performance against Tony Ferguson, beat Tony Ferguson before he was officially washed, beat Drew Dober, Thiago Moises, beating Diego Ferreira twice, which has aged really well because now we know that Ferreira is one of the best unranked lightweights in the world, beating Michael Johnson. He's just super dangerous, is Beneil Dariush. He's such a dangerous fighter. He's just good everywhere as well. He's well-rounded. He's a good submission artist, but on the feet, he has the capability to piece people up. He's been out for a while. Hopefully, his chin isn't gone too bad because he definitely looked very chinny against Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira, but I think he definitely has what it takes to get another amazing performance like he did against Gamrot at UFC 280. Again, I don't know how long's left for his career. I don't think he's got too much of a bright future in the lightweight division. I think every one of the top lightweights probably beats him, but I think he definitely has the capability to put on a dominant performance again. So Beneil Dariush, dangerous guy, just had a couple shaky past few fights. Michael Chandler, this dude has flushed his career down the drain recently because he wants that fight with Conor McGregor, and I hope he does get the fight with Conor McGregor because he's literally sacrificed years off his career for it, and I do want to see that fight, to be honest. He's just a fun fighter. Like, Michael Chandler's one of those fighters in the UFC that you could bet money on that he's going to be a fun fight. He's a very explosive striker. He's got dangerous hands. And as Arman Tsarukyan perfectly said, Michael Chandler, you can almost guarantee he's going to have a fun fight, which he ends up losing. He's in the most consistent in the UFC. In the UFC alone, he's only beaten Dan Hooker and Tony Ferguson. Beat both of them by KO, and it just showed how explosive he was. He also beat Eddie Alvarez and Benson Henderson twice outside the UFC. And in the UFC, that fight with Charles Oliveira for the belt, he was moments away from winning the lightweight belt. He nearly finished Charles Oliveira. He came closest to finishing Charles Oliveira compared to every other lightweight that beat him or that lost to him. He almost finished Oliveira and became the lightweight champion. He had a back and forth fight with Justin Gaethje. His fight with Dustin Poirier nearly finished Dustin Poirier. The problem with Michael Chandler is his fight IQ. He's got terrible fight IQ. He goes for the takedowns when he rocks an opponent. And I feel like if he had good fight IQ, he has everything it takes to become a champion. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think out of every lightweight, Michael Chandler has the best chance. Well, not the best chance, but he's a stylistic nightmare for Islam Makhachev. Because if you think about it, Michael Chandler, he's an explosive wrestler with dangerous hands who puts on the pressure, and he's also got great wrestling to back it up and great explosive wrestling. He's super strong and explosive for the lightweight division as well. I think he's a nightmare matchup for most people in the division. If this dude had fight IQ, he would be a top lightweight in the world, and I hope he does get his fight with Conor McGregor because he's been sacrificing years off his life. We could have had so many fun fights with Michael Chandler involved if he didn't wait for that fight with McGregor, so I hope he does get the fight. Very motivational on the mic, a bit of a dirty fighter in the octagon, but he's just one of those fighters that you just want to see him fight. You know it's going to be a banger, and you know he can switch to lights off anyone at any time, so definitely one of the funnest lightweights in the world. Mateusz Gamrot, maybe not one of the funnest lightweights in the world. I feel like Gamrot's one of those fighters that if he was to randomly get erased from the UFC, nobody would realise it. I feel like with Gamrot, he's in a bit of a tricky position because he's a good wrestler, but he's not one of the best wrestlers like Makhachev or Tsarukyan. He's a decent... it's just hard to describe Gamrot because he's not overly exciting. He's not the best wrestler. He's not really consistent either because even though he has got a lot of good wins, the Arman Tsarukyan fight was a very close fight, which a lot of people thought Arman Tsarukyan should have won. The Fiziev fight ended in an injury. The Jalin Turner fight fight was a decision win. It wasn't like he went out there and dominated him. And apart from that, he hasn't really done anything. I mean, the Diego Ferreira fight was good. Beating Rafael dos Anjos, I guess, was good. And he got absolutely destroyed by Beneil Dariush a few years ago. He just doesn't have that win that has given him momentum. It's either really close fights which shouldn't have gone his way, or it's him losing like he did against Beneil Dariush. I feel like if he's able to pick up a win against somebody like Charles Oliveira, he's going to get his name out there in the lightweight division. I don't think he becomes a champion. I think Makhachev's better than him on the feet and when it comes to wrestling. Same for Arman Sarukian. But if he can show me something in his next couple of fights that shows me that he's definitely one of the best, then, you know, you got to ride on the hype of Gamrot. But he just needs that one big statement, make him win in the lightweight division, which he just hasn't been able to get. So hopefully he can get some momentum. Hopefully he can become a little bit more interesting, because it seems like apart from a double leg takedown, he doesn't really have anything to offer. So we'll see what Gamrot's career looks like in the next few years. I don't think he becomes a champion, but he's a good wrestler, and I think he is top 5 worthy for the UFC. Dustin Poirier. I mean, just look at this dude's resume. He is a legend in the lightweight division. This dude has fought so many people. The fights with Conor McGregor, where he was able to beat Conor McGregor, where we saw one of the first nice guy McGregors. The 2 wars he had with Justin Gaethje, where he got KO'd and he finished Justin Gaethje as well. The banger with Michael Chandler. Max Holloway's first fights at 155. The war with Dan Hooker. The fight with Eddie Alvarez. KOing and shutting down the prospect of Benoit Saint Denis. KOing Bobby Green. Beating Diego Ferreira, Anthony Pettis, Jim Miller. This dude's resume is so stacked. He probably has one of the best resumes in the complete lightweight division right now. Never was able to win a belt. I feel like grapplers are this dude's worst nightmare. Lost to Makhachev, lost to Khabib, lost to Charles Oliveira. So grapplers is definitely his weak point, but he's one of the best boxers in the UFC. Such a slick boxer, so experienced. He's had so many fun fights. Do I think he's going to win a belt again? No, but I would love to see Gaethje. Maybe not Gaethje, maybe I would love to see Poirier maybe go against somebody like Gaethje and just have a few fun fights in the lightweight division. He's just a legend in the lightweight division. You can't not like Dustin Poirier, and I think everyone was rooting for him to beat Islam Makhachev, not because I don't like Makhachev, but because Poirier, he's been around for so long. He's fought everyone in the lightweight division. It just would have been a good cherry on top to his already great career to see him win the lightweight belt and become the undisputed champion. But he's definitely one of the greatest fighters in UFC history to never win an undisputed belt. I would say he probably is the best fighter to never win an undisputed belt, because this dude's resume is stacked. And he's just been a top fighter for the longest time. He's never fallen off. So Dustin Poirier, fun guy, great boxer, good personality as well. And he's just somebody that you want to root for in the lightweight division. And even though he's never going to win an undisputed belt, he definitely has the crown as the greatest fighter to never win an undisputed belt. And then we have Justin Gaethje, very similar to Dustin Poirier. Just an absolute legend. He's kind of like a car that's going on full speed, and then he's like a car crash whenever he goes into someone. He's just such a fun guy to watch. Some of the best leg kicks in the lightweight division. Super powerful. Such a good striker. He has had a couple of shaky fights in his past few. I mean, in the Max Holloway fight, he did get completely destroyed by Max Holloway, but he still put on a fun fight at UFC 300 and threw down. He has lost to Dustin Poirier before, and obviously he lost to Khabib and Charles Oliveira for the belt. Again, another one of these fighters that I think he's a legend in the lightweight division. He's going to continue having fun fights as he has. He's never going to win an undisputed belt. But you got to remember, Justin Gaethje was the guy who started the losing streak of Tony Ferguson. He went out there and had a war with Michael Chandler, shut down the prospect of Rafael Fiziev. He's still one of the best lightweights in the world. He's probably going to be out for a while after his fight with Max Holloway, but he's just such a fun fighter to see, similar to Dustin Poirier. 2 legends. He's never really fallen off. The second people think, you know, an up-and-coming prospect is going to go and beat Justin Gaethje, he absolutely batters them. He's just such a dangerous guy, and he is the epitome of violence. There's a reason people call Justin Gaethje your favourite fighter's favourite fighter, because that's just the type of guy Gaethje is. Never in a boring fight. Then we got Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira's title run was probably the most entertaining title run in the UFC, because when Charles Oliveira was winning these fights, it felt like we were winning as well as Oliveira. He had probably one of the most entertaining title runs in the UFC, and he's still one of the biggest fan favourites in the UFC for good reason. Started off his title run by fighting Michael Chandler, nearly got finished in that first round, pulls out a KO against Michael Chandler in that second round, became the lightweight champion. Then he fought Dustin Poirier, got dropped multiple times in that first round. We all thought Poirier was going to win, and then he goes out there and submits him in the second. The fight with Justin Gaethje, him and Gaethje having a back and forth scrap on the feet, and then he latches up the submission, and that was when it wasn't actually for the belt because Oliveira missed weight. And then he comes back, loses to Islam Makhachev, but there's no shame in that because Makhachev's one of the best in the world. And then he KOs Beneil Dariush. And you know what? I'm going to say that Oliveira still has a chance to fight for a belt. Because if he gets matched up against, let's say, somebody like Gamrot next, and Arman Tsarukyan and Islam Makhachev fight, if he beats Gamrot, he could make a case to say that he wants the title shot in the lightweight division. Because him and Islam Makhachev, they've only fought once. He had a very close fight with Arman Tsarukyan. If he can go out there and beat Gamrot, as well as his already stacked resume at 155, I would not mind Oliveira winning the belt again. And if there was one fighter in the lightweight division that I would want to see win the belt just one last time, it would probably be Charles Oliveira, because he had the most entertaining title run in the UFC. He was exciting. He had multiple ways to win. He was a good personality. And he's just a guy that you want to root for in the UFC. So, Charles Oliveira, I hope he doesn't go on a losing streak. I hope he picks up a couple of more wins, because he's just such an entertaining guy to watch. And to be honest, he has only lost to the two best in the division, which are both some of the best wrestlers as well. He's got a stacked-ass resume. One of the best lightweight champions in terms of entertainment. And then we've got Arman Tsarukyan. In my opinion, definitely the toughest test in the lightweight division for Islam Makhachev. We talked about Michael Chandler being difficult, but I think Arman Tsarukyan is probably stylistically the most difficult fight for Islam Makhachev. His hands are amazing, as he showed against Beneil Dariush, sleeping him in the first round, and then his wrestling offense is so dangerous as well. That fight with Yoel Alvarez is sick, and he just dominated him with the ground and pound. Beat Charles Oliveira, the only guy in the lightweight division really recently to beat Charles Oliveira, apart from the champion Islam Makhachev. And he's had a fight with Islam Makhachev before in his debut. It was a super competitive fight. He lost to Gamrot, but that was also a super competitive fight. I don't think he's going to become a champion because Makhachev is that good, but he's such a top contender, and I think he is always going to be the number one guy in the lightweight division for a long time. Like, we talk about we talk about Volkanovski and Holloway. When Volkanovski was champion, Holloway was the number one guy. When Kamaru Usman was the champion, Colby Covington was the number one guy. I can see Islam Makhachev staying the champion for a while, and Arman Tsarukyan being the number one guy, where he just shuts down every other lightweight contender that gets to him, and he robs people of so many other title shots. So, definitely one of the most entertaining, well, I won't say one of the most entertaining, but definitely one of the best wrestlers in the division. And I'm not even going to write off his chances of beating Islam Makhachev. Even though I am rooting for Makhachev to win that fight, it would not surprise me. It probably would surprise me. But he's just a sick fighter, is Arman Tsarukyan. Definitely the best if you take away Islam. And then we've got Islam himself. This dude is the best fighter in the UFC right now. He is the best. I can't see anybody beating Islam Makhachev. He looks pretty much unstoppable. With every UFC champion, there is usually one kind of way that you can improve them, whether it be they're lacking their grappling, whether their hands aren't as good. Islam Makhachev is one of the few champions in the UFC right now where I genuinely can't see any weaknesses. He just looks unstoppable. His fight with Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira was the best lightweight in the world, taking on every contender, and Makhachev made Oliveira look like an amateur. He's beaten Arman Tsarukyan before, finished Dustin Poirier, beat Alexander Volkanovski twice. I know the first fight was very competitive, but he had one of the greatest fights in UFC history against Volkanovski, making history with the two pound-for-pound best going against each other, and then finished him in the rematch. Beat Bobby Green easily, beat Dan Hooker easily. I think Makhachev's going to hold on to the belt for a long time, and I think he will retire as the greatest lightweight of all time. And I even think he has a good chance of beating Leon Edwards at 170. He's just unstoppable. He's the best wrestler in the UFC. He's got probably some of the best submission offense in the UFC as well. Put Poirier to sleep with his submission. Submitted Charles Oliveira, and Oliveira's one of the best submission artists. Outstruck Volkanovski in that second fight, and Volkanovski is one of the best strikers in the UFC. This dude is just good everywhere. His stand-up is improved as well. He's now a dangerous striker. There's no way to beat this guy. He just looks unstoppable in the lightweight division. And I just can't see anyone beating Islam Makhachev. So I'm going to say that Makhachev is probably the best fighter in the entirety of the UFC right now. He's the most complete fighter in the UFC right now. And unless somebody gets a fluke finish over Makhachev, I just don't see how it's possible to defeat this guy. He is that good. The featherweight division. At number 15th, we've got the legend Edson Barboza. If we talk about Edson Barboza's featherweight career only, because in the lightweight division, I feel like that's where most of his career was talkative, but if we're talking about him purely at featherweight, he still had a couple of good wins, and I still feel like he has the capability to put people out of there. That scrap with Sadiq Youssef last year, in which he was actually able to beat him as well, that was a really good fight. That KO, that knee to Billy Q last year as well, that late delay KO to Shane Burgos. I still think Edson Barboza has the capability to put people out of there, but I just don't really want to see him around the rankings anymore. If fought Bryce Mitchell, got dominated in that fight. He took a beating against Lerone Murphy recently, lost to Giga Chikadze, lost to Dan Ige. I feel like Edson Barboza, he's not too far away from retirement, I'm going to be honest. He's getting old in age. He's a veteran in the UFC. He's clearly not really on the same level of these ranked guys anymore. I wouldn't mind seeing him face some unranked dudes, maybe, give him a prospect that's not too dangerous. I don't even, like I said, mind the idea of him retiring, but I feel like Edson Barboza has had a great career. In his prime, probably one of the greatest kickboxers in UFC history. This dude's kicks are insane. That KO that he had over Terry Etim in the lightweight division, that was insane. That roundhouse, that wheel kick, this dude is an absolute monster. Edson Barboza, great kickboxer. I'd like to see him fight again because he's always having fun fights recently, or it's ending in a KO, but I just don't know how much he has to offer. He's old in age, he's taken a beating in at least he did in his last fight, so I don't know what's next for Barboza, but he's definitely fun to watch. Dan Ige, this dude is absolutely game. Again, he's on the lower end of the rankings. He's lost to a lot of ranked dudes. Evloev, Emmett, Korean Zombie, Bryce Mitchell, Diego Lopez recently, and Calvin Kattar. But this dude is game. Fought on, I think, the shortest notice in UFC history recently at UFC 3 or 3. I think it was like 4 hours notice or something like that when he fought Diego Lopez. And he put up a really good fight. He was actually starting to land some great shots on Diego Lopez. It wasn't even like he was, I was getting dominated by Diego Lopez. He's beating Edson Barboza. He's beating Nate the Train, Andre Fili. He's got some pretty good wins under his name, and he's very, very dangerous as well as Dan Ige. This dude can crack. He's a very dangerous guy, as we saw in that Andre Fili fight. And I definitely expect more KOs to come from Dan Ige. Maybe he's not, champion material. Maybe he's not contender material. But he's just a dangerous guy that comes to bring it every single time. And I feel like he's won a lot of fans over after his last fight with, like I said, Diego Lopez when he fought on short notice. Because this dude is game. He's the uncrowned BMF of the Bantamweight division, the Featherweight division, sorry. So Dan Ige, just a fun guy. Very dangerous guy too. You just can't hate Dan Ige, man. Then we have Bryce Mitchell. Yeah, this dude was... I remember when this dude was one of the biggest prospects in the UFC. When he was coming into that Topuria fight undefeated and he had a ton of hype to his name. He's still a decent grappler. Dominated Edson Barboza. Dominated Dan Ige. Beat Andre Fili. He's still a really good grappler, is Bryce Mitchell. But I wonder where this dude is gone and where he's going to be for a while. Because obviously he's been out for ages because of that brutal KO over Josh Emmett. He's been on the receiving end of one of the most brutal KOs in UFC history. Man, I don't even know if he's going to be back this year. He fought on 296. I don't even know that if he's going to be back this year because of how brutal that KO is. It might have been that brutal. He might have knocked even more CTE into him. I've been seeing this dude on podcasts. I don't remember anything specific, but I just know that this dude is coming up with the most random shit. You watch Bryce Mitchell on a podcast, he's going to talk about how the earth is flat. He's going to talk about his political views. He's just an interesting personality in the featherweight division. Obviously fought Topuria as well, where he took his first loss, and Topuria kind of dominated him. But to be fair to Bryce Mitchell, he was landing some good shots on Elite Topuria on the feet. And I think he just needs to... sharpen up his striking. We all know he's a really good grappler, but there's a couple holes in his game. He's probably going to be extremely chinny after that fight with Josh Emmett now. I want to see Bryce Mitchell fight again, man. There's nothing like a Bryce Mitchell fight week, especially when there's a press conference. And we're going to remember, everyone hypes up Holloway for getting those shorts, those floral shorts, and Poirier for getting his shorts. Bryce Mitchell was to do it first. This dude got his camo shots first, so he's a fun guy, Bryce Mitchell. Never going to be a champion or anything like that, but he was a fun prospect at one point, and he's definitely one of the better personalities at featherweight. Then we got Diego Lopez, the Charles Oliveira of the featherweight division. This dude he's got a lot of hype to his name, and he has for a while, and for good reason. That KO over Pat Sabatini, that KO at UFC 300 over Sadiq Youssef, that fight with Dan Ige, and people give Dan Ige credit, like I said, for fighting on short notice, but you got to give Diego Lopez, credit as well. This dude fought on a day's notice against Dan Ige, who's a dangerous guy. He didn't have to do that. Now, he has lost before, but you look at the people he's lost to, it's not that bad. He lost against Movzor Evloev in a close fight, and now Evloev's one of the best in the UFC, and he lost on the Contender Series to Joanderson Brito, who again is probably the best unranked fighter in the featherweight division. Diego Lopez is just good everywhere. He's a really good personality. He's one of those guys you just want to root for. He's got really, really good submissions. His striking is dangerous. His work in the clinch is dangerous. I think he's got top 5 potential. I hope he gets a big fight next, like a Yair Rodriguez or, I don't know, whoever else there is. Maybe a rematch, well, not a rematch, but a rescheduling with Brian Ortega. He needs a top 5 opponent because he's super fun to watch and he deserves it. I just want to see Diego Lopez get his title run, man. Diego Lopez title run 2024, hopefully. He is a fun guy to watch. He's just one of those guys you want to see fight on every card. So He's definitely one of my favourite featherweights. Lerone Murphy, the dark horse of the featherweight division. I'm not just saying that because he's from the UK. The featherweight division has so many British fighters in as well. But no, Lerone Murphy, I feel like he's got potential to be a top 5 fighter. I'm not going to say he's got potential to be a champion because I haven't seen enough from him yet. But he's undefeated as Lerone Murphy, and I feel like he's just silently climbed his way to the top. He's not this insane trash talker. He hasn't got this super exciting style. But he's a really good grappler as Lerone Murphy. His wrestling is really on point. His striking is improved as well. He's really technical. Just recently got that good win over Edson Barboza, which is his best win yet. And he's going to climb the rankings. And like I said, he's a stylistic problem for a lot of people in this division. He's a dark horse, and I think he's got top 5 potential. I will say, though, a lot of his fights have been very close. I remember, I think it was the UFC London card. He fought a debutant and arguably lost that fight. So he needs to get a bit of momentum. He needs to beat a proper opponent in the featherweight division, maybe like a Calvin Kattar or a Dan Ige. But he's a really good prospect as Lerone Murphy, and I think, like I said, he has potential to be a top 5 fighter. He's not getting these flashy finishes. He's not got this flashy personality. But he's a tough motherfucker, as we saw in that Edson Barboza fight. And you read the stories what this guy's been through online as well. Tough guys, Lerone Murphy. And I just hope he makes it far in the UFC featherweight division and gets another British champion in the UFC. Giga Chikadze. I mean, first of all, what is this dude's build? Second of all, he's basically like a bad version of Yair Rodriguez. I think Arnold Allen's going to run through him. No British bias at all. But no, next week I do think Allen's going to finish him. He's a good kickboxer as Giga Chikadze. He got that good win over Alex Caceres. I think that was his last fight. Beat Cub Swanson. Got a good win over Edson Barboza as well. But like I said, Barboza is getting up there in age. And he kind of got beaten up by Calvin Kattar. He's just a solid kickboxer as Giga Chikadze. I think he deserves his place in the ranking. I don't think he's ever going to beat anyone really above him unless he, I don't know, I can't really see him beating anyone ranked above him. I think Arnold Allen, like I said, runs through him. He's just a good kickboxer, not one of the best strikers in the division. He's got decent clinch work as well, does Giga Chikadze. Not the most dangerous dude though. That's all I've got to really say about Giga Chikadze. He's just there, and he's kind of like one of the filler guys in the featherweight division. Don't really know what to say about him. Solid kickboxer. Calvin Kattar. This dude needs to pick up a win as soon as possible, man. This dude has been getting beaten up on. I feel like Calvin Kattar is like one of those dudes in the featherweight division that is notorious for being on the other end of people's highlight reel. Got one of the most dominating beatdowns against Max Holloway a few years ago. Got ragdolled by Aljamain Sterling, and that was Sterling's featherweight debut at UFC 300. Got finished by Josh Emmett as well. Got styled on by Zabit, got finished by Arnold Allen, but to be fair, that was it was a bit of an injury there. Lost to Renato Moicano. This dude has been getting beaten up on, and he's on the receiving end of a lot of these featherweights highlight reels, but he's got some good wins under his name, and I feel like he's established that. That fight with Jeremy Stevens was brutal. Beat Shane Burgos, Andre Fili. Good win over Danny Ige, and like I said, a good win over Giga Chikadze. I think he's just very one-dimensional, he's Calvin Kattar. He's got the same style in every fight, and that's his pressure boxing. He's got really good boxing for the featherweight division, but you take away his boxing, and I feel like people have started to figure it out. You see people aren't really engaging in a scrap as much with him. People are coming in with different game plans, and I think if Calvin Kattar wants to make it in the featherweight division, I mean, first of all, he needs to go to a wrestling mat after that fight with Aljamain Sterling. I know Sterling's a great wrestler, but he got dominated. And I think he just needs to improve the variety of his striking. You can't just do the same thing in every single fight and expect it to work. Holloway found it out first, punished him for it. But I guess he's a decent boxer as Calvin Kattar. Not really much to say about him. He just needs to change his game up. Aljamain Sterling, I think he's matched up against Movsar Evloev for UFC 307, and he's a legit contender. I think he's probably a future title challenger in the featherweight division. Obviously, a former champion in the bantamweight division. He got that dominating win over Calvin Kattar. He's not the most interesting guy. I mean, he's got a bubbly, I guess you can say, personality. He's not the most interesting guy to watch. He wasn't really that interesting in the bantamweight division either, and he got that really boring win over Calvin Kattar, but it was a dominant win. He's a really good wrestler. I think he's going to beat Movsar Evloev. He's got some, awkward stand-up, and I think he will fight for a belt. If he beats Calvin Kattar, there's a case to make that he could deserve a title, and not beat Calvin Kattar. If he beats Movsar Evloev, there's a case to say that he might deserve a title shot because Evloev's one of the top featherweights right now, and he's got that name of being a former champion. I think he will succeed. I think he's a future top 5 opponent, top 5 potential for the bantamweight, for the featherweight division. Do I think he's going to be a champion? No, I don't think he ever beats Ilia Topuria or Max Holloway or Volkanovski, but I think he sits perfectly in the top 5 of the featherweight division. He's just a good wrestler who moved up, and I'm glad that he has moved up because it's nice to have some more names in the featherweight division, especially of multiple styles. Josh Emmett, the most brutal puncher in the featherweight division. He's kind of like, I know this is a bit of a weird comparison, but he kind of reminds me of the Derek Lewis of the featherweight division. Josh Emmett, he's got good wrestling that he never used, but the most important talking point is this dude's power. Got probably one of the most brutal KOs in UFC history when he fought Bryce Mitchell at UFC 296. That Michael Johnson fight, he just hits so hard, just Josh Emmett. All it takes is one. He's also a fun fighter as well. When is Josh Emmett ever in a boring fight? Even in that loss to Ilia Topuria and Yair Rodriguez, it was a really fun fight. He's not the most technical striker in the featherweight division. I feel like you give this dude an elite striker, they're probably going to outstrike him. He's not one of the most talented in the division, but his power is what's keeping him so far. I want to know what's next for Josh Emmett as well. I don't know why he's not got a fight booked. Obviously, KO'd Bryce Mitchell brutally at UFC 296, and he still hasn't got a fight scheduled. I was hoping he was going to fight like Arnold Allen, then obviously they announced a fight with Giga Chikadze, so I don't know what's next for Josh Emmett. I just want to see this dude fight, because you can almost guarantee that it's going to be a scrap, or it's going to end in him putting somebody to sleep. He's a very hard-hitting dude, and he's just somebody that's fun to watch, and he's durable as well. This dude, how did he survive those 5 rounds with Ilia Topuria? Topuria battered him, and he just kept walking forward, landing shots. So you've got to respect Josh Emmett, man. He's a powerful guy. He's a fun guy to watch. One of the most entertaining featherweights to watch. Arnold Allen from the UK. Talk about entertaining. This dude is the definition of a scrap. He's the definition of entertaining, and we're going to see that displayed next week when he goes out there and fucking demolishes Giga Chikadze. Absolutely ran through against Dan Hooker at UFC London. That win over Calvin Kattar and Sadiq Youssef, really good wins. Lost to Max Holloway, and I would say, out of everyone in the featherweight division that has lost to Max Holloway, Arnold Allen probably put the best performance against Holloway. I'm not going to say he won the fight or came close, but you know when most people fight Holloway, they get battered or they get finished. Allen put up a pretty good fight, and that fight with Evloev, it was a very questionable and controversial fight because of what went in that fight and the decision. So I still think he's one of the top featherweights in the world. I'm not going to say he becomes a champion. I don't think he'd ever beat Topuria or Holloway. Maybe he could beat Volkanovski, considering Volkanovski's current stance in the division, but I don't think he's ever going to win a belt. But he's going to be one of these guys that come to scrap, come to put in an absolute war, and he's just one of the best kickboxers in the division. I love watching Arnold Allen. I can't wait to see him fight Giga Chikadze, and the fact that he's representing the UK, one of my favourite fighters in the UFC featherweight division. Movsar Evloev, probably one of the most hated dudes in the featherweight division. He's undefeated, and he's a good wrestler. That's all there is to it. He's a good wrestler. He's undefeated. Never finished anyone in the UFC, and I don't really like how he talked about KOing people on Twitter and finishing people on Twitter like he does to Sterling, considering that he's never finished anyone, and he was quite salty, like a salty winner after his win over Arnold Allen. He's got some good wins. The Diego Lopez fight, I guess, is a good win, and same for the Arnold Allen fight. He's not a number 1 contender yet. I think he could fight for a belt. If he does beat Aljamain Sterling, I'd say give Evloev his title shot. It's between him and Ortega next, but considering Ortega pulled out, I guess he's in front of Ortega. I don't really know what to say. One of the best wrestlers in the division, undefeated, kind of fades as the round goes on. Not somebody that you really want to root for, but if he gets it done, he gets it done. That's what I got to say about Evloev. We need one of these guys in the division. We got Bilal Muhammad at welterweight. We need an Evloev. We need a Bilal Muhammad of the featherweight division, and that is where Evloev comes in. That's what I got to say about him. Then we got Yair Rodriguez, very one-dimensional, but he's probably one of the most crafty and entertaining kickboxers in the UFC. This dude throws kicks like he throws punches. His body kicks, his head kicks, his combination with his kicks. He's a great striker, and he was starting to land on Volkanovski in that title fight before, obviously, Volkanovski landed that big right hand, I think it was. He lost to Max Holloway as well. Holloway's one of the best in the UFC. When it comes to Yair Rodriguez, just don't match him up against grapplers, and it's going to be a competitive fight. You know, Volkanovski mixed it up with a takedown. He finished him. Holloway, you can't really match him up against Holloway. He's the best. Ortega submitted him. He's just very one-dimensional, he's bright as Yair Rodriguez, but he's got some good wins. I mean, I say he's not a good grappler, but he did submit Josh Emmett. That injury win over Brian Ortega, I'm not really going to talk about. Beat Korean Zombie with that last-second KO, that Jeremy Stevens fight, the Dan Hooker fight, the Andre Philly fight. He's just a really fun kickboxer to watch, and I'd say he's probably the best pure kickboxer in the featherweight division. If Yair Rodriguez had grappling, you send this dude to Dagestan to sharpen up his grappling, he's going to be a top contender for a while. It's going to be hard to beat Yair Rodriguez, one of the best kickboxers in the division, and he's got some, I guess, underrated jiu-jitsu. It's just his wrestling definitely lacks, and I think he does leave himself open to get hit a lot, so hopefully he can find his game again. And it kind of looks bad when you lost to Brian Ortega, when all the stars were aligned for him to win that fight, but it is what it is. Brian Ortega himself, It's hard to talk about Brian Ortega because I don't really know where to start. I mean, he's probably got the best jiu-jitsu in the division. He's got that sort of jiu-jitsu similar to like a Paul Craig, where he can be losing the entire fight and he just needs to latch up a submission. That submission recently against Yair Rodriguez. I mean, this dude is just probably the best submission artist in the division. In a division that's full of strikers, it's good to have someone that has multiple ways to win. And it's not like he's got bad hands. He has got pretty decent hands as well. I wouldn't say he's one of the best strikers in the division, but he can strike. I mean, he was nearly the guy to take the belt away from Volkanovski. He had that war with Max Holloway, finished Yair Rodriguez when he was a massive underdog. I know Brian Ortega is arguably next in line for the belt. Obviously, it's going to be Holloway. But after Holloway versus Topuria, Brian Ortega is probably the number one contender after that because of his win over Yair Rodriguez. I think he still needs that one big win. But Brian Ortega, you know, he's a bit of an awkward guy when it comes to fighting, but there's one thing for sure, he ain't going to quit. He's a fun guy to watch. He's had some of the best fights in featherweight history with Holloway and Volkanovski, and he's definitely got the best jiu-jitsu. So yeah, Ortega's just someone you want to watch. Max Holloway. I mean, this dude's resume in the featherweight division is crazy. He's definitely one of the greatest featherweights of all time, and I think he's going to become a champion again when he faces Ilia Topuria at UFC 306. I mean, where do I even start? Beat Jose Aldo twice, Yair Rodriguez. He's always been the second best featherweight in the world. Maybe even the best now that Volkanovski's not the champion. When Volkanovski was the champion, Holloway was always the best. If Alexander Volkanovski didn't exist, Holloway could make a case to say that he might be the greatest featherweight of all time. Look at this dude's resume. You want to talk about recently, Arnold Allen, Korean Zombie, Calvin Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Anthony Pettis beat Oliveira when he was at featherweight. Brian Ortega, I already said that. This dude has just cleared out the featherweight division. It's kind of like when you don't want Volkanovski to beat someone, send them to Max Holloway. He is definitely one of the greatest featherweights of all time. Probably in the top 20 GOAT list as well because of what he's achieved. He's beaten so many killers, man. He's cleared out the featherweight division. He's beaten everyone. Probably one of the best boxers in UFC history. He just lands so much. He's got such high output. He seems to be, you know, able to land. He's got really good accuracy. Doesn't get hit too much as well. He kind of felt like he found his kryptonite in Alexander Volkanovski. That was just the one guy that he couldn't beat. And the only other loss to Volkanovski at featherweight was Conor McGregor way back in the day when Holloway was starting out. He's definitely one of the greatest featherweights of all time. Such a killer, such a good boxer. And again, one of those fighters that you just don't want to root against because of his personality. Top man is Max Holloway. Probably one of the most exciting fighters in UFC history. Where do I even start, man? The resume, how funny he is. It's impossible to not be a fan of Max Holloway. So yeah, I can't wait for this dude's fight with Topuria. And I think he has a good chance of beating him. Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander Volkanovski might have had one of the most entertaining title runs in UFC history with guys like Oliveira. There was nothing better in the UK than waking up at 6 a.m. when you're tired and then Volkanovski's walkout hits and he just destroys every featherweight that he goes against. When he absolutely put an all-Australian beating on Korean Zombie. When he battered Brian Ortega and came out of that guillotine. When he destroyed Yair Rodriguez at UFC 290. The 3 fights with Max Holloway and the third one being the most decisive. He's had a bit of a shaky past few fights. It's kind of weird to see Volkanovski not as the champion, and he might have found his kryptonite in Ilia Topuria. I hope he takes some time off, even though he's one of the best in the UFC. Definitely one of the greatest of all time. He's got really good wrestling from that rugby background, and obviously one of the best strikers. I hope he finds his thing again, man. I hope he comes back and gets a good win. He needs to take some time off. I know he's addicted to fighting. I just hope he takes some time off, heals, gets back in the featherweight division, maybe faces a contender, and just destroys the man. Volkanovski in his prime was like nothing else. He was the best in the UFC. The way people look at Makhachev now, we were looking at Volkanovski in his prime. One of the greatest, arguably the greatest featherweight of all time, just someone that you can't hate. I just want to see Volkanovski fight in the future, man. He's such a fun guy, and his prime was a prime like no other. And Ilia Topuria. This dude is definitely I don't know how to describe Topuria. Everyone hates this dude. And even though I can understand why people dislike him, he's very arrogant. I feel like he plays the villain well in the featherweight division. He knocked out everyone's fan favorite in Alexander Volkanovski. This dude is just like... He's just the killer. He's like the supervillain. He shut down the prospect of Bryce Mitchell, shut down the prospect of Ryan Hall, had one of the best fights of the year against Josh Emmett last year, KO'd everyone's favourite fighter in Alexander Volkanovski, and now he's trashing Max Holloway, who everyone likes. He's the perfect villain in the UFC, and he's so difficult to beat. I mean, he comes from a jiu-jitsu background. He's got really good jiu-jitsu. He submitted one of the best grapplers at the time in Bryce Mitchell, and he knocked out one of the best strikers in Volkanovski. He's got sharp boxing. this dude, he's just such a dangerous guy. He's very, very dangerous. If he's not KOing you, he's putting you through hell. It's going to be very hard for anyone to take away from the belt from Topuria. He's got a good chance of beating Holloway, and if he does beat Max Holloway, I don't see anyone in the featherweight division beating Ilia Topuria. I don't see Brian Ortega doing it. I don't see Evloev doing it. I don't see anyone taking that belt away from Topuria. We might have the future featherweight, maybe not the future featherweight god, but we might have the new Volkanovski in the featherweight division, the evil Volkanovski. In other words, I'm trying to say we might have the new guy who keeps on the featherweight belt for the next few years and just batters everyone. If Holloway can't do it, I just struggle to see anyone else doing it. He's the dark horse, he's the villain, but he's a fucking killer as well. So I think Topuria's got a lot of potential in the future of the featherweight division. Then we have the bantamweight division with Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz is quite a weird bantamweight because I feel like it really depends on which version of Pedro Munoz shows up, because sometimes he looks a lot better than others. Like, for example, in his last fight with Kyler Phillips, even though it wasn't that bad of a fight, he didn't look good. He wasn't throwing nearly as much as he should have. He just looked kind of shit in that fight with Kyler Phillips. But then there's other performances, like the performance against Chris Gutierrez in the fight with Rob Font, where he looked really good. So I just feel like he needs to be more consistent, not only with his performances, but with his wins and his losses. I just don't think Pedro Munoz is consistent enough. But one thing I will say about Pedro Munoz is this guy is a tough motherfucker. He is not easy to finish. I mean, he's fought so many killers and taken so many big shots. Aldo, Cruz, Vera a couple fights ago, only a few fights ago when he fought Sean O'Malley. I know that ended quickly because of the no contest, but still didn't get caught by anything significant by Sean O'Malley. The Kyler Phillips fight recently, it takes a lot to put Pedro Munoz out. So he's not he's got a very, very good chin as Pedro Munoz. I just think he's not consistent enough. He's a really technical striker, but I feel like he spends way too much time calculating because he isn't the highest output striker. So for Pedro Munoz, I think he feels to increase his striking output, and just, I don't know, because it's difficult in the bantamweight division because of how stacked it is and how much competition there is. But Pedro Munoz is good. He needs a big win though to keep himself in the rankings, and I just think he needs that momentum, man. He's not consistent enough. It seems like the second he wins one, he'll then go and lose, and he just needs a big win. He needs to go on a bit of a streak if he wants to stay talked about name in the bantamweight division. So for Pedro Munoz, he's a good guy, really, really tough and not easy to put out of there, but he just isn't consistent enough for the bantamweight division. Then we've got Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez is a perfect example of how competitive the bantamweight division is, because you look at any other division like the heavyweight division, you've got Nasky Mentor who's ranked. Jonathan Martinez, he's ranked number 14th and he's so good. Like, the amount of guys this guy shut down. Adrian Yanez, I know he was coming off that loss to Rob Font, but he was still a prospect. Jonathan Martinez finished him and absolutely battered his legs. Shut down the prospect of Said Nurmagomedov as well. Jonathan Martinez is really good. He's beating Cub Swanson too. He's really good. He's a really good kickboxer. His leg kicks are amazing. He's really tough as well as Jonathan Martinez. And I know he's just lost to Jose Aldo, but first of all, that's Jose Aldo. He's one of the greatest. And he, that's just a thing of experience. Aldo is much more experienced than Jonathan Martinez. I think Martinez has potential to be in the top 10. I know he's a super competitive division, but he's a really good striker. If he can improve his ground game just a little bit, because Jose Aldo showed in that fight that his ground game does need to be worked on, Jonathan Martinez can be a real problem for this division, because like I said, he's a really good kickboxer, and I just think if he improves his ground game, he's got a lot of potential. And he wasn't getting battered in that Jose Aldo fight. He had a lot of issues with the grappling, and he was kind of getting outboxed by Jose Aldo. But like I said, that is Jose Aldo. He's one of the best in the world and has been for years. So Jonathan Martinez, he's really fun to watch as well. It's never a boring fight. He just destroys people with his leg kicks like he did with Yanez. He puts up a really competitive fight, and he's not going to let a prospect come over and destroy him, because I kind of view Jonathan Martinez as the prospect killer. So he's ranked number 14th, but he's still one of the best in the world, and he's just a perfect representative of how competitive the bantamweight division is. The fact that you can beat Yanez, Nurmagomedov, and Swanson and only be ranked 14th just shows how competitive the division is. So Jonathan Martinez, I think he's a really fun guy to watch. Dominic Cruz, again, similar to Jose Aldo, one of the greatest. This dude is, I'd say he's probably the greatest bantamweight of all time. Obviously, he has had a big fall off, but I still think he's the greatest bantamweight of all time just because of the people he's beaten. Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, Uriah Faber twice. When Dominic Cruz was in his prime, he was untouchable, man. This dude was honestly untouchable on the feet. Obviously, the fight with Cody Garbrandt is the big fight, which we're going to talk about, but he was untouchable. His head movement, his awkward head movement, which seemed to work in every fight. fight. He's great wrestling as well. His ability to just pick people apart, and the fact that he was so hard to hit. Cruz was so good in his prime, man. And he beat Pedro Munoz not too long ago. And to be fair, he does have a lot of good wins on his name as well. You look at his fights recently, I know it hasn't been perfect. He lost to Cody Garbrandt, he lost to Marlon Vera, but even in that Vera fight, he was low-key piecing up Marlon Vera before he got obviously caught, and then got KO'd by Cejudo not that long ago as well. So I do think he's on the other end of his career, obviously. He's definitely not ever got title aspirations again, but I'd love to see him rematch somebody like Cody Garbrandt or fight an unranked dude. Don't feed him to another prospect. Don't feed him to a killer. He's a legend. I don't know if he's going to be coming back, though, because I know he's doing commentary and everything, but he's kind of just sat in the rankings. He hasn't really told us if he's going to retire. He hasn't, told us any plans if he wants to return, so I really don't know what's next for Dominick Cruz. I think he's probably considering one more fight before he retires, but he just hasn't decided who yet. So I'm hoping we see him soon, because the longer he waits out, the worse his performance is going to be when he comes back. But he's a legend, greatest bantamweight of all time. I just want to see this dude back against somebody like Cody Garbrandt. I just want to see at least one more Dominick Cruz performance before we're done, because I feel like you can't end off getting head kick KO'd by Marlon Vera. So Cruz, GOAT of the bantamweight division. Mario Bautista. He's a really good prospect in the bantamweight division. He is a really good prospect. He's on a massive streak, and he's just a really good grappler as well. He's able to find submissions from everywhere. And one thing I like about Mario Bautista is the fact that he seems to be improving in every fight. Like, I remember beforehand, his striking wasn't the best. He didn't really have the best striking. Well, his striking's definitely improved a lot recently. His offensive boxing is much better. He recently beat Ricky Simon, which I guess is a win that has kind of... I mean, it's a good win, but I mean, Ricky Simon has been on a bit of a tricky past few fights, so I guess... in hindsight, he could have had better wins, but he has lost to Corey Sandhagen, but that was all the way back in, I think, 2019 in his UFC debut, and Sandhagen's one of the best bantamweights in the world. If Bautista can keep up with the momentum that he's got going, because he has a lot of it, I think he has potential to break into the top 10 and beat some solid people. I'd love to see him versus somebody like Song Yadong or just someone else in that top 10, because Bautista's really good. He's a really good grappler. He seems to be improving his striking, and he's one of those guys that you just want to pay attention to in the bantamweight division. So for Mario Bautista, I just want to see this dude fight again. Kyler Phillips. This dude, honestly, I picked Munoz to beat Phillips, which I kind of regret. He looked really good against Pedro Munoz. I will say it was a bit of a dirty fight. I know there was a lot of eye pokes going on early in that fight, so it was quite dirty in the beginning, but he had a really, really fun fight with Pedro Munoz before, which was good. He's beaten Song Yadong, which is a win that has aged really well, considering the place that Song Yadong's in now. If Song Yadong would have beaten PTN, he'd have been in title contention, so he's beaten Song Yadong, which is a really good win. And I feel like he's one of those guys in the bantamweight division whose rankings doesn't necessarily show how good he is. I think Kyler Phillips is at least one of the top 7-8 bantamweights in the world. I don't see how it makes sense that Umar Nurmagomedov is ranked number 10th when he's not beating anybody in the rankings, and Kyler Phillips has beaten Song Yadong and destroyed and looked really good against Pedro Munoz, and he's ranked number 11th. That doesn't really make sense for me, but he's kind of a guy in the bantamweight division that nobody's really talking about, but he's really good. He's really fun to watch as well as Kyler Phillips. He had a really good fight with Munoz, and again, like another one of these bantamweights, I just want to see this dude fight, and I'm really intrigued to see how he would do in the division, because he's beaten Song Yadong. I'd love to see how he does against somebody in the top 10, so again, I'm awaiting on some Kyler Phillips fight news. I want to see this dude fight again, and he impressed me a lot when he fought Pedro Munoz. Then we have Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, I know I said he doesn't really deserve the number 10th ranking, and I still stand by that. I don't think he deserves that number 10th ranking spot, because he hasn't beaten anybody in the rankings. He's got 0 notable wins, and his last win was to a debutant by decision against Begsat. But with that being said, I still think Umar Nurmagomedov is the future of the bantamweight division. And it's not just because he's got the Nurmagomedov last name, but he's undefeated and he's such a good wrestler as Nurmagomedov. He's definitely the top 3 best wrestlers in the division right now. I'd say Merab's really good. Sandhagen showed that he's really good. But Nurmagomedov's got such a relentless grappling pace. His ground and pound is so good as well. The fact that he's able to mix up his striking with his grappling as well. I love how he uses his striking to set up the takedowns. And he can crack as well. This dude can crack on the feet. He's KO'd people before, and he keeps people guessing on the feet, which is why he's so dangerous. And I think he has a really good chance of beating Corey Sandhagen. I still need to decide who I think is going to win that fight, because it's only in like 2 weeks. But that's going to be a really competitive fight. I think he's the future of the bantamweight division. I think he's future top 5 potential. And I really do think he's got potential to be a champion one day. But we need to see how he does against Sandhagen. So Nurmagomedov, really bright future ahead of him. One of the biggest prospects in the UFC right now. And I just want to see him perform against Sandhagen, man. Whether he wins or he loses, we're going to learn a lot about Nurmagomedov in that fight. Then we have Rob Font, similar to Pedro Munoz, another super tough guy. The amount of guys that he's fought and he hasn't been put out of there, his chin has held up so many times. When he fought Sandhagen, you know, showed an offensive grappling against Rob Font and he was on short notice. The fight with Aldo, the recent fight with Figueiredo, he got caught by so many big shots by Figueiredo and he was fine. The fight with Munoz, the fight with Vera. He's a very, very tough guy, is Rob Font. He is tough. He can take a shot. He can deal with damage and keep walking forward. And even though he's had a bit of a tricky past few fights, he's definitely impressed me when he beat Cody Garbrandt in the recent fight I say recent, it was last year, but when he completely fraud-checked Adrian Yanez and absolutely demolished him and schooled him on the feet. The Marlon Moraes fight as well, Ricky Simon, Matt Schnell. Rob Font is a really good boxer. He's a really good boxer in the division, he's Rob Font. He's really tough as well, and I think he definitely deserves that ranking spot. Again, he is. I don't know what's really next for Rob Font, though, because he does seem to be having a couple tricky performances. He doesn't seem to be getting in the, I keep saying momentum, but he isn't really getting momentum. I wonder how many times in the video I've said momentum, but no, Rob Font's really good, man. He's a really good boxer, and I feel like the Adrian Yanez fight isn't going to be the last time we see Rob Font hand out a fraud check. Good boxer, tough as nails, and yeah, that's what I've got to say about Rob Font. Jose Aldo, the greatest featherweight of all time, but because this is the bantamweight ranking, I'm going to be strictly talking about his bantamweight career. Jose Aldo in bantamweight hasn't even done that bad. Like, I feel like he's done really good in the bantamweight division. He lost to Peter Yan, but Peter Yan at the time was one of the best. No, he was the best in the division. And then he lost to Merab, but Merab couldn't even land a single takedown on him. And we know how good Merab is these days. And you look at his notable wins as well. Marlon Vera, a win that has aged really well considering Vera's just fought for the belt. The Rob Font win, the Pedro Munoz win. He's racked up some wins against so many ranked bantamweights. And in his last fight, Jonathan Martinez, he came back after like a 2-year layoff, fought Jonathan Martinez, and he looked amazing. Like, he looked like he'd never even left. His boxing in that fight was so crisp. His grappling offense, even though Aldo's up there in age, he's getting old, he just showed against Jonathan Martinez that he's still one of the best bantamweights in the world. I don't know who he's going to be fighting next. He's definitely not got any fight news. Apparently, he is going to be rumoured, though, for UFC 307. I've heard that it could be Kyler Phillips, which I don't understand why he would go from Martinez to Kyler Phillips. You'd think he'd maybe fight somebody higher ranked than that, but he's still got it, man. He's still got these performances going. I think 1 or 2 more fights and he will be done, but he's still a legend, man. He's a legend in the featherweight division, and even in the bantamweight division, his experiences allowed him to get some wins over some really solid guys like Vera, Font, Munoz, Martinez, and another couple of ranked wins. And it's crazy to say this, but he could be back in the title picture. If Aldo can beat, maybe 1 or 2 more guys in the bantamweight division, he might be getting a title shot. So, like, imagine we had Aldo versus O'Malley. That would be crazy. So he's just a guy that you want to root for. An absolute legend. And unlike a lot of the legends in the UFC, normally when we're talking about legends, we're talking about how they've fallen off. Aldo hasn't fallen off. This dude is still at the top. So I just want to see this dude get some fight news. I think he's going to be fighting on UFC 307. But we'll have to see. Song Yadong, probably the pound for pound, well, I won't say pound for pound hardest hitter in the division when there's guys like O'Malley about, but what I'm saying is Song Yadong hits extremely hard. A guy that you just want to watch, man. He's so powerful on the feet. He has lost to a couple of the guys at the top recently, to Peter Yan, like I said before, Kyler Phillips, and to Sandhagen, but Sandhagen's one of the best in the world. He's got some really good wins. Marlon Vera, who just fought for the belt. Ricky Simon, Chris Gutierrez. He hits really hard, does Song Yadong, and he comes to bang every single time. I think there are some problems in his game. I think his grappling could definitely improve a little bit. Peter Yan showed in that fight that Song Yadong's grappling definitely needs some work, so I think if he works on his grappling defense, that could definitely, maybe push him in the division. But he did look okay against Ricky Simon, who's a very heavy grappler as well. He's striking, very, very good striking. He's very, very powerful. I think if he worked on that technique and that output and that gas tank just a little bit more, I think he's got good potential. He definitely deserves his place in this division. Hits very hard, very powerful, very fun to watch, and it's just, you can't not like Song Yadong, man. He's such a likable guy as well. So for Song Yadong, this dude is just so fun to watch. Davis and Figueiredo. I was always a bit kind of questionable, not quite, I don't know how to say it. I was always a bit wary of Figueiredo when he was originally moving up to the bantamweight division, but so far, he's impressed me a lot. I mean, he's a former flyweight champion who's moved up to the bantamweight division and had 2 really good performances. Debuted in the bantamweight division against Rob Font and absolutely destroyed Rob Font for 3 rounds, showed that he belongs in this division, and then at UFC 300, fought Cody Garbrandt. It was a very tentative first round, but in that second round, took him him down, showed that he's got amazing jiu-jitsu and submitted him. Deiveson Figueiredo's a real problem for a lot of people in this division. I mean, he's a former champion, but he's got very, very powerful hands. He was a hard-hitting dude in the flyweight division, and that seems to have translated into the bantamweight division as well. He's got elite Brazilian jiu-jitsu, some of the best jiu-jitsu in the bantamweight division, and I might actually pick him to beat Marlon Vera. I know that fight's in like 2 weeks' time. I might genuinely pick him to beat Marlon Vera because of how good Figueiredo is. He's very, very quick for this division as well. He hits hard. He's got good jiu-jitsu. Again, another guy that you just want to root for. And if he can beat Marlon Vera, Figueiredo's not far away from getting a title shot, which is going to be crazy if we see Figueiredo versus somebody like O'Malley, a former champion versus a current champion. And I do think the move to the bantamweight division was the correct move. I did get kind of bored of seeing Figueiredo versus Moreno. Like, when he got to the third and the fourth fight, I was kind of just like, meh, do we really have to see this again? Like, I didn't really care who won the fight, and it doesn't even matter anymore because Moreno's not even the champion. So I'm glad that he moved to the bantamweight division. It was the correct move, and he's done really good so far. So for Deiveson Figueiredo, if he can go out there, put on a good performance against Marlon Vera, I just want to see this dude fight for the belt against O'Malley. There's so many options for O'Malley now in the bantamweight division with the fighters that are up and coming. So Figueiredo, he's had a very successful move to the bantamweight division, and he's just a very solid fighter, one of the best in the division already. Then we have Henry Cejudo. This dude made the worst mistake of his life by retiring back in 2020. This dude retired in his prime. He'd KO'd Dominic Cruz. He had beaten Marlon Moraes. He was at the prime, the peak of his career. He could have gone on to get multiple defenses in the bantamweight division and really cement himself as one of the greats. And this dude decided to retire. This dude fucked it all up by retiring, and you could tell he regretted it because he came back, got an immediate title shot against Aljamain Sterling. Sterling beat him in that fight comfortably, came back against Merab, and every single ounce of legacy that Henry Cejudo has ever had got absolutely demolished the second that Merab raised Henry Cejudo from the ground and then slammed him. Merab Lil broad Henry Cejudo, and that's usually what Cejudo does to other people. Now, in terms of what he does next, he's mentioned going up to the featherweight division. I completely disagree with that. I don't think he should move to the featherweight division. They are all huge. Cejudo's tiny, and he would get mauled if he was to go to the featherweight division. I don't mind the idea of retirement. He said he's going to retire after the Merab fight, but from what we've seen, it doesn't seem like that's the case. I don't really know what's next for him, man. I really don't. I hope he fights somebody that makes a lot of sense. Maybe like a Jose Aldo could make a lot of sense because you've got two legends, and I matched made them a couple of days ago. So for Cejudo, I just don't know what's next for the dude. He really fucked it all up by retiring too early, but he's still one of the greats. Maybe not in this division, but if you go back a couple of years ago, that performance against Moraes and Dominic Cruz was definitely impressive. So Cejudo, I just want to see what this dude next. I think he is very close to retirement. Maybe one or two more fights and he should be out of there. Then we've got Marlon Vera. I'm going to say he's a little bit overrated, man. I think Marlon Vera is quite overrated, and it showed when he fought Sean O'Malley at UFC 299 and got battered for 5 rounds straight. I just don't understand why he got a title shot. I mean, you look at the amount of people he's lost to. He's lost to Song Yadong. He got dominated by Corey Sandhagen a few fights ago. He got beaten comfortably by Jose Aldo. And then recently when he fought Sean O'Malley for the belt, got destroyed. And he has got some good wins. He has beaten Pedro Munoz, but again, that was it wasn't a very close fight, but it was a fairly close fight and nothing significant happened in that fight. He beat Rob Font to a pulp, fair enough. KO'd old Dominic Cruz, and he beat Frankie Edgar, who's really old as well. And I guess he technically beat Sean O'Malley. He's a weird fighter, is Marlon Vera. He's never going to be a champion. And to be honest, I do think that if I had to favour somebody between him and Figueiredo, I would probably go with Figueiredo. There's just a lot of holes in his game. He isn't the fastest starter. He seems to be really good in that 4th and the 5th round. It's kind of like a mythical fighter, 5th round Marlon Vera. But I think he needs to keep that 5th round and 4th round pace for the entirety of the fight because he starts way too slow and it causes him to get pieced up fairly early. Like he was losing to Cruz as well in that fight. His grappling, there's a lot of questions with his grappling as well after we saw how Sandhagen easily dominated him. He's a fun guy. He's very dangerous with his head kicks. And I think he is good at, progressively getting better as the fight goes on. He's insanely durable. And he's one of the toughest dudes in this division. The amount of shots this dude has tanked. He's definitely got one of the best chins in the UFC. I can't see him getting knocked out anytime soon. But I just don't think he's champion material. That's what I got to say about Marlon Vera. And I hope he does have a good fight with Deiveson Figueiredo. I'm really intrigued to see how they're going to get matched up against each other. Then we got Petr Yan. This dude was once the absolute one of the biggest killers in the UFC. The way that people view Alex Pereira nowadays is how we viewed Peter Yan a couple of years ago. He was that guy. That win over Corey Sandhagen, which has aged really well. The fight with Song Yadong, the fight with Jose Aldo, the finish over Uriah Faber. He's an absolute killer. He's just a quiet guy with really elite kickboxing. One of the best boxers in the UFC. And his grappling's really high level as well. And I'm going to look at the losses he's had. His losses ain't even that bad. The first fight with Aljamain Still in the DQ, it was definitely going his way. He beat Sterling the first time. I don't care what anyone says. He beat Sterling, who went on to be a defending champion for a while. And then the second fight with Sterling was a very questionable decision. I think a lot of people, including myself, could have given that to Peter Yan. The fight with Sean O'Malley, the current champion of the world, again, another very questionable decision. Gave Sean O'Malley his toughest test, and he arguably won that fight. And then, fair enough, he did get dominated by Merab, which is why I don't think he's ever going to become a champion again. But he's a really good guy, Peter Yan. I mean, that recent win over Song Yadong as well showed that he's not washed, and I think he's definitely got potential. I don't know who he's going to be matched up against yet. I don't know who he's going to be up against. I hope he has some fight news soon, and I do think he will get another title shot. It's just, there are some problems for this dude in the division. I think him versus Sandhagen in a rematch could be super competitive. I think he's definitely got what it takes to beat O'Malley. I think the only problem with this guy is somebody like Merab. I think if he was to ever fight Merab again, that would be a problem. And I think like Merab is the kryptonite of Peter Yan. But Peter Yan's still a killer, man. He's just a quiet guy that goes out there, does business, mauls people, kills people. And I just think he's finally found that win that he needed after going on a bit of a streak, because he had a bit of a cursed end to his bantamweight reign. So for Peter Yan, absolute killer in his prime, and he seems to be picking that momentum back up. Then we have Corey Sandhagen, one of the best in the division. I know people like to talk about Sandhagen a lot, but even with that being said, he's still underrated. The amount of people that are counting him out against Umar Nurmagomedov, I might have to go with Sandhagen to beat Nurmagomedov. Like I said before, I haven't actually chosen who I think is going to win that fight. But Sandhagen is so good. Absolutely dominated Marlon Vera, who somehow got a title shot before him. Dominated Rob Font with his grappling as well. Beat Song Yadong, beat Bautista, beat Marias. That KO over Frankie Edgar was super impressive. He should have beaten TJ Dillashaw. That fight with TJ Dillashaw should have gone in Sandhagen's favour. He had a competitive fight with Peter Yan when Yan was at his best, and he got choked out by Sterling not too long ago. But Sandhagen seems to be proving all the time. He's one of the best strikers in the division. He's such a crafty striker. He seems to be really hard to hit, and he just seems to be so in the zone all the time. And we've seen in his past few fights with Vera and Font that his grappling has improved a lot. And I think out of everybody in this division, he might be the biggest kryptonite for Sean O'Malley, because not only is he a massive threat on the feet, he's also a massive threat when it comes to grappling. Like we know with O'Malley, it seems like in all his title fights, it's always one way to go. When he's fighting guys like Sterling and Merab, he has to defend against the grappling and keep it on the feet. When he's fighting guys like Vera, he has to make sure he has a striking masterclass. But with Corey Sandhagen, because he's dangerous from everywhere, it's going to be so difficult for him to, for O'Malley to figure out Sandhagen. But we're going to see how he does against Umar Nurmagomedov, and I think he has a really good chance of being the first guy to defeat Umar Nurmagomedov because of how good Corey Sandhagen is. One of the best bantamweights in the world, super dangerous, and again, he's just so many competitive fights that this guy's had. Apart from the Sterling finish, he's never really been dominated in the octagon, and I think if he wins his next fight, 100% he deserves a title shot. Then we have Merab Dvalishvili, the guy who is going to be facing O'Malley next, the guy who's next in line. This O'Malley fight with him, obviously Merab and O'Malley is genuinely 50-50. I don't know who to pick. He, as of right now, is the best wrestler in the division. He's so good when it comes to wrestling. Henry Cejudo is one of the best wrestlers. He's got this wrestling background. He showed it throughout his UFC career. He's a really good wrestler. And Merab made him look like an absolute amateur in that fight. The fight with Jose Aldo, okay, maybe he couldn't take him down and it was a bit of a boring performance, but he still beat Aldo comfortably. The fight with Peter Yan. Yan's a good wrestler as well. As we've seen in that fight with Song Yadong, we saw it in the O'Malley fight. And look what Merab did to Yan. Put on an absolutely dominating performance. The comeback against Marias as well. Merab's such a good wrestler. And it's not just his wrestling, it's his pace. The fact that he's shooting like 10 takedowns a minute. He must be an absolute nightmare to fight. Like, Merab must be an absolute nightmare to fight. And that's why I'm so intrigued for this fight with Sean O'Malley, because he's a proper wrestler. He's got a lot of momentum to his name right now. Again, how many times am I going to fucking say momentum in this video? But he has got a lot of momentum. He's a really good wrestler. He's grappling, his pace, his cardio as well, his stamina. He's definitely got the ability to go 5 rounds as he showed against Peter Yan. And even if he loses to Sean O'Malley, which is a big if, I still think he's going to be at least top 1, top 2 other guys in the division. I think he's definitely going to stay stay in that top 3 ranking for a while because he's just so difficult to beat. And he must be an absolute nightmare to deal with. And I can't wait for his title shot against Sean O'Malley. And then we have Mr. Sean O'Malley himself. I'd say he's definitely, well, maybe not number 1, but definitely one of the most exciting champions we've got right now in the UFC. He's just so fun to watch. Maybe he's got a bit of a weird personality, and maybe his press conferences aren't the best. He is quite a dull personality when it comes to press conferences. His fighting style is just so fun to watch. He's never in a boring fight. No matter what fight you look at, he's never in a boring fight. He's come up to the UFC. He was just KOing people left, right, and center. He had that fight with Marlon Vera in which he lost, but that was an injury. And then you look at his wins. The title fight against Aljamain Sterling. Knocked out Aljamain Sterling when Sterling was the defending champion. Looked great in that fight. Beat Petian in what was an absolute war. Absolutely dominated Marlon Vera. Landed some big shots on Vera. And the only reason he didn't finish him is because Vera's got one of the best chins in the UFC. And he's going to be taking on Merab. And if he does chin Merab, I'm not even going to be surprised. He's definitely in the top 10 best strikers in the UFC right now. He's so fluid. He's such a good striker to see. He's just so fun to watch, like from his technique to his output to how dangerous he is to everything he does in the octagon. O'Malley's one of the funnest guys in the UFC to watch as a fan. And even if you don't, like I said, if you don't agree with his personality, there's one thing for sure. And it's that you're never going to miss an O'Malley fight. He's that guy. He's one of the biggest stars in the UFC. And for good reason. He's fun to watch. So for Sean O'Malley, I just can't wait for his fight with Merab. It's one of the most 50-50 fights right now in the UFC. And I just can't fucking wait for it. So, such a fun guy is O'Malley. Then finally, the flyweight division, we got Azu Almabayev. This dude is a really good prospect in the flyweight division, and I don't know why nobody's really talking about him. All the eyes are on Tatsuro Taira and Tagerul and Bekov, but no one's really talking about Azu Almabayev. This dude's got a record of 20-2, and so far in the UFC, he kind of reminds me a bit of like a mini Merab. He's got this relentless grappling pace, and he's bullying these guys that are massive. Like, he's fighting guys like Jose Johnson, who are way bigger than him, and he's absolutely ragdolling them. He's a really good prospect for the flyweight division, and considering that a lot of these ranked flyweights we're going to see are kind of on the end of it, they're not on the end of their career, but they've had a couple of tricky fights in the past couple of fights, I think Almabayev really has potential to get into that top 10, and he's a really good grappler for this division. We've got a lot of strikers in this division, and I think Almabayev poses a big threat to a lot of them. He's just a small guy in this already small division, but he just ragdolls everyone. Really good prospect. He's looked really good in the UFC so far, undefeated in the UFC, and like I said, I really do think he has potential to crack that top 10, so he's a fairly new face to the flyweight division, but I'm really interested to see how he does get matched up against the top 10. Maybe him versus a Tim Elliott could be fun, because we're going to see how he does against a guy like a veteran like Tim Elliott. So Almabayev, really good prospect, kind of reminds me of like a mini Merab, and he's somebody that you need to look out for in the future of the flyweight division, because he just has this relentless grappling pace that he can just keep up for 3 rounds straight, and I want to see how this dude would keep it up for 5 rounds. Obviously, he's not going to be getting any main events anytime soon, but in the future, man, if this guy can keep up a pace like that for 5 rounds, we've got the Merab Devil to leave the flyweight division on our hands. Then we have Cody Durden. Cody Durden's really good as a striker. He's not bad at all. He's really good at making reads and stuff, but he's had a couple of tricky past few fights. Lost to Tagerul and Bekov, and recently just got KO'd by Bruno Silva. It's a shame for Cody Durden. He's going to be, he's going to be looking back at this performance and he's going to hate himself, because he did look really good against Bruno Silva. He was landing some really good shots, and I still think he's a really good flyweight, but man, this dude gets open to getting caught a lot. He got caught quite a few times against Bekov, and obviously just got caught against Bruno Silva the other day. He's got some decent wins. He shut down that, well, he didn't shut down the prospect, but he beat the prospect in Jake Hadley. He's a really good boxer as well as Cody Durden, very heavy on his front foot. But he just gets caught way too often, and this in the future is going to lead him to getting caught by a lot of more flyweights. I do think he deserves his ranking spot at number 14th, but he's going to have to face an up-and-coming prospect that's unranked in order to defend his position. But he's a good boxer. I just think for Cody Durden, he needs to, improve on that defense a little bit more if he wants to stay in the rankings, because again, he's having these good performances. It's not a performance issue. It's the fact that at one time in the fight, he'll just get caught by a big shot, and that will be the end of it. Like, the amount of shots that Bruno Silva landed on that dude is insane, and I reckon he's going to be out for quite a while. But Cody Durden, he's a good flyweight to watch, someone that you want to tune in to watch, because he is a really good technical boxer on the feet. Then we have Tagerul and Bekov, a really good prospect for the flyweight division. bit of a, I don't know, it's hard to say with Ulanbekov because he's training with guys like Khabib and he has shown that he's a really good wrestler so far. But then when he's missing weight against guys like Joshua Van, that really frustrated me. I really wanted to see him versus Joshua Van because I know Joshua Van's just lost to Charles Johnson, but at the time, it was two of the biggest prospects in the flyweight division between him and Van going at it. And I was actually intrigued to see how they perform against each other. I thought it would be a really good clash of styles, and then he ended up missing weight. And then the entire fight ended up getting cancelled, which was a shame, so I don't know what's next for Ulanbekov. And he has lost to Tim Elliott when Tim Elliott just pieced him up. But Tim Elliott's kind of like the Neil Magny of the flyweight division. He likes shutting down these prospects. Almost did it to Mohamed Makayev. But Ulanbekov's a good grappler. He beat Cody Durden and he's beat Bruno Silva. Those are some really good wins. And he kind of relies on these heavy boxers that he gets these wins against. He's a good prospect for the flyweight division. I don't really know if I can say that he makes the top 10 just yet because, again, I need to see how he performs against someone that's actually elite. He has lost to Tim Elliott before. So maybe if we saw him, like imagine him versus Almabayev, that would be a really good grappling matchup. He's a good prospect to look out for in the flyweight division. He's nothing crazy. I wouldn't say he's the next big thing, and I don't think he's ever going to become a champion because his performances haven't been absolutely groundbreaking. But he's a good grappler. His stand-up seems to be improving. He just needs to make sure that he can actually make 125, or else we're never going to be seeing this dude fight. Then we've got Matt Schnell, the Cody Garbrandt of the flyweight division. This dude has been KO'd by everyone. The KO over Pantoja. That fight with Steve Erceg was brutal as well because it wasn't just like Steve Erceg landed a really good shot on him. Steve Erceg absolutely outboxed this dude for the majority of the fight. Steve Erceg schooled him. Lost to Nicolau, lost to Royval. Matt Schnell's just not very good on the feet. He was once a good striker. He once had the fundamentals, and I still think he does. But he just can't take a big shot. All it takes is one big shot, or at least a couple of big shots for Matt Schnell, and he's been put out of there. And it's not even like he's similar to a Cody Durden, where he can just outclash you for the majority of the fight, and then it just takes a big shot to put him out of there, because he's not even got the best boxing skill. I mean, like I said, Steve Erceg was piecing him up. Same for Royval. You feed him to any elite striker in the division, they're probably going to outstrike him, and then eventually land a big shot. He seems like he kind of fades as the fight goes on. He's very, very chinny, and I would say he's quite a washed guy in the flyweight division. Still very skilled, but if he gets KO'd one more time or loses one more time, it wouldn't surprise me if the UFC kick this dude out the rankings. Again, a good boxer. There's nothing bad I can really say about him. He just needs to sharpen up his striking and specifically sharpen up his defense, because if he gets caught by some more shots, this dude is going to speed run to CTE, because the amount of flyweights that are just boxing this guy's head off, Nicolau, Royval, Erceg, the KO that Pantoja landed, his chin's definitely not holding up in this division. Maybe he needs to move up to the bantamweight division because maybe the weight cut is too much for this dude. But yeah, we'll have to see for Matt Schnell. Definitely a really chinny guy in this division, and I don't really know what's next for him. Then we got Tim Elliott. Yeah, Tim Elliott. To me, it's a bit of a weird one because even though he's lost to so many people in this division, Demetrius Johnson, the GOAT, Davison Figueiredo, one of the greatest, Royval, Benavidez, Askarov, Dodson, Nicolau, Makayev, he's lost to so many people in this division. I still think he's pretty skilled, and I think he's pretty game as well. He's a really good striker, is Tim Elliott. He's really good at piecing people up, and he's good at handing out fraud checks as well. He did it to Tagir Ulanbekov when he fraud checked him. He almost beat Mohamed Makayev. I was going to say, Mohamed Makayev, if he beats Manel Cap this weekend, he's going to be fighting for a belt. And Elliott nearly beat Makayev because he was absolutely piecing him up on the feet. Obviously, the submission game got to him. The best way to beat Tim Elliott is because it's, grappling. If you take this dude to the ground and look for submission, that is your best opportunity. But he's also a good wrestler. It's not like he's just a one-dimensional guy. But he's just really hard to beat on the feet. He's very powerful as well as Tim Elliott. He's good at piecing people up. He doesn't let a prospect come up and just take away his limelight. He just does his thing, and he's a really good guy, Tim Elliott. Kind of reminds me of the Neil Magny. When you expect him to lose, when you think he's done, when he's on a bit of a losing streak and you think he's over and done with, he's getting too old for the division, he bounces back and gets a good win. So he's someone that you kind of want to root for. Not really any boring fights either. He's fought everyone, super experienced in this division, and he's probably got one of the best resumes in the flyweight division. He has just fought straight killers. Like I said, Demetrius Johnson, Davison Figueiredo, Joseph Benavidez, John Dodson. These are the guys that this guy's been facing. He might have fallen short, but he's got the experience, and I think he's going to be handing out a lot of fraud checks in the future. There's a lot of guys for him to fight. I don't think he's ever going to, progress into the top 10 and get further into the top 10 just because a lot of those guys have beaten him already. But I think he's definitely got potential to fraud check people. So Tim Elliott definitely got a lot of potential in this division. Matheus Nicolau. Yeah, Mateusz Nicolao's a bit of a weird one because he's a really good striker, is Nicolau. Like, I think he's one of the best strikers in this division, and I do think his ranking spot kind of makes you think he's a lot worse than he is. But again, I feel like he's very easy to calculate. Perez perfectly calculated because Nicolau's really good at making reads. He's really good at landing certain shots, but Perez was able to back him up against the cage with the better game plan, land that big shot. Kind of reminded me of Ilie Topuria and Volkanovski. So I think Nicolau just needs to disallow his opponents to make these reads and, set up these big shots. Royval outstruck him as well, but again, Royval's one of the best in the UFC, but he's got some really good wins under his name. Manel Kape, Matt Schnell, Tim Elliott, David Dvorak. He's definitely one of the most elite strikers in this division. I just think there's a couple things he needs to sort out because he's on a 2-fight losing streak now. He was once a really big prospect in the division and he's kind of fallen off recently. So I think he needs that one win that's kind of going to bounce him back into the winning column. I've also noticed, why does Nicolau, he kind of looks like one of those NPCs on like a low quality video game. I don't know, I can't really describe it. He looks like a GTA 4 kind of NPC, if you know what I mean. But anyway, no, Nicolau, good striker, just needs some momentum to get back in there. Then we've got Steve Erceg, one of the fighters in this division that's ranking definitely doesn't display how good he actually is. He shouldn't be number 9. He should be in the top 3. If I'm going to say, out of every flyweight, this dude has had one of the best performances against Pantoja. Just look at the guys this dude is beating. Not even just the guys he's beating, but look at the way he performed against Pantoja. You look at how everyone performs against Pantoja. I know he has close fights quite regularly, but Steve Erceg was definitely the closest. This dude arguably beat Pantoja in his 4th fight in the UFC. His grappling's really amazing. He has really underrated grappling. People just think he's a one-dimensional boxer. They don't realize that this dude had a background in wrestling as well. And obviously, we all know him for having this really good boxing as well. The way that he just pieced up and KO'd Matt Schnell, that massive elbow he landed on Pantoja, the fight with Costa where he just out-grappled him, the fight with David Dvorak. He's one of the best boxers in the division, but he's also super well-rounded, and I think he is going to beat Kai Kara-France at UFC 305, and I can almost guarantee he's definitely going to be fighting for a belt in the future. Again, it doesn't really make sense why he's ranked number 9th after that performance against Alejandro Pantoja. I know he lost, but if he wouldn't have shot for that takedown in against Pantoja in round 5, he could have arguably won that fight. So for Steve Erceg, definitely one of the best dudes in this division, potentially a future champion, and I do think he's top 3 best talents in this division right now. Someone that I just can't wait to see, and he's such a good personality as well. He's such a likable guy in this division. He's humble, he's just an interesting personality, he's a fun guy to watch, and he just goes out there and does business and performs every single time, and I can't wait for him versus Kai Kara-France. That's going to be an absolute war for UFC 305. So for Steve Erceg, definitely one of the best in this division, and I think his ranking spot doesn't really show how good he is. Then we've got Manel Kape, probably the most interesting personality in this division, and I'm glad that we have guys like Manel Kape in this division because we don't just want the same stale personalities over and over again. Like, it's always good having these nice, humble guys, but we need someone that's going to stir the pot in the division, and Manel Kape is that guy. The way that he's just starting fights with everyone, I still remember that press conference that he had with Israel Adesanya, where a flyweight Manel Kape was squaring up to a middleweight Israel Adesanya at that press conference. I think he slapped Muhammad Mokaev IRL. I don't know if he's going to beat the press conference for UFC 304 because I think they've put him and Mokaev on the prelims, which is a shame because he would have made that press conference so much better. But he's just a really fun guy, is Manel Kape. He's a really good personality. He's had a couple of losses. He lost to the champion Pantoja and Nicolau. He's just really well-rounded as Manel Kape, and I think he's got some really dangerous boxing as he showed in his last fight. And I think him versus Muhammad Mokaev is going to be a scrap. I am leaning towards Mokaev winning that fight, but if Manel Kape wins, he's probably going to get a title shot because most of the other flyweights have been cleared out by Pantoja. I know Manel Kape has lost, but he's put together some good wins recently. If he can shut down the prospect of Mokaev, Manel Kape versus Pantoja, sign me up. So he's one win away, I'd say, from a title shot. Really good personality in this division, and he's just a guy that you want to see fight because he's one of those guys that just produces moments in every fight, or everywhere this dude goes, he produces moments. He's like a highlight reel that's walking. So Manel Kape, can't wait to see him against Muhammad Mokaev. Then we have Alex Perez. Again, Alex Perez is a really weird one. He might be one of the most cursed flyweights in the world. The amount of fights that this guy's have to... Well, I know it's not all his fault, but the amount of fights this dude has ended up getting cancelled in. There's so much. If you look at his Tapology record, there's like 14 fights that Alex Perez has been cancelled from. It's a bit of a shame as well. He has lost to a lot of the guys at the top as well. He's lost to Davison Figueiredo and Pantoja. Obviously got beaten by Tatsuro Taira recently, but it was an injury, but he seemed like he was losing that fight anyway. Lost to Muhammad Mokaev, but he didn't even perform that bad against Muhammad Mokaev. Again, he didn't look look that bad. Maybe when these guys like Perez and Tim Elliott aren't looking bad against Makayev, maybe they're that good, or maybe Mohamed Makayev just isn't as good as we all thought he was. Lost to Benavidez as well, so he's only really lost to the most elite talent in the flyweight division, but he's got some good wins. That shot that he perfectly timed against Mateusz Nicolau recently, like I said, Mateusz Nicolau's a really good striker, so the fact that he was just able to, just calculate Nicolau against the cage and just KO him that way, similar to Topuria versus Volkanovski, was really good. He's very experienced, he's Alex Perez. He's a really sharp dude in the flyweight division, and he's just not an easy guy to put out of there as well, so I don't really know what's next for this dude. It's hard to kind of get on board with Perez when all of his fights get cancelled or he loses. Not really one of the most interesting guys to watch in the division in terms of hype, but we'll see what he does next. Maybe he's in another Fight Night main event. I don't know what's next for Alex Perez, but we'll have to see. Then we've got Mohamed Makayev, one of the best prospects in the UFC right now. I've been following this dude since his UFC debut. I remember the day he debuted in the UFC. I think it was on the Aspinall versus Volkov card, and he went out there, and I think it was Cody Durden in his debut, who's now a ranked opponent. And Mohamed Makayev, he's got a lot of underrated wins. It seems like whenever Mohamed Makayev gets a win, it ages really well. He beat Cody Durden, he's now a ranked opponent. He beat Charles Johnson, he's now one of the biggest prospects in the flyweight division. He beat Fedor, Fedor's now destroying everyone. He beat Tim Elliott, he beat Perez, and they came off wins after the fight with Makayev. It seems like whenever Mohamed Makayev gets a win, it ages really well because all of his opponents look really good. So he's already got a really good resume in the flyweight division. He's already beaten a lot of ranked dudes, and I think if he does beat Manel Kape this weekend, in which I do think he will, give him a title shot, man. I think he should have arguably deserved the title shot instead of Steve Erceg at UFC 301. I know obviously now that we see Steve Erceg perform, we might be looking at that differently, but this dude already had a good resume coming into that. If he can get Manel Kape on his resume as well, it's going to be hard to deny Mohamed Makayev as a title shot. He's never lost as an amateur. He's never lost as a professional. He's a really good grappler, as Mohamed Makayev. He's got this kind of grappling pace. I would like to see a little bit more from his striking. I know he dropped Cody Durden with a big shot on his debut, but it seems like whenever there's a striking exchange, he kind of struggles. But he's tough. It seems like every single time he faces adversity as well in the beginning of the fight, he always bounces back and gets a finish, or at least gets the win. So Mohamed Makayev, can't wait to see him perform against Manel Kape, and I think he's going to be one of the top guys in this division. I think he just needs to start out with striking, be a little bit more confident, get that experience, and he has real good potential for this division. Then we have Tatsuro Taira. This dude, I'm going to say it, I think he's probably the most dynamic grappler in this division. We've got a lot of grapplers in this division. Like I said, Tagir Ulanbekov, Mohamed Makayev, Alejandro Pantoja. But Tatsuro Taira, that fight with Perez, this dude looked insane. He's also another undefeated guy in the flyweight division. He just looks really good. I know that Perez fight ended in an injury, but the way that he was able to just make Perez just look like a complete amateur when it came to grappling, the exchanges that Taira was having, the submission attempts that he had, the way that he was just able to completely dominate Perez with grappling. And it's not even only Perez, it's his entire UFC career. The fact that we've also seen a big improvement from his boxing as well. He's not just one-dimensional. We've seen a massive improvement with this dude's boxing, and his hands have become so much better as well. He's someone that I just can't wait to see, and he's another big prospect, similar to Mohamed Makayev and Manel Kape. If Tatsuro Taira gets one more win, and it's probably going to be against one of the big guys as well, because he's ranked number 5, you can only imagine that he's probably going to be fighting somebody like Roy Val or Moreno next. If he gets one more win, he's probably going to get a title shot, and you know what? Sign me up for that. Tatsuro Taira, he's undefeated, he's got really good boxing, but most importantly, he's the best submission. I won't say he's the best submission artist, but he's got some of the best grappling in this division, and he's only fought Perez in the ranked area, so I just can't wait to see what Taira does next. He's one of the flyweights that I have a lot of interest in. I'm bought on the hype of Tatsuro Taira. It'll be good to see him versus Makayev or something like that, but yeah, I just can't wait to see Taira fight. Then we have Kai Kara-France. Kai Kara-France is a bit of a weird one. He's a really dangerous guy, and he's just the guy that comes to bring it every single time. Again, I can't wait to see him versus Steve Erceg at UFC 305. He has lost to a lot of the top guys. He's lost to Brandon Moreno twice, with the most recent one being to the interim belt. He's lost to Brandon Royval, who's again ranked number 1 in the division. He's one of the best. He lost to Amir Albazi, which is a win that kind of aged well, because Amir Albazi, I mean, he hasn't fought since this, but that was a very, very close fight. Most MMA fans would have argued that Kai Kara-France actually won that fight, and had he won that fight, he may have been getting a title shot. He seems to do really good against defensive grapplers, as he showed that against Askar Askarov as well. Askarov was one of the best, man. Askarov, at the time, was like one of the best prospects. People were saying that he's going to be the next champion of the division. Kai France was able to shut that dude completely down and beat him. Obviously got the viral KO of Cody Garbrandt when Garbrandt moved down to 125 as well. And I think he's kind of like a good highlight reel dude. I think he's not going to be the last time we see this dude get a good KO. I think he deserves his ranking spot. Do I think he's going to beat Steve Erceg? No, I do think Steve Erceg beats him, but I think he's still one of the best in the division. He's got really quick boxing. He's already fought a lot of the top guys already. He seems to do well against grapplers. He's a really good anti-grappler, anti-wrestler for the division as well. So for Kai France, I think he's going to hand out a lot of fraud checks. I think there's going to be so many fun fights that this dude has, and he's just going to be one of those guys that you can rely on to have a fun fight in the flyweight division. Then we have Amir Albazi. It's hard to get on the hype train of Amir Albazi. He beat Alessandro Costa and he beat Cara France, but I don't think he should have beaten Cara France. That was a very, very close fight. And then he pulled out against Brandon Moreno when he was supposed to fight him early this year. And he's kind of just been silent ever since. He's been talking a little bit on Twitter, but he hasn't got a fight scheduled. I don't know what's next for this dude. I don't think he deserves the number 3 ranking spot. He barely beat Cara France. I mean, he shouldn't have beaten Cara France. And apart from that, he's only beaten Alessandro Costa. He's got good boxing and his wrestling's really good as well. He's good at latching up submissions and he's good at getting to those submission attempts. But I think he just needs to get a win to shut everyone up. If everyone's hating on this dude, if everyone disrespects this dude, it's for a good reason. If you don't want people to disrespect you and drag your name down, you've got to do something about it. And to do that, you've got to get a good win. We need to see him beat somebody like Moreno, who was originally scheduled to face. Maybe him versus Brandon Royval could be a good number 1 contender fight. I think he is only probably 1 fight away from a title shot as well, considering he is ranked number 3. So we'll have to see about Amir Albazi. It's hard to get on the hype train when there's so many prospects in this division. I don't think he's the best grappler. I don't think he's the best striker. I wouldn't favour him to beat Pantoja, and I don't think he's a future champion, but we're going to have to see how his career plays out. It's hard to talk about Albazi when he's not fighting. We need to see him fight. I think it's been like way over a year since his last fight as well, so we just need to see this dude get some fight news. Brandon Moreno, one of the most likable dudes in this division. Probably the most interesting title run in the flyweight division as well, at least recently. I mean, Pantoja's a good champion, but when Moreno was a champion, this dude just brought the life to the flyweight division, had some really good wins, beat Davis and Figueiredo twice, which has aged really well, because Figueiredo's looked great in the Bantamweight division, and Figueiredo's always been one of the greatest flyweights as well. That's a win that has aged really well. The win over Brandon Royval, the 2 wins over Cara France. He's beaten a lot of the top guys, and he's definitely one of the best in the division. And I'm not going to say the loss that he just had to Brandon Royval was a fluke or anything like that, because Royval did win that comfortably, even though it was a close fight. I still think he can get that win back. I think if him versus Royval was a trilogy, it's a coin flip. He has lost to Pantoja 3 times, though, so that's why I don't think he's going to be a future champion. Unless Pantoja loses his belt and Moreno gets another shot, I wouldn't ever favour him to beat Pantoja again. Pantoja does seem like his kryptonite, and he has lost to Figueiredo. He's lost to Sergio Pettis as well and Royval, so we'll have to see what's next for Brandon Moreno. I can't really say what's next for him. I don't know. We'll have to see. But he's just a fun guy. I'd say he's probably the quickest flyweight in the world as well. He's super quick. He's Brandon Moreno. Super fast. So we'll have to see. But yeah, someone that you just want to root for in the division. And Brandon Royval, one of the best in this division. This dude is just so fluid with his striking. He's able to go 5 rounds. He's so quick with his hands. He might not be the most powerful puncher in the division, but I'd say he's probably got the most fluid striking. He's got this really light boxing and he just pieces everyone up. He's got really good boxing. His jiu-jitsu's underrated as well. His jiu-jitsu defense, his submission defense. And he's just fought a lot of the top guys. And he's only like 1 win away from another title shot. I know he has just lost to Alejandro Pantoja at UFC 296, but he got that really good win over Brandon Moreno, in which, let's be honest, the UFC matched him up against Moreno because they thought Moreno was going to win. If he can get another win, he's probably straight back into that title picture. He's beating Cara France, Nicolau, Matt Schnell, Tim Elliott, that recent really good win over Brandon Moreno. And I think he does deserve that number 1 ranking in the division. I think he's going to be one of these guys that just clear out of the majority of the division, similar to how we had like Volkanovski's the defending champion and Holloway was the number 1 guy. I feel like Royval will do a really good job at being that number 1 guy. Again, he's lost to Pantoja twice. I don't think he would beat Pantoja, and he's 1-1 against Moreno. But we'll have to see for the future of Brandon Royval. We'll have to see what goes down. But he's a really good striker, as Royval. I'd say he's arguably the best striker in this division right now because of just how fluid his striking is. So, yeah, we'll have to see for Brandon Royval. And then the champion, Alejandro Pantoja. He gets a lot of disrespect. Does Alejandro? I can't even say his name. Alejandro Pantoja gets a lot of disrespect. But this dude has cleared out the division. He's beaten Brandon Moreno 3 times, Brandon Royval, the #1 dude, twice, Alex Perez, Manel Kape, Steve Erceg, Matt Schnell. Look at the amount of names this dude has beaten. He's genuinely cleared out the division. Like, I know they've not all been title fights, but he's genuinely just like demolished this division. He has lost to a couple of the top guys. Davison Figueiredo, who's one of the best. Askar Askarov, who was one of the best prospects at the time. But again, it seems like he does struggle against these heavy grapplers, so that's why I'm interested to see how he do against a Tyra or a Makayev. But against the rest of the division, nobody can seem to figure this dude out. He's a very scrappy type of style. I do think he makes these fights a lot closer than it should be. I think he has the fundamentals and the skills to win a lot more dominantly, but he seems to engage in a dogfight every single time. But it seems to be working. He's getting the wins. He's very, very powerful, his Pantoja. He's not one of the best strikers in the division. He's very sloppy and kind of, not the most technical, but he is very powerful. He's got really good grappling, one of the best grapplers in this division, really good jiu-jitsu as well. And his title run so far, people are disrespecting him, but nobody can take the belt away from him. I think he'd beat a guy like Makayev, and I just don't really see anyone really taking the belt away from Pantoja. Maybe somebody, like I said, like a Steve Erceg, if they were to have a rematch, or maybe a Tatsuro or Tyra, but apart from that, it seems like it's here to stay. He's cleared out the division. He's definitely the best flyweight in the world right now, and I think he should be much higher on the pound-for-pound list as well. I don't know how Dricus du Plessis, who hasn't even got a single defense, and he's only beating, 2 ranked middleweights, is above Pantoja on the pound-for-pound list. In my opinion, that don't make sense, but he's definitely the best flyweight in the world. And even though he might not be the most interesting, even though he might not be the guy that you want to root for, he's here to stay.